Final guest that is the only person below White Holiday in the Comicsgate phone book. It's my favorite failed clone of Peter Sammetti. The YouTube guys. How you doing, Conrad? Welcome to the show.
Hello. Welcome to Wise Guys Entertainment. This is your host, Wyman. I've been wanting to do this for a while. Hopefully I don't get copyright claims struck where it shuts down the entire stream. I included links to all. This is, I want to go over this video of Jenny Nicholson's coverage on the Star Wars Hotel. I have not been to Disney in decades. The last memory I have of it was oh, hold on a minute. Let me make sure I can do this. How long is this again? 4:05. Yeah, I should barely be able to fit it in now. I was a child, and I don't remember a whole lot about it other than I was with my aunts and I think uncles and my parents. And I think it was Disneyland we went to instead of Disney World. So that's in California, Disneyland. Star Wars Hotel is in Disney World. Some further disclosure is I've never been to this hotel, and I own one share of Disney stock. I know it's not a lot, but it gives me an opportunity to vote my one share the way I want. Oh, man. A lot of good had helped during the Iger takeover, where they spammed all this misinformation and Iger retained his power. Anyway, I wanted to just check out this video. I've seen it before. I really enjoy it. It's so very thorough. Although I don't always agree with Jenny Nicholson's takes, I do enjoy her channel, and I enjoy a lot. Well, probably most of her content. So I just wanted to go over this and just explore some of the ideas behind the Star Wars Hotel and try and understand where Disney's head was with all this. I can tell you now that I would not have gone to it because, number one, I couldn't afford it. And number two, I kind of noped out as soon as I heard that it was going to be sequel trilogy based instead of original trilogy. From what the stories I've heard and seen, it sounds like Imagineers were originally going to go based off of original trilogy, but Bob Iger said, nope, we're going to push our version of Star Wars, Disney Star Wars. And ever since then, it's gone downhill. For those of you who don't know, it has since closed. It lasted, I think, a year before they shut it down. Maybe a year and a half. And now it's being used as, I think, office space for Imagineers or something like that, which is really sad. Anyway, let's start this because I'm going to be cutting it really close. Let's go.
March 1st, 2022, the Walt Disney Company opened their newest experiment in themed entertainment, an immersive, multi-day adventure set in the Star Wars universe. When this was first...
So, this is curious because it seems like a cool idea, but I wonder how much room there is to, refresh it so that it seems like a different experience every time, or periodically at least, like once a quarter. I've always wondered how you could pull off, making it feel unique and original. But
First announced, everybody just called it the Star Wars Hotel. Disney World has a lot of themed hotels. Safari themed hotel, New Orleans themed hotel, amusement park themed hotel. So people were like, okay, they're building another one, and this time the theme is Star Wars. But this project was never intended to be like Disney's other hotels. If you stay at the amusement park themed hotel, you're supposed to enjoy the ambiance while you're there, but you're expected to leave and spend 90% of the day outside at the actual amusement parks. Meanwhile, the Star Wars Galactic Star Cruiser was pitched as an all-inclusive resort, a landlocked cruise. Aside from a brief excursion into the Star Wars themed section of Hollywood studios, you're not meant to leave the building. You wouldn't pick the length of your stay. It's always 2 nights, 2 days, and you're provided with a trip itinerary which blocks out pretty much everything almost down to the minute. You're better off thinking of it as a summer camp. Space camp, if you like. Or if you're sort of nerdy, you can think of it as LARP, live action roleplay. You aren't just doing Star Wars themed activities, you're supposed to feel like you're in the Star Wars universe. Everything is themed to look like you're on a spaceship, the common areas are populated by character actors, and you're encouraged to dress up and create a character as you're guided through a storyline. It would be...
Speaking of characters, there was supposed to be a lot of hype around Galaxy's Edge, where all the concept art included aliens walking around amongst you and droids. But it seems like when they opened up the Star Wars hotel, they took a few of the aliens and the droids and then kind of put it behind a paywall and stuck it in the hotel instead of out in the open in Galaxy's Edge, which was unfortunate because it could have added more to the immersion and experience if they'd have had droids wandering about and aliens.
Be Disney's most unique, most ambitious, and most immersive offering yet. And it would also go out of business. Yeah, on May 19th, 2023, Disney announced they would be calling it quits that September. Only 18 months after the hotel's grand opening, it would close forever. And I went to this hotel. So this video, which was initially just meant to be a deep dive of the hotel and a review, has instead become a kind of eulogy and a detailed archive of what the hotel was actually like. And together, we will discover why it went out of business. That might sound daunting, but don't worry, I have organized it into an internet-friendly numbered list. So join.
So that's what kind of freaks me out. Disney, with all its money, and it's got endless funding. I think it's mostly coming from banks and venture capitalists. But in a sense, you might classify Disney as too big to fail. When they should let it fail and go into bankruptcy, they don't. Disney, despite all its issues and its poor management, continues to get funding regardless. Whereas the average person who needs a loan or a new credit card, who's under financial duress, they're hard pressed to get funding,
Me on this adventure. By the end, you'll feel like you were there too. And also, I think, feel other emotions. Part 1, why have they done this? I think immersion has been a prevailing buzzword in theme park marketing for at least a decade now.
I think this time we really raised the level of immersion.
The immersion into the Pacific Northwest is absolutely incredible.
Guests will be able to explore even more immersive worlds.
Disney Cruise Line ships have immersive activities.
The first immersive storyland that we built at Disney Hollywood Studios.
The branding,
into the culture of where you're visiting.
repeating of keywords
in the story.
reminds me of
audience in the
mainstream
experience
media
and immerse the guests in a world
and how
of fantasy.
they
A whole new
form
world.
a narrative.
Immersive.
So
That's
immersive.
Mark.
It's incredible. I mean, it's so immersive.
The most immersive. The most
Been around with
immersive.
the
most immersive.
The Wizarding World of Harry Potter was pitched as immersive because everything looks like the set of the movie, they have themed food, and you can buy wizard robes and wear them around. Pandora, the World of Avatar was pitched as immersive because everything looks like the animation from the movie, they have themed food, and you can buy Avatar ears and wear them around. Star Wars Galaxy's Edge was pitched as immersive because it doesn't look like any particular movie, they have themed food, and you can buy Jedi robes, but you're not allowed to wear them inside the theme park. Yeah, that one kind of stumbled across the finish line. Anyway, all of that is what you might call immersive. But I would also call it just a theme park. That's the definition of a theme park, a themed environment with rides. Compare this to something like a Six Flags, where it's like a crumbling gas station with roller coasters out back, and one of the roller coasters has a Superman logo on it. I can never help it. I'm always attacking Six Flags unprovoked. Six Flags I would call an amusement park and not even a theme park if I was in charge of the terminology, because theme parks are themed. I love that about them, but that's not revolutionary. That's just what they've always been. Disney has had these design principles forever. They just used other synonyms for immersion. It was called realism, maybe feeling transported, maybe escapism, maybe even this plaque that Walt Disney installed at the entrance to Disneyland when he built it. He didn't know about the word immersion yet, but if he had, it would probably be the only word on there. I mean, Pandora, the World of Avatar isn't more immersive than Disneyland's Adventureland. If I go to Adventureland, it looks like I'm at a jungle outpost. I can eat themed food, and I can buy a safari helmet and wear it around. Yep. I've never seen anyone do that, but I have seen them for sale, so it's possible. Sure, Pandora has physically larger and grander set pieces, and it emulates a landscape more foreign to us, but that's in part because Pandora was built in 2017 with a budget of $500 million. Adventureland was built in 1955, and I'm pretty sure Walt Disney just paid the construction guys in soda pop and grilled cheese sandwiches. But at their core, the two lands are the same in that the immersion is purely aesthetic. There's no one specific narrative to be told. Nobody is really in character. The employees in Pandora may refer to the film Avatar as the documentary, but they're not going to speak fluent Na'vi back to me, no matter how angrily I shouted at them. So the word immersion is fairly new to the scene, but the practice isn't. But with competing parks building more and more detailed environments, we see the word immersion applied to basically everything as a one-word way to communicate that. And with this heavy marketing emphasis on immersion, it's no wonder that companies wanted to take it further.
This is the next phase. This is the next level of immersive storytelling. Everything in the immersive field we've been dreaming of.
And once you've done themed environments, themed food, themed clothing, the only way to take it further is to move all the way into LARP. But an experience of this kind had never been offered by any theme park company before. The last thing you want is for your product to alienate the Thompsons from Iowa who love to spend money on Disney vacations but have never stepped foot inside a board game store. And while nerds are pretty aware of what LARP is, most normies have either not heard of it or have never considered it something they might enjoy. In fact, to most non-theater kids, the prospect seems kind of mortifying. It would take a savvy marketing team to pitch this to the average consumer. Part 2, the marketing. The marketing was extremely bad. The hotel concept was first accidentally leaked in April 2017. Disney had contracted a third-party survey company called Swagbucks to try to gauge interest for an immersive Star Wars experience. As with every theme park industry survey, the content was immediately posted to multiple...
I forgot where I was going off when I made that tangent about how Disney continues to get funding regardless of their poor management decisions. What I was trying to get at is, despite all that, you would think that, and Disney's persistence on, going woke and pushing DEI narratives, ESG narratives, that since they're still in some ways going all in, that I was expecting Disney to push through it, like Microsoft entering the game console market and releasing the Xbox and sticking in the game because they had mono money. Disney's in a similar situation since they get endless funding. They get backing from other parties. So no matter how poorly Disney does, there's going to be someone there to back them. So I was expecting the same to happen at Disney. So no matter what, the Star Wars Hotel was not about to fail.
multiple fan sites, so the secret was out.
And tonight, only Eyewitness News has learned what may be one of the biggest talkers yet. Channel 9 anchor Jamie Holmes got a hold of a survey that has been sent out, wanting to know if fans would be interested in an entire Star Wars themed hotel.
The survey wants to know if fans would be interested in a Star Wars boutique hotel where you would spend 2 nights in a completely immersive Star Wars experience. The survey includes renderings like this, where the resort looks like a spacecraft, and rooms that have an interactive view out the virtual window on the Star Wars galaxy.
The survey specifically teased a multi-day experience with character performers, secret missions, a pool, a fitness area, robot butlers. The survey asked whether guests would be willing to pay $900 to $1,000 per person for such an experience. Initially, nobody was sure whether this was just a distant idea or if Disney was actually serious about it. But just 3 months later at the 2017 D23 Expo, CEO Bob Chapek got up on stage and clumsily and uncharismatically announced it to the world.
So today, I am thrilled to confirm that we are working on our most experiential concept ever. It combines a luxury resort with an immersion in an authentic Star Wars environment.
Initially, I remember the response being generally positive, but sort of muted. Like, people were curious what this would entail, but with just a couple of pieces of early concept art and vague marketing phrases like, be immersed in your own Star Wars adventure, it was just too early to really even understand what it was. I mean, Disney will literally call a pizza parlor immersive, so that doesn't mean much. These days, a lot of the stuff they announce at D23 doesn't even end up getting built, so I understand why the response was a little subdued. But at the next D23 Expo in 2019, things were more concretely taking shape. It appeared the hotel was actually happening, and we got more of an outline of what it would entail. The audience.
I would love to have seen the results of the surveys from the big Disney fans as to what their response was to being willing to pay thousands of dollars for this experience.
Gets to see some cool concept art of an arrival terminal. We'll put a pin in that. We're told about space windows, interactivity, branching story paths.
It is an opportunity to live your multi-day story as it unfolds and interweaves with the crew, other passengers, and those Star Wars characters.
At this point, the public's interest was piqued, but overall, there just wasn't enough information to know what to make of it. Okay, so what's next? Well, it's kind of weird, but the next info about the hotel they dropped was just showing us that they made this lightsaber.
Light, darkness, a balance.
They made a lot of commotion about this special lightsaber. See, it looks like one of those fancy effects lightsabers, but it actually comes out of the handle like the ones in the movies. And everybody was like, wow, we can buy that? And they were like, well, no, you can look at it exclusively on the Galactic Star Cruiser, which...
If they're going to do like a voiceover or something, rather than do the voiceover, well, they should do the voiceover while her back is facing towards you. But when she turns around, she should be finishing that sentence. So it makes it look like it's coming from her, Rey.
That's a little less exciting, right? If I just wanted to look at a convincing lightsaber, I could already do that by watching the film Star Wars. I want to touch, but I can see why I can't touch it. People found the patent, and it basically works like an extendable tape measure with a spool of LED gamer lights glued onto it. It could never hold up to rough housing from a kid, and I also get the impression that it can't retract in an elegant way. Like maybe they have to take it apart and re-spool it or something. You can see everyone that does handle it acts like it's going to fall apart at any minute. When Josh D'Amaro shows it off at D23, he doesn't swish it around. He won't even gesticulate while he's holding it. He just holds it perfectly upright with both hands and then gingerly passes it off to his assistant, just like in the movies. In my opinion, it was monumentally stupid of them to advertise this ahead of time. I think it's the kind of parlor trick that's more dazzling if you aren't expecting it, and it's such a limited trick, right? Like this thing we see in the ad and at the expo, that's the whole thing the lightsaber does. And now we've seen it. I think this would have gotten better online buzz if they'd saved it as a surprise for opening weekend. But to be honest, they might have showcased this out of desperation. It certainly seems like for several expos, they haven't had much to announce. On August 4th, 2021, Star Cruiser releases their first real ad.
For the first time, it's real.
Yeah, the ad was horrible.
We've traveled
so cheesy.
Reaches of the galaxy. We got recruited by the Resistance, and now we're ready.
Come on, Dad. We gotta go save the ship.
Imagine if in the movies, in all the Star Wars movies, they had a handled the lightsabers.
So that was pretty vague, but it at least communicated a few things. You see a family is on a spaceship, they've met a few people in alien makeup, and got to do some kind of resistance mission. It's a decent teaser, I guess. None of the characters in this ad will actually appear in the finished product, and you can tell from the way they shot it that they haven't completed any of the building interiors. But I think it's supposed to be more of a proof of concept. Unfortunately, on the same day they dropped this ad, Disney also dropped the sample pricing for the experience. And here's some foreshadowing for you. The news was not well received. People had already been skeptical about this project, and Disney being Disney, there was already a lot of speculation that it would cost a lot, but it actually cost a lot. And that'll be in our next chapter. But for now, let's just say it was expensive. From this point on, marketing will be fighting an uphill battle to start any positive conversation about the Galactic Star Cruiser, because now all anyone wants to talk about is the price tag. It isn't until November of that year that we get our next substantial info drop. In this promotional video, executive Josh D'Amaro walks over to the Star Cruiser to demo it. For the life of me, I cannot understand why they have this shot of him strolling in from outside. It's so unimmersive. And then they fade to him standing in the lightsaber training pod, and it looks so sad and featureless.
We have been working on this experience to have a whole brand new way for our guests to experience
the fact that they're all
this
wearing
ancient
masks.
art of the lightsaber.
During normal operation, this room has ambient lighting, but here they've overlit it and made it look very cheap.
This looks unbelievable.
So the important context is that this was our first real look at what you would do on the Star Cruiser. People now knew what it cost, but not exactly what it was offering. A frankly insane order in which to release information. So for this video, Josh is going to demo the exclusive lightsaber training experience.
Oh. All right,
So you're right there.
Facing
Can you
here.
face off?
Why does
against
he
the
act so amazed or impressed?
Okay, so it looks bad. We can all see that it looks bad. He's moving so slowly, and I'm so secondhand embarrassed about how rigidly he's moving. Like, why is he moving his torso and not his arms? Why is it like that? Again, if they're marketing an immersive experience, why are they doing such unimmersive showcases? Why not have kids do the lightsaber experience and have everybody in costume and shoot and edit it to look a little more dynamic? Why do they think we want to see an executive trying it? I'm giving that ad a thumbs down. But let's move on to the next big promo video, released just a couple weeks later. Disney has pulled out all the stops for this one. They've got their most charismatic Imagineer giving a tour of the ship. They've got an actor from one of their ABC sitcoms here to try it out.
Hello there. I'm super excited to see what you and your team created. We cannot wait to have you aboard, because Star Wars Galactic Star Cruiser is a first of its kind vacation experience where you get to spend 2 days and 2 nights living out your very own Star Wars story. Oh, I'm just too excited. We got to go inside.
This is my favorite piece of marketing material. The ship looks empty and lifeless, like when you're in a mall past closing time. The delivery is stilted. The editing is supremely awkward. They constantly sound like they're being cut off.
It's like I'm walking straight into a Star Wars movie.
Except it's not a movie, right? You get to be in the middle of it all and in the middle of the action.
And then there's activities you can do on here.
Yeah, there are activities on board the ship.
Actor Sean Giambroni looks briefly at the bridge, sends the ship into light speed.
Punch it!
And then he wanders away from his tour into this half-empty lounge where a Twi'lek singer sings at him.
What's going on? I just popped through that door and I have no idea.
Look above and see the world slowly emerge before your eyes.
And once we're shown this character, the ad just kind of becomes a short music video. Like, this is not presented from the perspective of the sitcom actor as he marvels at this new world. The camera takes us physically away from him to a perfectly centered shot of the alien singer. He stumbles back out into the hallway. Was that all a dream? What does it mean? And the ad ends there. I can't even imagine what they were thinking with this one. Okay, first, let me do a compliment sandwich. I theoretically like this as theme park marketing material. Instead of just giving us practical information, they decided to do a little skit, which is always better. And I, for one, love Sean Giambroni's G. Willikers performance here. It's like if they got Mickey Rooney to do the ad. To me, someone who's watched a lot of vintage theme park promotional materials, this all feels charmingly dorky and sort of retro. But ask yourself, is dorky and retro really what you're going for when you're promoting an infamously expensive, ostensibly groundbreaking experience? a project that already has a lot of naysayers, I would think you'd want to make it look as cool as possible. Really put your best foot forward. Not to mention, this video conveys next to nothing about what you actually do on the Star Cruiser. The Disney marketing department seems to think saying punch it is enough of a selling point for an attraction, and I think they're mistaken about that. The building doesn't even come across well because all the sets are overlit and underpopulated. They look cheap. Furthermore, why would you choose to do an ad that's centered around the fact that there's a singer? I think this character is a cool bit of world building, and a live singer does make a restaurant feel more expensive, but surely they didn't think that this would be the main selling point of a Star Wars roleplay experience. The performance itself is awkward, like it's not even a performance venue. She's just standing in the middle of a small lounge between tables, singing loudly to like maybe 10 people.
Welcome.
And she's not even doing a lounge singer song, which might have helped the vibe. She's just doing like a human pop song. It keeps cutting to the other patrons of the bar, and they're just kind of bobbing their heads in polite disinterest. If you're doing a skit anyway, why have the weird framing narrative where Sean...
Bobbing their heads in polite disinterest. Well said. One of the problems Disney has always had with Disney Star Wars is Lucas Star Wars was a very lived-in environment. Things were grungy and dirty. Everything in Disney Star Wars is sanitized. It's very Star Trek-like. Things are super clean and stuff. Just look at the footage of, them going down the hallways and stuff. It's very Star Trek-like. Not at all Star Wars-like.
Jambroni walks into a fake hotel to speak with an Imagineer. Why not just shoot a little skit where he's already living in the story of the hotel? They're trying to hook us on the idea that this will be an out-of-this-world adventure, but Sean's whole adventure was that he briefly saw a woman singing and she looked unusual. Anyway, this ad was poorly received and widely mocked. Allegedly, hotel dates which had previously been fully booked suddenly became available in the week following the ad. That would suggest that some people found the ad so discouraging that they went out of their way to cancel existing reservations. And I think these reports must have been true because within the week, Disney deleted this ad from all platforms. Yikes. If you're wondering how Disney tried to follow that, the answer is that they didn't. That ad went over so badly that I guess they just completely gave up on shooting new promotional material for the Star Cruiser. New Twitter promos would pop up, but they would just be stills of concept art or recuts of that first teaser ad supplemented with a little bit of new footage. To emphasize the choose your own adventure aspect of the experience, they would add in clips of each story path. So they had a Jedi ad, a smuggler ad, and they had an ad about how you can sell Chewbacca out to the First Order and get him thrown in jail, which was so poorly received that Disney would later delete it from all platforms. It's weird that that happened twice. The thing about these ads is anyone with a functioning brain sees this footage and is like, that feels improbable. Logistically, I doubt I'll be doing a solo run through a whole satisfying movie-accurate adventure. But then, if my visit will look nothing like these ads, what will it look like? A question Disney seemed unable or unwilling to answer. Instead, they just kept showcasing the same limited roster of activities they'd already told us about. Like Good Morning America did a promotional segment, and surprise, it's pushing buttons on the bridge, it's the lightsaber game again, a chance to meet Chewbacca, which you can already do in Disneyland, and for some reason they let Bob Chapek wriggle out of his den and fumble his way through an interview. Once again, no real insight into the choose your own adventure aspect, despite it being the biggest selling point of the hotel. So I've pretty much covered all the ads intended for the general public, but since I'm a hardcore theme park fan, I did personally try to delve a little deeper. So through all this, I was watching all of Disney's social media channels, and they posted a few panels with their Imagineers. Maybe it's unfair to lump these in with the ads since they're only intended for nerds, but they did give me a little more info about what you do in the gameplay.
There might be someone that you help stow away. There might be someone that you help get thrown in a brig, right?
Or break out.
Or break out of the brig, right? There could be a galactic superstar who entertains you on the first night, but then also tasks you with helping her smuggle something.
Nice. Finally, we get a concrete example. I love that.
Or you might help someone get their luggage on board without somebody noticing. You never know.
Okay, I'm definitely getting the idea that we're going to smuggle luggage at some point.
I think about the fact that you might meet one of our characters. You might meet
like
one of them on the bridge.
On the airport,
you might meet them.
They warn you against
on screen first. Then you help them board. Then you smuggle their luggage.
Okay, a lot of smuggling luggage, perhaps.
Then they appear on the ship.
Physically, they walk into the room
while you're smuggling their luggage on board.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting.
Then you see them later, they send you a message saying, thanks for your help with the luggage.
As the opening date approached, Disney, of course, pivoted to influencer marketing. And in my opinion, they managed to fumble this too. From what I saw, most of the people they invited were TikTokers who just stood in the atrium and did viral dances. Why would seeing the grown-up dancing girl from High School Musical dancing in the atrium make me want to book this trip unless I also planned on dancing in the atrium, which statistically I don't. I feel like even if that did successfully pique the interest of their audience, a lot of these people's fans are late high school and early college students who don't have the financial flexibility to book the Star Cruiser even if they want to. Besides, if all you're looking for is an attractive backdrop for photos and dances, you could just go trample around in the Super Bloom or book any resort with an infinity pool. I think a more realistic demographic would have been to focus on Comic-Con types, older nerds who have grown-up jobs and are already familiar with role-playing. So I think they would have been better off mixing in big fish from the smaller ponds of LARP, cosplay, probably D&D podcasts. I know these are marginally more obscure hobbies, but a lot of money is spent on them every year. And here's another general issue I've always had with Disney influencer marketing: naming conventions. In the olden days, Disney would call stuff by fairly natural, simple names. Tomorrowland, Space Mountain. The Alice in Wonderland ride is called Alice in Wonderland. They don't do that anymore. I think it's for copyright reasons or for search engine optimization, but it's so awkward. Now Disney products are called things like The Little Mermaid, Ariel's Undersea Adventure, Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind, Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. So you end up with all these products which, colloquially, nobody calls by their actual registered names. People say Star Wars Land. They say the Star Wars Hotel. People say, I want to ride the Cars ride. They don't say, I want to ride Radiator Springs Racers. And the big problem here is if you make contracts with influencers and you require them to call your products by the full legal names, they're going to sound like you're paying them. Imagine if I told you, I went to Disney World and saw Star Wars Land. It was pretty fun. I saw the Star Wars bar and I went on the Millennium Falcon ride. Now imagine if I told you, this summer I got to experience Star Wars Galaxy's Edge at Disney's Hollywood Studios. I loved seeing Oga's Cantina and blasting off on Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run. Which one do you believe more? And yet Disney's marketing team is absolutely allergic to just letting people call things by their casual nicknames. And I think it makes all media they produce, host, and sponsor sound extremely insincere. This problem is especially present in this one marketing product I found, the Plan Disney podcast. I highly recommend giving this podcast a watch sometime, by which I mean it is fascinatingly bad. Basically, on this podcast, Disney brings in a rotating cast of real fans and social media personalities to give trip reports and offer advice to fellow guests. The podcast isn't secretive about being produced by Disney. It's shot inside the theme parks. They disclose that their panelists are compensated. So with that context, I don't think it's weird that the panelists would only have good things to say about Disney World. But what I do think is weird is the way they talk.
Do you have anything that's coming up that's exciting you about Disney destinations?
Okay, I am very excited. I'm a huge Star Wars fan. And my friend and fellow panelist was recently on the maiden voyage of Galactic Star Cruiser over at Walt Disney World Resort. I was just talking to her. She said that it's like being the main character in your own Star Wars story.
All of the terminology is so rigidly corporate. Half the time the hosts are literally reading off a prompter, and the rest of the time you can tell they've been briefed on the questions and prepared their answers ahead of time.
Guys, we cannot forget the ultimate Star Wars fans, right? I mean, what would be more intense than a 2-day stay at the Star Wars Galactic Star Cruiser?
Yes.
We're talking about an immersive experience.
And why? Disney has so many fans that will uncritically celebrate their products without getting paid. So why not just let them use their own words? Why make your own fake podcast in the first place? Nobody's watching this except me, and I'm only watching it as performance art.
After you check in, you jump into a launch pod.
Okay.
And in my opinion, this is when the adventure really begins.
It never used to be like this. Why does corporate mandate that they talk about the products this way? Why is all this marketing so bad? Are they really so out of touch? Could they be so naive? In all fairness, I don't envy the marketing team for Star Cruiser. This experience is clearly intended to be more than the sum of its parts, a collection of fairly pedestrian activities dressed up with clever showmanship and put together in a high enough quantity that the overall experience will dazzle you. So how do you market something like that? Showing any one activity in isolation will look bad because it's not exciting enough on its own, but showing all the activities will ruin the product because it relies heavily on surprises.
Yeah.
What's worse, this level of
Challenge,
immersive
for
activity
sure.
has only been attempted by theme parks a handful of times before and has no real basis for comparison. They could compare it to LARP, but we've already covered how many normal people don't fully understand what that is. I'm sure everybody watching this video does, you freaks, but many people don't. I think Disney might have been better off comparing it to living in a video game, but maybe they knew that would have been overselling it. I can't really think of any video game that plays the way Star Cruiser does. We'll talk about that later. It might have been better to compare it to a murder mystery dinner, but those don't usually make you think of luxury and never before seen immersion. So instead, Disney compared it to nothing. They relied on their brand identity and loyal customer base to essentially buy a mystery box. They showed almost nothing of what the experience would entail. They defaulted to bloated marketing language like live your Star Wars story, step into the world of Star Wars, immerse yourself in a one-of-a-kind adventure. And, as I already foreshadowed, there was one more significant complication. Part 3, the cost. So let's break this down. For our two-person cabin, the total came to $6,066.88. So that's $3,033.44 per person.
Oh.
The official website quoted $4,800 for a two-person cabin, so that's what a lot of people repeat when they're discussing pricing. But really, that's just the lowest possible price, so it's not really a reliable figure. Unlike other hotels, the room was not a flat rate, so the price went up for each person added to the booking, but it went up by smaller increments for each one. I'm just making up these numbers, but for instance, it's possible that when I went, if I had put 4 people in my cabin, it would have cost something like $7,500. But because that's now being split 4 ways, the cost per person would go down. I'm sorry if this sounds confusing. It is confusing. This was made more complicated by the lack of transparency on price points. To get a quote, you already had to know your number of travelers and all their names. You had to have a weekend in mind, and then you would call them on the phone. There was usually a long queue before you talked to someone, and then, assuming your ideal week happened to be available, the agent would tell you a price. I didn't have the freedom of clicking around on a digital calendar looking for the cheapest day. I didn't play with number of guests to see how much that would raise or lower the cost. They made it so you had to move pretty far into the booking process before you could get a quote. So because of this, I can't really guess an average or median price point for any given trip. When Disney said it was possible to book a two-person room for $4,800, that might have just meant that there was a single day each year that it cost that little. The cabin might have averaged a $5,500 price tag or an $8,000 price tag. If you were serious about going, you just had to cold call them and find out. So all this to say, since I paid for my own trip and I have my invoice and I know exactly what I paid, I'm going to be running my cost analysis based on my own experience. So $6,066.88. For 2 people. This didn't include our flights to Florida, obviously, and it also didn't include transportation from the airport. I just mentioned that because Disney World used to offer free airport shuttles to hotel guests, and they decided to take that away in 2021 out of stinginess, I guess, if we're being honest. So the prices I'm discussing only covered me from the moment I arrived at the Star Cruiser. Now, let's think value for your time. How many hours of entertainment are you getting for that price? According to the sample itinerary on the website, you check in at 1 p.m. on day 1 and check out at 10 a.m. on day 3. But obviously, I'm not going to include the hours I spent sleeping and showering in the value of the experience. You can see on the schedule that there's a certain time each night when you're essentially dismissed to go to bed, at which point exciting things will pause. I'm not going to be super pedantic and cut out things like meal times because after all, some of those included entertainment. I'm also not going to bother cutting out the 10-minute gaps in the sample itinerary when they have you walking from place to place. Heck, I'll even be generous and include breakfast and the shuttle back to Earth on checkout day as entertainment hours. So as you can see, day 1 gives us 7 hours and 45 minutes of entertainment time. Day 2 is going to be a 16-hour day. That sounds exhausting. And day 3 offers just 1 hour and 30 minutes. That gives us a grand total of 25 hours and 15 minutes of entertainment time. Once again, that per person cost was $3,033.44 divided by 25.25 hours equals $120.14 per person per hour of entertainment, or about $2 per person per minute. Better not sleep in, kids. I should also clarify that I paid for the rock bottom, no frills package. There were multiple available add-ons, which I did not buy. Actually, I might have bought some of them, but they were not mentioned to me when I booked, so I didn't know they existed until it was too late. At the time I was booking our spot, the hotel had not yet opened to the public, so a lot of information was still being gatekept, and it was just kind of expected that you would know what to ask for, but obviously I didn't. To be honest, that entire process was extremely confusing and frustrating and stressful. So we booked the standard room, which was the cheapest and the smallest, but there were actually options for 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom suites. The website didn't even list sample prices for these, but one fan blog took one for the team and called about booking the largest suite on a random day in September, and they were quoted a price of over $12,000. There were also less extravagant add-ons. For $30 per person, I could have upgraded our dinner seating to the captain's table experience, and again, I didn't know that existed when I booked, so I didn't get to book it, and I sure wish I had. We'll get to that. The only add-on I did pay for was the memory maker. This was the one thing they did recommend to me. Basically, when I was booking, they said there would be a bunch of roaming photographers on the ship, taking both candid and posed photos of guests. The memory maker bundle was $169, and it would allow unlimited free downloads of those photos. I correctly predicted that I would be recording video the whole time and fail to get any photos of myself, so I bought it. However, after I bought it, and just a few weeks before my trip, they rolled out another different add-on where you could buy a private photo shoot for 30 minutes for $399. And from what I can tell, once Disney rolled out this more expensive private photo session, they just reassigned all the photographers who would have been roaming the ship to do the private shoots instead because it made more money. So what I'm saying is that I paid the $169 for Memory Maker, and we didn't see any photographers the entire trip except for the ones actively engaged in private photo shoots. So I just kind of lit that money on fire, and I have pretty much no photos of my trip, but whatever. This didn't sit right with me, and I did like a sanity check. Is actively engaged in private photo shoots. So I just kind of lit that money on fire, and I have pretty much no photos of my trip, but whatever. This didn't sit right with me, and I did like a sanity check on some fan groups and found out that the same thing had happened to a bunch of people where they just saw no photographers the whole time. So I actually called and emailed a couple different departments at Disney asking for a refund and wasn't able to get one. They just said no. But then I complained on my Twitter account, which has a lot of followers, and suddenly they personally called me and gave me my refund. They didn't even ask for my phone number. Like, someone at Disney did the legwork to go into the database, look up my booking info, and then find my phone number and call me within like a day of the tweet going out. And the person who called me was really nice, and I'm thankful that he cared to resolve it. But I just always feel very cynical when I try to resolve issues through the appropriate channels available to all customers, and nobody will help me until they find out I'm an influencer. I spoke with several other guests who got Memory Maker and had the exact same problems as me, and they never got refunds. Another hidden cost was that Disney recommended Star Cruiser guests arrive one day before their booking date. Real cruises, the ones that are on boats, also recommend this because in both cases, time is of the essence and you don't want your whole trip ruined because of a flight delay. Remember, $2 per person per minute, so we're not showing up late. But of course, this additional night in Florida is just another bonus expense for out-of-town guests. One thing that was included in the Star Cruiser price was admission to the theme park for up to 7 hours, and there were several suggested add-ons for that block of time, but those cost extra. You could book lightsaber building for $220, droid building for $100, or reserve a table at Oga's Cantina, food and drinks not included. For all of the above optional add-ons I've listed, there was not enough availability for every guest at the hotel to get them, even if everybody was interested in booking every single one. They were all pretty limited in quantity and first come, first serve, and you had to know to book them. I guess some people got emails about these things, but because of a glitch, like half the people who booked just didn't get them. I was one of those. And even if everyone had known, they would have had to fight over these things. So it was kind of baked into the model that although all trips were expensive, the bulk of the trips would inherently be inferior in some way. Which brings me to my next point. Part 4, Spirit Airlines in Space. In the United States, we have an airline called Spirit Airlines. Everybody makes fun of it, and it's just kind of universally acknowledged that this is the cheap, awful airline that you only fly on if you have no other choice. Basically, how Spirit's business model works is their base ticket cost is insanely low. It's usually about half the price of the other airlines, but that half-price ticket is going to be the worst flight of your life in the tiniest chair you've ever sat in, bringing nothing with you but the clothes on your back. This is because Spirit makes every possible amenity cost extra. Diet Coke costs extra. The little bags of pretzels cost extra. Legroom costs extra. Bags cost extra. Even carry-on bags, even a purse. I actually don't think flying Spirit is a bad way to fly. If you pay for the Diet Coke and the extra legroom and the carry-on luggage, it just becomes a normal flight, just like you'd experience on any other airline. And with all that stuff added on, you're not ultimately paying more than another airline. You're usually paying around the same amount. So in a practical sense, Spirit is exactly the same as every other airline. They just present the prices in a different way up front. So why does everybody hate Spirit? Because of the psychology of it. Because you see that initial price, and then for each amenity you're forced to add along the way to get back to that baseline service you're used to, each thing the airline demands payment for, you feel like you're being scammed. It makes the airline look duplicitous and stingy. You're like, ugh, they really want money for a tiny bag of pretzels? Really, guys? And it's like, well, on United Airlines, the pretzels aren't really free either. They're just factored into the total cost. But you don't know that when you're paying for the ticket. So when you get the pretzels, it feels like a perk. Framing is everything. If you pay extra for every aspect of an experience across many steps of booking, you feel taken advantage of every time it happens. It makes your relationship with the company feel antagonistic, as if they're trying to get away with doing as little for you as possible. And on the other hand, if you opt out of those amenities, if you don't add them on, you get a lesser experience. You'll have saved money, but you'll also be sitting on the same plane with all the people who did opt into the slightly better experience, and you'll be watching them get this better service. And that doesn't feel good either. That makes you feel poor. And that is why everyone thinks Spirit Airlines is the scammy, trashy airline, and they feel negatively about flying on it. So that's already pretty bad. But now let's run a thought experiment where Spirit Airlines charges extra for everything, but that base ticket is no longer half price. In fact, it doesn't even cost the same as all the other airlines. It actually costs more than everyone else is charging, and yet all those amenities still cost extra. Extra square footage, extra activities, extra character interactions, your trip photos. Hey guys, we know you'll probably want all of these things, but each of them is going to cost you just a little bit extra. You don't have to buy any of them, but just be aware that if you don't, there is a non-zero chance that your already very expensive vacation is going to be just a little bit worse than it could have been. In my opinion, if the starting price is already so expensive that all anyone who brings up your product talks about is how expensive it is, it should then be all-inclusive. Add-ons should not exist. The already high price should cover everything. And there especially shouldn't be add-ons that can only accommodate a small fraction of the guests. If you're selling something as a once-in-a-lifetime experience, if an amenity cannot be provided for all guests, it should not be sold to any of them. So what I'm saying is the price seems bad, and it is. But what matters is that generates a customer experience, which is also bad. Part 5, the ship. You'll be seeing glimpses of it in all my footage anyway, but I'm sure you're curious. So first, let me walk you through all of the physical environments in this experience. All the spaces accessible to guests. First stop, the arrival terminal. Driving up was kind of interesting. We actually went to the Hollywood Studios park and then traveled backstage.
Doesn't even feel like we're supposed to be here.
So that was like the sign. I think that's the sign.
No, that's definitely it. But it's like we're backstage.
So we got to see the back of Star Wars Land and drive past what I think are cast parking lots.
Yeah.
Star Cruiser.
Star Cruiser. Crazy.
So because it was a restricted area, they had a security gate and they took our IDs to make sure we actually had a reservation before we could even drive up to the hotel. When we got to the terminal, it was pretty chaotic. The Star Cruiser set an arrival window of 1 p.m. to 4 p.m., but I've already shown you the cost per minute breakdown. Obviously, everybody is trying to get there and get inside as early as they can. In the story of the hotel, you must take a pod from the terminal up into space where the Star Cruiser Halcyon is waiting in orbit. So in the real world, you must take a themed elevator to the lobby of the hotel, which is on the 2nd floor. And I think that is fun. I think it's very cute. But that also means that they can only let like 10 guests into the hotel at a time, and the line has to stop for a minute in between. So with everybody arriving all at once, you can expect like a 40-minute wait before you can actually get inside. For reasons I genuinely cannot understand, Disney decided not to build any kind of indoor lobby at street level. It's just a long wait in this sad outdoor queue area, and then a slightly shorter wait in this sad concrete hallway hallway. And again, in the story, you're not on the ship yet, so I didn't expect anything super fancy here. But like in the story, this space is meant to emulate an airport terminal, so why does it look sadder than that? Surely they could have built an enclosed, air-conditioned lobby with some chairs, and then maybe guests could take a number instead of standing in line, just so everybody isn't waiting in a packed outdoor queue in the Florida heat in their Star Wars cosplays, which are also warm. And I do mean packed because there wasn't very much physical room for people to line up, which added to the chaotic vibe. I think Disney must have assumed during construction that not everybody would arrive at once, but why would they assume that? They knew how much money they were charging. I mean, they even advised everyone to get there an entire day early so they could arrive on time. The cast members brought around chilled bottles of the space Dasani they sell in Galaxy's Edge to compensate for the heat, which was very nice. And obviously a 40-minute wait isn't the end of the world, but in every aspect of the hotel, I am keeping the price in mind. Again, this was billed as a luxury hotel, and in my opinion, this isn't a luxury hotel way to welcome guests. Plus, our trip was in March and we were sweating in the shade. Imagine going in August. I mean, you don't have to now because they're out of business, but whatever. Right before you get on your pod into space, you get a little out of character intro video. I think this video could have incorporated a little more guidance on the gameplay of the experience, but its primary function was to play a demo of the in-character emergency alarm.
As your adventure progresses, there will be special, highly dramatic moments that will ask for everyone's attention. They will be signaled with a ship-wide display that looks like this.
Then for comparison, they play the out-of-character alarm and tell you the protocol for a real emergency. For example, if you're in your hotel room when a fire breaks out, the hotel doesn't have fire escapes, so you're meant to crouch in this little shame closet and press a panic button, then wait in the dark for help to arrive. Comforting. I actually thought this was such a good idea. The intro video, not the shame closet. I have criticized certain other immersive experiences in the past for failing to distinguish between real and fake emergencies, but also fake emergencies are fun, as long as you know that they're fake. So the idea of doing this video gets a chef's kiss from me. And it didn't feel like a spoiler. If anything, it made me more excited for the story because immediately you start wondering when the alarm is going to go off. Upon arrival, everyone's luggage has to go through a security check, and all the people also have to go through a security check. These happen separately because the bellhops take your luggage away as soon as you arrive. So they would confiscate pocket knives, scissors, and anything that looked like a gun, even if it was a prop.
And your journey begins.
Oh. They're already taking the elevator. Because there was a shuttle you're supposed to go in. You board the shuttle on your way to the health. And then it's enclosed, so it kind of makes you feel like you're in that shuttle. But you can't be outside to reach stuff. So I wonder if
Once we made it up to the ship, individual cast members were waiting to walk each guest to their rooms. They also gave like a little mini tour as they walked with little nuggets of ship lore.
That little door right there is from our founder, Chuck DeBoer. He wasn't in selling, so.
Oh, so he only needs a little tiny.
Exactly. He's not with us anymore, unfortunately.
Oh. And then they pointed out where everything was in the room. And our luggage was already waiting for us in our room by the time we got inside, which I loved. That whole part of the experience did feel very deluxe to me, so we were off to a positive start. We were also presented with our M bands, which in the rest of Disney World Resort are called magic bands. But these ones are special because they look different. The band has an RFID chip in it, so you can use it as a room key. You can attach a credit card to it and use it to make purchases, and it also stores fast passes for rides. This is not new technology for Disney. They've been doing it at all their hotels for a while now, but I do like it. I think it's handy. So now the trip has officially begun, and it's time to take a look around. The atrium, this is where we entered. It's a beautiful space. I like it a lot. It has a balcony, which is inaccessible to guests. Up there is where a lot of the major story elements are going to play out, so it's actors only. There are all these cushiony couches with end tables to set drinks on, and down at leg level they also have outlets and USB ports to charge your devices while you're sitting there. I will say everybody was tripping over these low tables the entire weekend. They are at shin height for maximum bruising. There's this little model of the Halcyon, the ship we're meant to be on, so it's a little visual aid. At various points throughout the day they also leave out pre-packaged snacks in the atrium, and they have taps in the corner for chilled and sparkling water. There there are 2 tiny windows way up high on one end through which you can kind of see neighboring planets, or when the ship jumps to light speed, you can see the stripes. To be honest, I don't think it's the best view. I kind of envisioned the common areas of the ship having a lot more ground level windows to space. I probably envisioned that because that's what all of the concept art showed before the hotel was constructed. Also, I got to eat at the space station themed restaurant in Epcot, which opened like a year before the Star Cruiser and has a ton of really large space windows, and I thought that left a much more breathtaking impression. Oh, I should also mention that when the ship jumps to light speed, I thought it would be cool if the atrium or the bridge was on some kind of hydraulic pad to give a little bit of movement when you make the jump. You know, nothing hard enough to make people stumble, but just like a little kick. And since that sounded pretty ambitious, I thought they would just put subwoofers under the floor and it would like vibrate or something. And they actually didn't do that either. When the ship jumps to light speed, it plays the sound effect and you can see the hyperspace lines through those small distant windows, but it's not a horribly convincing effect. One feature I liked in the atrium are these big column things with projections inside. The projections are sort of rotating advertisements for things you can do on the ship, like an image of Gaia to promote her concert. Sometimes it's the Halcyon logo. And then at one point in the storyline, the First Order puts their logo up there because they've taken over. I've heard a lot of discourse about whether or not the ship looks like Star Wars, mostly people saying that it does not. Obviously, that's because everybody thinks of the Star Wars aesthetic as being dingy, lived in. Everything looks like it's from the future, but also at a yard sale. On the other hand, the prequel films were dominated by green screens with smooth 2000 CGI and had some strikingly sterile and plastic environments. The sequel trilogy mostly went back to the nostalgic, dingy sci-fi aesthetic, but then we also had films like Solo showing space opulence, and across all films, the villains' big star destroyers look pretty slick and generically futuristic. So given the breadth of aesthetics across the years of movies, I wouldn't necessarily call this environment un-Star Wars. However, I do think that in even approaching the concept for this hotel, Imagineers ran into a problem. If you're charging luxury prices and offering luxury service, you want to build a luxurious environment. But in Star Wars, our heroes are primarily poor people. In fact, the rich people are usually the bad guys. One choice I found interesting is that in story, the Halcyon is meant to be an extremely old luxury cruiser with a long legacy. So that's how they explain the High Republic stylings of it. This is kind of like the Titanic of the Star Wars universe if it hadn't sunk. I just mean it's an old ship. I don't know. And I speculate that that was not only done to justify the aesthetic, but to also leave the ship open for reworked storylines. Imagine an alternate timeline where this was a smashing success and tons of people went to it, and after several years, everybody who wanted to do it had already seen it. Since canonically the ship has existed for like the entire Star Wars timeline, they could just do a story overhaul every couple years, set it anywhere they wanted to, and not have to make any physical alterations to the building. So they could set it during the original trilogy, they could have new original characters, Luke is running around, and then at the end he fights Darth Vader, or like Jabba the Hutt. Personally, I would prefer Jabba, and then they could wheel him out on like a big bicycle-mounted puppet, like the Ursula from the Little Mermaid show. He's like, oh, I'm here. That's not even what he sounds like. I just assumed that all of this was encompassed in the original pitch for the project, and it would have happened if it had existed long enough, but I guess now we'll never know. Anyway, through a pretty window at the front of the lobby, you can see into the bridge, which has the biggest space windows. So you can kind of see that view into space from the atrium if it's not crowded or you're on that end of the room. The bridge was not open at all times. It was mostly locked, and then they would use it for scheduled story moments for smaller groups of guests at a time. But in the evenings when the story was over, they left it open to guests.
Are we allowed to just wander in?
Probably not, but maybe we should
try.
Thank
you.
In hindsight, I don't know if we were actually going.
The consoles were all turned off, so there was nothing to do in there during those times, but you could look around and use it as a photo op.
What's the joystick like?
It's nice. I like it.
I want to try it.
It's very bendy.
Oh, yeah.
Bendy.
It's a good feel to it.
Off the lobby is a gift shop full of entirely in-universe items.
During your lightsaber training, you'll wield a lightsaber, of course.
Mhm.
We also learned how to deflect laser blast with a shield just like this.
I was gonna say it can't deflect a lightsaber, surely. Just lasers?
It's more for laser blast.
Okay.
If you do a lightsaber, I think it would be some protection right
What
there
is
as
it
well.
made of? Is it fragile?
No, it's pretty good.
I should get this. It's
Classic. I can travel. I thought the selection of souvenirs was pretty cool, although they had no plush, which I took personally. I love that the halcyon aesthetic has everything in gold and silver and black, and it has a cool logo.
I like this droid. What is this?
It's JD series. So
Will we see him?
So our transports are driven by JDFA. So you might not see him, but you'll definitely hear him.
Ooh, okay.
They have all these in-universe clothes and accessories you can buy and immediately wear during your stay. And the quality varied, but I liked the variety. I thought there were some really clever pieces. And personally, I think that in-universe items and especially wearables are always my favorite merch for anything. They were sold out of a lot of stuff when I went though. So that's kind of sad. And I read online that that was pretty much the case the entire time they were open. They never had everything in stock. And that sucks, because you're probably only going to go once. I'm certainly not going to get anything else now. I should also mention that I got this big, gigantic droid for like, I think like $200 or something stupid. I don't want to talk about it. He's my best friend and I love him so much. Anyway, I used the Disney Resort shipping service to send him home, which they heavily advertise everywhere because he's really big and he wouldn't fit in my luggage. And I kept my receipt, so I know I wrote my own address down correctly. But I guess when they typed it into the computer to send it to the post office, they typed a totally different address and my droid went missing. I called a couple different departments trying to ask where my droid went and what I could do about it, and they said that there was nothing that could be done. But then after I tweeted about it on my Twitter account with a lot of followers, Disney suddenly resolved it and they sent me a replacement. They actually overnighted it to me, and along with it they sent a bunch of miscellaneous goodies, which I really appreciated. So here again, I feel like if this had happened to anyone without a lot of Twitter followers, they would have had a significantly more frustrating experience. Anyway, on the other side of the atrium, we've got the lounge. I think this area is so cool. As soon as pictures came out, people were like, it's so small. And I agree, it's a very small space with only a few tables, but every time I went past it, it was never more than 50% full. More on that later. But anyway, at least it wasn't too small. I love all the glowing ingredient bottles behind the bar, the little inset nooks for the booths, and the quilted yellow velvet on the walls. I love quilting. It's so futuristic. This might be my favorite room on the whole ship. I really liked these weird creatures floating around in these tubes. I assume in the lore they're probably involved in making one of the drinks, but I didn't get to learn any of that stuff. And the last thing off the atrium is a little public restroom. I didn't film in there because I felt weird about it, but fortunately I did find a fan film which incorporated footage of it.
I need the sweetness right now to calm me, to bring me down. Ah! Oh no. Oh no. I have dropped the spice everywhere. If this is found, if I am discovered, I am ruined. I am trapped. Stay calm, get it all off the ground. This has all been happening. How am I here? I wanted to be erased.
So, as you can see, that was themed as well. Head downstairs and we've got a few story locations. There's the lightsaber training room, which is usually locked, but will be used for a couple story moments later. There's the climate simulator, which in actuality is a small courtyard. This is for the benefit of claustrophobic guests who need to be able to see the sky and breathe fresh air. I can't relate, but some people are like that. In the story of the Star Cruiser, we're in space, so obviously the sky is fake. I'm doing finger quotes. I'm showing my B-roll, but I'm doing finger quotes. The room is simply simulating the climate of our destination planet so that guests can acclimate before arrival. There isn't much to do out here. They have some plants and plaques describing the plants, which we're told are in universe, and they have all these piles of rocks.
I don't know how I did that.
There's a story moment that happens here, and I'll get to it later. There's a brig, which is fun because it foreshadows that there's probably going to be a jailbreak at some point.
I want to get thrown in the brig. The brig?
I want to get thrown in the
locked
brig.
doors, the engineering room and the cargo hold.
That's going to be one of those areas on the ship that are special credentials required. I would recommend talking to some of our very important crew members or passengers through the messages on your data pad to maybe get some access to that throughout your voyage.
You have to unlock access to those doors over the course of the story. It's mysterious.
Ooh. The cargo hold. What do they have? We gotta go inside.
So those are all the common areas, and I'm sure you're wondering about the accommodations. Part 6, the room.
I swear it always pushes me. It's weird. I think maybe push it in slightly. Okay. Wow, the aesthetic of that shot was
Feels very narrow.
The rooms are little. I heard before I went that the rooms were going to be little, but I guess I wasn't expecting how little. And no, it being a simulation of a cruise ship is not an excuse. Rooms on cruise ships aren't small because it enhances the ambiance of the cruise. They're small for practical reasons because they're part of a massive craft that has to be able to move through water. This fake cruise isn't actually going anywhere, and in story, this ship is supposed to be a lot bigger than the parts we can access anyway, so it wouldn't shatter my immersion to have a slightly larger room. I guess there were bigger rooms available for higher prices. Those rooms actually weren't offered to me when I booked, or I might have gotten one of them for completion's sake. At the time I booked, they weren't even open yet, and there was very little info, so I had just sort of assumed that all rooms were equal. So it might have been nice if the booking agent warned me that I was getting the crummiest room for my extremely high price point. So like, to be fair, it would obviously be overly simplistic to say that I'm paying $3,000 per night for this little room. I've seen a lot of people compare this to the price of other Disney hotels, and that's simply not accurate because at most hotels you're only paying for the room, whereas this is more about the entire experience. But you know what I can compare it to? The thing that Disney is comparing it to, a cruise. Both come with all your food, with alcohol costing extra. Galactic Star Cruiser has actors performing little dramatic scenes, some with special effects. But Disney cruises have theaters on board showing what they claim to be Broadway caliber performances. And they also have roaming Disney characters to meet. Cruises are actually going somewhere, usually a private island, but the Galactic Star Cruiser does let you off into the theme park. Cruises have kids clubs with games and activities, and also have decks with giant pools and impressive water slides. So cruises do have a little more on offer, but Galactic Star Cruiser has novelty on its side, so let's just call it a wash and say they provide a roughly equivalent experience. So, okay, let's see what this price per guest per night gets you on a Disney cruise. For the
Yeah, I gotta say, I just love her thoroughness. She's very detail oriented, and she covers all the little nitty gritty. I'm not sure, but I'm kind of thinking I need to be pausing more often to still consider it transformative content.
Galactic Star Cruiser, it was $3,000 per night for 2 guests. So there's a 2-guest 3-night cruise to the Bahamas, and it's on the Disney Wish, their newest cruise ship. It's $97.30 total, including taxes and port fees. So that's $3,200 per night for 2 guests, or $6,400 for 2 nights. I think that's about as close as I can hope to get to the Star Cruiser's $6,000 2-night experience. So let's see what it gets us. A concierge level 1-bedroom suite with an extended private veranda. It looks like it's right at the front of the ship. The master bedroom has a king-size bed. There's a little table and chairs to sit down and have a meal, a living room lounge area with a fold-out sofa, 2 full bathrooms, and the master bathroom comes with a double vanity mirror and jacuzzi tub. And oh, cool, it looks like they've left this guy a little fruit basket and a bottle of chilled champagne to thank him for booking such an extravagant room. In case you haven't picked up on it yet, this is one of the fanciest ways you can ever do a Disney cruise. Given that a landlocked hotel doesn't even share the same space limitations and overhead costs as a room in a ship at sea, I can't imagine any justification for the Galactic Star Cruiser having smaller rooms. And I know they can make the argument that you're not meant to spend that much time in your room anyway, that all the fun stuff is in the rest of the hotel, but cruise ships make that same argument too, and apparently are still more generous with their space. Disney could have spent negligibly more in the construction phase to make every room a big room, and they decided not to. There is no justifiable reason for Disney to have limited the room size other than stinginess and to increase pressure to get you to pay extra for a little more space. Because again, we're on that Spirit Airlines model.
Hey, Jesus.
Anyway, it was only 2 of us in this room, and for 2 people, I would
this
say
video is very long. You plan on
space.
watching it all, or
It
just
didn't
do a
feel
no
luxurious,
reaction?
but at least it didn't feel claustrophobic.
It's like a little mouse droid. I have to ride around on it.
I should be able to barely squeeze in
Wait, really? I want to do it.
this whole
Let's do it.
video
No,
before I go to work.
Ooh.
Barely.
Okay,
Because
these are cool.
Yeah, this is
I'm commenting here and there as well.
But this room we were in was advertised to fit up to 5 adults, and that to me is insane. I don't even know how you'd fit 5 people's luggage inside. One of the provided beds was a fold-down Murphy bed under the TV, and we actually ended up folding it down like a shelf just to put our suitcases on because the floor space was pretty limited otherwise. Not to mention how limited time is to get ready each day with your one tiny little shared bathroom. I saw some people defending the Star Cruiser's pricing by being like,
her up.
well, if you put 5 people in the tiny room,
And I
you
love
may
her
be able to get it
commitment
for as
to
cheap as $1,400
all the
per
research she did
person. To which I
and the
say, that is
comparison
somehow an
on the
even worse
pricing.
deal. If you did that, you would still be paying
And
luxury prices, but now you
the
would also be miserable the whole time. It's
costume
like when I went to
changes
Comic Con in
throughout.
college with my school friends, and like half of us were sleeping on the floor of a
Very
Motel
impressive.
6. Except at a Motel 6, you're going to pay like $20 a person, and you're probably going to get a room like twice the size of the one at Star Cruiser. The only demographic I can imagine happily splitting this room 5 ways is like 5 physically compact, able-bodied people, each an adult paying their own way, each of whom travels light with only like a backpack with 2 extra t-shirts in it. None of whom wear makeup, and only some of whom shower regularly. I'm sure there are groups of 5 friends who love Star Wars and fit that exact description. And even in their case, I feel like they'd be massively overpaying for what they'd be getting.
So it's just trailers. It's just like, yeah, I think it's just trailers.
My other concern is you watch all these theme park videos, you know, like YouTube and TikTok, of the people who go to the theme parks, and a lot of them are big and overweight. So I'm wondering, on this Star Wars hotel, I mean, they're probably not going to outright ask you if you're, you know, ask you for your weight. So because so little information was offered regarding the room bookings, what if you are one of these heavier set people and you get the cheapest room? That's going to make for a very uncomfortable situation.
Disney Plus, and then the actual stuff you can watch is just like ads and trailers and stuff. Like, this isn't the movie Eternals, it's an ad.
Wait, what? Are you serious? No, like, is there anything on
Frozen
this?
is
It's
a
a real
fireworks
movie?
show ad, I think.
What? Oh my god. Is it like a storybook reading?
Oh, no, it is.
Oh.
That's actually, like,
Is
how
that
much would they
actual
lose
movie?
just giving people access to Disney Plus?
Anyway, there are things I like about the room. The first one is just luck, but our room was extremely well positioned. The hallways with the guest rooms were super long, and ours was like right at the top of the hallway, I think because I booked so early. We were in room 4-103. The 4 means that in the story of the cruise, we were on the 4th deck of the ship, but the 103 means that in real life, we were on the ground floor of the building. That means that in a fire, we would probably live, which is always fortunate. And it also means that we shared a floor with a lot of the amenities, like the climate simulator, the dining room, and the transportation to the theme park. It was crazy convenient. I slept in the top bunk of the bunk beds, and I really loved my little space pod.
I kind of like the idea of being in a little space cubby.
Yeah? Yeah, it does look pretty cozy. Wait, I want to see if these are squishy. Oh, they are.
I think it's for kids. Wait, what is that? Oh, maybe it's a little reading light. Oh yeah, it is. See?
Oh, that's cute.
See, I'm 5'11". I'm concerned
I want to do it.
be cramped in those beds.
Oh, it does.
On some hotel beds,
It's padded all the way around, and it
feet
made me
hang
feel
over
like
the
I was
edge.
in a little sci-fi cocoon. The mattresses were really firm, and that's what my back likes. I know some people like a soft mattress, and they may have not liked it, but I liked it. They left these quilts on the bunk beds. It's basically just a mattress with a fitted sheet, and then you drape a quilt over you. That's actually how I sleep at home because it's easier to make the bed that way, so no shade. I actually really wish they sold the quilts in the gift shop because that would have been like my favorite souvenir. I heard that some people just stole the quilts and then they charged the credit card attached to the room, and I should have done that. I should have stolen the quilt. I loved the overall aesthetics of the room. If they had made the room bigger or the price point smaller, it would have been an A+ for me.
Yeah, they should have sold the quilts. I don't know why they wouldn't. It would sell well.
And then of course we've got the shame closet. I'm ambivalent about it. I just wanted to show it to you.
Creepy.
The shame
No
closet.
storage. Yeah, that makes sense.
They left us a little souvenir tin with makeup remover wipes and bubbling face masks. I tried them and they were really nice, and I ordered more online. A+. Look, they're branded and everything. It's so cute. And the illustrations on the back show a Twi'lek using it. I love it. I would totally keep buying them, except now the Star Cruiser is going out of business, and the soap company that makes them is also going out of business.
Oh my gosh.
It's a curse. I should also mention that each guest room had this little terminal where you could talk to an AI droid character.
Cute. It's a map of the ship.
Well, I certainly didn't plan for stormtroopers to use the bunk bed.
I don't like this droid.
Passengers.
Oh.
Hello and welcome aboard.
I don't like this droid.
Hi.
Is now a good time to discuss your journey?
Sure.
Wonderful.
No, I don't like it.
I'm sorry, I just don't find this kind of technology very interesting. It's cool that she's animated, but this just feels so limited, at least at this point in time. Like, I have an Amazon device that turns on my lights for me, but I wouldn't do that on vacation as an activity. Do you know what I'm saying? So I tried to give it a fair shot for a minute, but then I wanted to leave, and I'm afraid I never tried it again.
Before I forget, did you bring any Dianoga eggs with you on board?
Yoga eggs?
I'm so pleased we found you. We found the eggs unattended in the hydrolift and wondered where they came from. I'll move them to containment for our voyage. Now, as for what you can do first. Now, unless there's anything else, I'll let you go.
Okay.
Best journey.
Bye. Okay.
Okay, so let's talk about the space window.
That is cute.
That's so cute. It doesn't read well on camera. It's literally just our reflections in it. Hello.
I saw a lot of people bashing the space window, and I think they're being sticks in the mud. One of the most common refrains was, who wants to pay thousands of dollars to sleep in a windowless coffin? I don't know, I guess I'm built different, but in the short term, I don't really care about having windows or seeing the sun. Maybe this is why my sleep schedule is so broken.
We just hit light speed and we're somewhere new now. This is probably the best looking animation I've seen on the TV. We're watching Ghost Adventures.
I think a space window is a cool substitute and prefer having a themed view to an ordinary one, and didn't feel claustrophobic about not having a real window. But I didn't think the effect was all the way there.
Oh.
Why is it so smeary? So that's on angle. Yeah. Yes. Okay.
It never looked very convincing.
Here's a little ship.
To be fair, they don't show up well on camera, but to be totally honest, they don't look much better in person. Worst of all, they've got these bright light strips pointed outward around the perimeter of the window. I assume there's some kind of optical illusion science at play here, like maybe the power of contrasts, or maybe keeping our pupils little is meant to make the effect look less bad. But unfortunately, at bedtime, most people find those light strips too bright to sleep with, and they're right next to the bed because the room is tiny. They do have this button you can press to close the window, so, turn it off, and that shuts off the lights.
I'm just gonna do a lot of like slow pans. What'd you do?
I don't know.
What'd you do?
I closed them. What? I closed the screen.
Oh my god.
Do it. Do it.
You broke it. It's never going to open again.
But that means if you want those LED strips turned off, you have to turn off the space window, which I would have liked to leave on so I could enjoy it while settled down in my little cocoon. After the hotel had been open a few months, I started seeing posts pop up in Disney World fan groups being like, pro tip, bring gaffer's tape and manually cover all the light strips around the window so you can enjoy it at night. And first of all, most people would not know to do that, so that's not helpful for everyone staying at the hotel. And secondly, it's a little pathetic to be paying luxury prices for a hotel room where you have to then spend 20 minutes putting gaffer's tape on the walls to make its features functional. I really love the idea of a themed hotel room. In fact, whenever I go to a new place, one of the first things I do is Google city name plus themed hotel to see if there are any options. That's how I end up staying in train cars and tiny Western towns and goat-themed suites. So while I think the demographic for a luxury price themed hotel has got to be extremely small, I am squarely in that demographic. And even with that in mind, this room fell short of my expectations. So, C+ for the room.
Get the perfect Mother's Day gift at Hobby Lobby. A mug that celebrates her.
Part 7, the characters. Since this is a multi-branching story, I think the best way to explain it to you guys is just to explain each separate character, and there are the following characters are the central cast walking around the ship for guests to freely interact with. Captain Kevin, she is a Resistance ally working undercover. I know she's generally trying to help the Resistance, but I'm not really sure what her overall goal is because I'm not really sure what the Resistance's goal is. I think it's something about getting coaxium, but I didn't hear any express purpose for it or like anything to give that mission a sense of urgency. In a lot of the publicity photos, this character's design looks whack, in my opinion. I think because you've got the very fake looking shiny red wig and the blue skin and the uncanny contact lenses, but in person under atmospheric lighting, it worked a lot better for me. The captain was probably my favorite character. I feel like we kept running into her. Lenka Mock, she's the crew's director, so like the second in command to the captain. We also never really talked to her one-on-one. I think maybe she wasn't free roaming as much as the others. We tended to mostly see her pop up for scheduled story scenes, but I think her character's deal is maybe she starts out neutral and then becomes a resistance ally. But that was just my impression. I might be wrong. Maybe she was with the resistance the whole time. Lieutenant Croy is a first order officer investigating the ship.
Oh no!
This was another of my favorite characters. This actor had such great villain energy.
I will use a restraining bolt to disable him.
No! We talked to him a lot too. We were actually trying to get the First Order storyline, but you'll hear more about that later. Croy also brought 2 stormtroopers with him. They don't have names, but I felt like I should mention them because they're also actors. I think their dialogue is pre-recorded like the ones in the theme park, although they do have a whole soundboard to choose from, so there's still interactivity there.
Oh my god, he's got a gun. Very intimidating.
Look how clever you are. Good for you.
Wow. Sammy is the ship's engineer. He's like a bumbling newbie on the job and begins the story as a neutral character and a coward. On a couple occasions, he gets peer pressured into helping the First Order and then feels guilty about it. And ultimately, he becomes a resistance hero. SK-620 is the astromech on board, and they are secretly sympathetic to the resistance.
Oh, it's SK. He's looking around.
SK, come in here. Get in here, buddy.
SK.
I love SK. SK is a free roaming droid. You can go right up to them and touch them and stuff.
He's going up the ramp.
I don't know that you'll all keep her safe.
We will. I would die for him.
You don't have to. If you would go back and hide.
I actually spotted the dude controlling SK once. In the grand tradition of theme park robot puppeteers, he's disguised as a dad in street clothes with a bulky camera bag. I'm not showing you this because I think it's a bad thing that I spotted him, but just because it's a little movie magic for you guys. So I hope you enjoy that. I didn't spot him in any other scenes, so I think he generally blended in really well with the crowd and stayed pretty far away from SK most of the time, except for moments in the bridge where they were worried they were going to run over a child. Gaia is a Twi'lek pop star who's performing on the ship, but the performance is really just a ruse to steal an artifact the ship has on display. The ship is from Old Republic times, and in the lobby they've got a big gem which is sacred to the Twi'lek people, but was stolen by colonizers a long time ago. So Gaia wants to grab it and return it to her homeworld. I think she's also a resistance sympathizer, or maybe she just hates the establishment. I'm not sure. Wraith Cole is Gaia's manager. I avoided him like the plague because you can tell just looking at him that this guy is the smuggler storyline, and I aggressively did not want to do the smuggler storyline. I'm sorry. That's my subjective taste. And I was right, and it worked. Mission accomplished. Anyway, he's helping Gaia steal the stone, I guess. Before my trip, I had actually heard some of the Star Cruiser designers saying that there were all these storylines you could explore, and that one of them was a romance.
Do you join the Resistance? Do you join the First Order? Are you a scoundrel? There's a love story on board. There's everything you could possibly want.
And there's this moment at dinner where, in my opinion, there was some sort of a sexual tension between Wraith Cole and Lenka Mock. And at that moment, I was like, oh, we're not really interacting with either of those characters, but that must be the romance plot. And she's very by the book, and he's a scoundrel. It's kind of like a Han and Leia sort of dynamic. Right. And my intuition was wrong. We'll get back to that later. Sandro is Gaia's guitarist. He has to learn to believe in himself or something. We didn't really talk to him. He's like that guy at a party who brings a guitar and takes requests. I saw in a lot of media preview photos that they had him in different makeup and just wearing a scarf on his head. But on our cruise, he was a Togruta. So he had that head thing that Ahsoka has. I kind of assume he's always meant to have the hat. And like, maybe they just ran out of time to put the hat on a couple times and they were like, well, we'll have to commit to this look for the rest of the cruise. I don't know. It's weird. It's weird that all the other characters are the same every time and this one isn't. Uani is my very favorite, so I left her for last.
What?
Should we follow her? We should follow her. She's a Rhodian, the same species as Greedo, so the performer is wearing a full face animatronic mask. She speaks pre-recorded phrases in an alien language, and her mouth moves along with the skin around her eyes and her little antenna things.
Oh, thank you. My hat? I think it would look really good on you. Yeah.
I wonder how they work the animatronic wall.
I can't wait to see your show. We're going to the 8 o'clock one.
I mean, do you have some kind of
Yeah, you'll see us there.
hair inside your mouth that moves with the ball?
I don't know. I don't speak.
She's Gaia's backup singer and plays some kind of weird alien instrument. I think her main plot is that she's talented enough to be a star in her own right, but the manager doesn't see her potential. Maybe out of speciesism or something, since she's the most alien-looking character on the ship. Saja is either a character or a group. I couldn't figure out if this character was one individual named Saja or a religious order called the Saja, consisting of like 3 or 4 people. There were multiple characters wearing the same tunic and beads, and I'm like 90% sure that more than one of them called themselves Saja. But in the app, you can get text from Saja, and then the icon is just an image of one lady. So I don't get it. Anyway, my impression is that these are sort of like the Chirrut Imwe character from Rogue One, who I'm sure nobody remembers by name, but he's the one who's like not a Jedi. He's a monk that studies the Force. So I think that's their deal. I think they're not Jedi. I think they just study it and teach lightsaber training and can move things with the Force and dress kind of like Jedi. That's very similar to Jedi, what I'm describing. Don't ask me how it fits into canon. I don't have the answers you seek. So all of the above cast members that I just listed will be on the ship for about 8 hours per day. Actually, the total length of time spans 9 hours because the performers are taking staggered lunch breaks in the middle, but they're staggered so you don't notice. They also kind of stagger when they send them out, so it doesn't feel so much like, oh, the character's shift has begun. Like you'll notice on day 1, Uwani arrives a bit earlier than the others, and I think that's because Uwani is probably split between 2 performers with overlapping shifts. That means they can stretch her time on the ship a little longer, and also she could take more frequent breaks because they probably overheat really fast in there. Similarly, SK is on stage a lot longer than the other actors, and I think that's just because droids have much worse labor unions. And then after all those guys, we have the movie characters. Chewbacca, I don't really know why he's here. Every Chewbacca story moment involves hiding Chewbacca or freeing Chewbacca from jail after failing to hide him. So I don't know what he was trying to accomplish.
Maybe I should.
Rey, I have no idea what in the world Rey is doing on this ship.
Rey just ran through here.
What?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
She ran out of there and then pried open those doors and ran through.
I know that ultimately she finds a holocron. Spoilers.
Oh! Yes. A Jedi holocron.
But it seemed like that was a surprise to her. So I don't know why she showed up to begin with. Maybe she just wanted to take a cruise. Kylo Ren, I think he's just here to kill us. Like he heard there were resistance sympathizers and wants to kill and torture us. Admittedly, seems like a pretty small fish to fry when you're the supreme leader of the galaxy. But I won't pretend Kylo Ren was ever a reasonable guy. May he rest in peace. Interestingly, unlike the theme park, this version of Kylo Ren is actually performing his dialogue live through a voice changer. That feels like a little bit of extra effort on the part of the tech crew, which I appreciate, but I don't really see the point. Kylo Ren only appears in a couple short, pre-scripted scenes that seem super choreographed, so it's not like the actor has that much freedom in the performance anyway, and it can sometimes be hard to understand what he's saying. If anything, it would have been cooler to have the stormtroopers speaking through voice changers, since those are the ones you can actually interact with. But whatever. The movie characters do not wander freely like the central cast do. They appear in story moments as like cameos, usually paired with one of the cruise ship characters, but then when the scene is over, they make themselves scarce. So you won't be making small talk with these guys. Oh, and of course, there's me. Since we're living our own Star Wars story, I thought we were supposed to come up with our own characters. I knew I would be filming the whole time, and also that I was hoping to get the First Order story path. So I decided to be Amethea Taupe, an influencer from Coruscant. That's a core world, a wealthy planet, and a political center. I just thought being rich and from there would be as good a way as any to signal complacency with a fascist government. I even brought Skippy, my spoiled little handbag alien dog. dog. See, I made him a little hat.
What?
It looks kind of bad, but I
You made
made
that
it.
hat?
I was going to only carry
Dang.
Skippy for one of the 2 days because he's real big, but people seem to really like him, and it occurred to me that maybe if I had him every day, he would be a good recognizable accessory so characters could remember who I was even though I was changing my clothes. If you're not familiar with Skippy, he's a character from a defunct Disney World attraction, and when Captain Keevan saw him, she called him by his name right away.
Skippy?
Skippy, exactly.
Yes.
You're a fan.
Well,
like I said, we love Captain Keevan. Isn't that right, Skippy? That means, yeah, that's how his kind agree. Anyway, having experienced the Star Cruiser, my takeaway is this. It's not really worth coming up with a character. The performers will ask you your name, but when you give an obviously fake name, they look at you funny and make you feel like you have committed a faux pas. All I can think is, even though I went pretty early, maybe the actors had already encountered too many guests who wanted to role play to a weird extent, like trying to be the main character or bringing too much emotional intensity to the game. But again, that's just the vibe I got from the frozen grimaces I received when I tried to use a fake name. It's also possible that the actors are being fed information, which would be linked to the legal name that you booked your hotel under. I'll get to that later. So anyway, I dropped the character name within like an hour of arrival, but I do think it's handy to bring a memorable prop or accessory as a conversation piece. I like how I'm giving advice as if you're going to book it. Part 8, the food. As on a real cruise, the food is included in the price, so it's all going to be free. Well, you've already paid. It's prepaid. The only refreshments that cost extra money are the alcoholic beverages, and they have some mocktails that cost money too. I know on some real cruises, the alcohol is free, but to my knowledge, on every Disney cruise, it's not free. So this was kind of expected for me. I was frankly overwhelmed by the amount of food. They do a scheduled breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and every meal is all you can eat. Outside of mealtimes, the bar in the atrium also has a whole separate appetizer menu you can order from, and those are also all complimentary. I loved this cloche filled with smoke, and then they lift it up and it's full of little cheese balls and crackers. They also leave out very simple snacks in the atrium between meals, like yogurt, fruit cups, Parmesan crisps, and then like some child pleasers like cake pops and goldfish crackers. I saw some haters online being like, wow, paying that much for goldfish crackers? And it's like, okay, guys, that's obviously for toddlers, but yes, they have goldfish crackers. I did actually eat a couple. But what I'm saying is you will not be hungry on this trip. It's impossible. The breakfasts and lunches are buffet style, and they have these little space trays with squares and rectangles you can slot the food dishes onto. I saw some people complain about the tiny portions on these little plates, and I don't understand that because it's a buffet. If you really like something, you can grab 10. But I liked that they were kind of sample sizes. It made it feel low commitment to try everything. They also have waiters wandering around to take drink orders at the buffet service meals. The dining room drinks menu is different from the lounge menu, but the waiters at meals can bring you anything from either menu. They can also bring you normal Earth cocktails if you don't want any of the crazy themed stuff, but in my opinion, you went all the way to space. You should get the themed stuff. They have a soda fountain with all the soda logos in Arabesh, just like in the theme park land, and they also have blue and green milk on tap. In the parks, blue and green milk is like a frozen milkshakey texture, and because it's plant-based, it separates a little when it melts, which I think is kind of gross. The Star Cruiser versions of the milk are the texture of milk. I'd compare it to like an Odwalla smoothie, a drinkable yogurt. I don't really like frozen drinks, so I way prefer the Star Cruiser version. It's actually what I was hoping the theme park version would be. Flavor-wise, they're the same as the parks. The blue is fruity, and the green is floral. Everyone hates the green milk, but I personally like them both. The dinners are both table service and brought out in courses on platters for the table to share. I think not everybody realized this, but the table service dinners are also all you can eat. If you have a favorite item you finished off, you can ask your waiter to bring out a whole new plate of it, and they will. Also, I'm pretty sure the dessert at the first dinner was literally the same dessert you can buy in Pandora the World of Avatar. I love that dessert, so I was happy, but it is kind of weird that it was the same. One thing that's true of all Disney's table service restaurants is that they're really flexible about dietary needs. If you have an allergy, they'll bring the chef out to speak with you and make sure you're on the same page, and if they don't have any menu items that can accommodate it, they'll just like think of something special to make. Also, every meal offers the kids' picky eater trifecta of chicken nuggies, pizza, and mac and cheese. And if you're an adult with no allergies and you're just a picky eater, you can order off the kids' menu to your heart's content. But honestly, the space food had very unintimidating flavor profiles. It would be like, oh, this tastes like a grilled cheese. This tastes like a curry. This tastes like a pizza. It's a salad with ranch. I will say, though, that Night 2's table service dinner had pretty abysmal vegetarian offerings. I said all that stuff about bringing out the chef and like he'll make you something from scratch, but like it didn't even occur to me that I would have to do that because every other Disney restaurant I've been to, they always have at least one plant-based offering. In fact, that's true at most non-Disney restaurants as well. But no, when you show up to dinner on Night 2, that's very much not the case. Only the appetizer is vegetarian, and then courses 2 and 3 are both only meat options. Like they have multiple options, but all the options are meat. And I know you're like, why didn't you just say something? But like, I felt like by the time I realized it was kind of too late to ask the chef to make me something from scratch. And also I'm shy, so I didn't say anything. So I didn't have any food, but I thought that was very unexpected and very strange. I did see somebody on Twitter that asked for a vegetarian option at this meal, and they said they were just like brought a plate of boiled cauliflower. Even though I didn't say anything to the waiter, he did notice I wasn't eating anything from those courses, and he brought us an extra plate loaded down with Mustafarian bread and cheese, which was so kind. And honestly, I didn't even have much of an appetite at this meal. All the cumulative heavy meals were really getting to me, so I wasn't that bothered. Overall, though, I really liked the menus. On the off chance I had left dinner hungry on Night 2, I could have just gone to the lounge and ordered some of those heavy apps, and it would have been fine. One area where they really went above and beyond is that every single meal had unique items on offer. I thought the lunch on day 2 would be the same as lunch on day 1 because most guests go to eat in the theme park on day 2, so I would have kind of excused them for repeating a menu. But no, all new things. Same for breakfast on checkout day. I thought a lot of people are skipping breakfast and leaving. It'll probably be the same as yesterday's breakfast. Nope, new stuff. A couple favorite items returned, like the pastries and waffles, but most of the egg and meat options were unique. The muffin on the pastry plate is croissant dough filled with a tart passion fruit paste and was one of my favorite things on the whole spaceship. I wish I was eating it right now. So after all that stuff I just said, you might be surprised to hear that I have a pretty big complaint for this section of the video. I said I have no issue with the food, and I don't, but dinner on night 1 was a dinner show. And I have a bone to pick with the dinner show. This is the big Gaia performance they've been hyping up from the beginning. I should tell you that a lot of people are mad about the character of Gaia, probably because she was first introduced in an ad that was extremely weird and badly shot and acted. The main issue people have with Gaia is that she didn't feel Star Wars enough, and I'm ambivalent on that. I mean, she looks Star Wars because she's a Twi'lek. I agree that her songs are not that Star Wars because many of them are in English. I mean, her hit single is called Rockstar Queen. I would never have imagined that the word rockstar exists in the Star Wars universe. It barely even exists anymore on modern day Earth. But once they committed to having a live human singer, they were essentially forced to have the bulk of the lyrics be in a language she can understand and remember. She does have some songs with portions in Huttese, which is nice. Actually, I think Ula Shuka is entirely in Huttese. Also, Uwani brings us some alien squealing sounds for backing vocals, and that's fun. Initially, I was extremely disappointed when I learned that the dinner show wouldn't be a Chuck E. Cheese-esque animatronic band, which would have made the price tag of the whole thing worth it to me. But Uwani does have an animatronic head, so that's something. Some of the song lyrics are extremely hokey references to Star Wars things, like "Baby, let me light your Kyber," and there's a whole song about the power of coaxium. Honestly, I'm in favor of that. I wish they had just gone all in on that concept. Her song Gaia, which is one of my favorites, has a whole first verse where she's basically telling the audience her backstory, being born into slavery, working in the criminal underground, and then becoming a pop star. I love all that. I wasn't taken to the sun, man. Said something at the bottom of the line. I ran streets with the twice, man. Purple stone was the only way I made my mind. But then there are other lyrics in that same song that have no place in Star Wars. Sing in my praise like a choir. Deep pockets. I make it rain. These genuinely sound like placeholder lyrics they just put in the demo when they were figuring out the melody, like they were later meant to be replaced by something more thematic and clever, but then they just weren't. I personally think they could have put like an additional 3 hours of work into refining the lyrics. I think that would have made a big difference. You may have noticed that up until this point in my review, I haven't really been too preoccupied with how Star Wars the whole thing is. To be quite honest, I don't really care about that. I care about how good it is. I like themed experiences, period. This kind of weird, immersive LARP hotel concept would have been interesting to me, even if it was just an unlicensed venture and the theme was spaceship. So all that to say, I was kind of cautiously excited for this dinner show from an alien band. I thought at worst I might be a little underwhelmed, but I like shows, I like kitsch, I like aliens. I did a whole video years ago about how much I love Sunny Eclipse, the singing alien animatronic in Magic Kingdom's burger restaurant. I figured it would probably be kind of irreverent and dorky, but I like stuff like that. And I think on the whole, I probably would have liked this show. I say probably because I couldn't see the show because they sat me behind a pole.
Oh, here she comes.
I can't get over this. I really can't.
Now, I'm not accustomed to sharing the spotlight with dinner.
Dinner seating is pre-assigned. We didn't get a choice in this. The dining room has like a recessed center area where most of the seating is, and then around the perimeter of the room, they have these elevated booths against the wall. And those two sections are separated by these fat support columns, which I don't even know if those serve a structural purpose. They might just be for atmosphere.
Okay, like, I'm sure it's fine, but this probably is the worst seat in the house, right? Yeah.
Well, it was the worst seat in the house, and it was not fine. I couldn't see a thing. I was at the very edge of the booth trying to peer out, and I couldn't see anything. My sister was at the back of the booth, all the way against the wall, trying to see around the other side of the pole, and her view was even worse.
I wonder if they could replace
I walked around the main dining area a couple times, so we could a little bit see the top of her head for some moments.
It's hypnotic.
Just
magnetic. It's life-changing. It's me.
In one song, she even came up on the outer perimeter and walked past our booth. But for literally 90% of the show, pole footage. I hope you guys like my quality pole footage. Just trust me, there's aliens singing behind that big old pole. Wani is my favorite character and the most whimsical, spacey thing happening in the show, but she had her weird alien instrument up on the stage, so she mostly stayed planted there. There's even this choreography where they're like leaning back and forth, and it feels like they're making fun of me because they keep kind of leaning in view and then back away. I mentioned there's one song where Uwani makes alien sound backing vocals in the chorus. Well, I didn't realize she was doing that until I got home and watched other people's vlog footage because we couldn't see her face most of the time. At the time, I just thought it was like a synth noise on the track. I think it's really delightful that she's singing, so I wish I could have enjoyed that experience real time. To be frank, I think it's pathetic that I paid $6,000 to go to the Star Wars hotel, and I sat in the room where this show is happening, and I had to go on YouTube in order to see what was going on. Another guest replied to me on Twitter that was at the same table as me, and she was trying to be very glass half full about it. She was like, well, since I couldn't see from my table, I had to stand up and just go awkwardly like walk toward the stage and stand there the whole meal. And that was great because I had such a good view once I did that. And it's like,
It's a dinner show. You're supposed to be seated and eating. I mentioned earlier that I failed to book the captain's table because I didn't know about it. So the captain's table experience is basically that you're in the center table down on the floor, and theoretically the captain will come by and hang out with you a bit, or on different nights it's different characters. Sometimes I think Lieutenant Croy sits with you for a minute. We could see the captain's table from afar, and it looks like they didn't actually get that much extra time with the characters. I've read that they also got a couple unique extra food items, but that's not a super big deal. But in my opinion, the main benefit to the captain's table is that you're positioned at a table where you'll definitely be able to see the show. So in my opinion, you kind of do have to book the captain's table. Like, it is necessary for a good experience. That's not the way it should be, but that's the way it is. And that makes me feel angry. When I go someplace like this and I know I'm doing a review, I don't have to feel like so much of an idiot when I waste a bunch of money because I know I'm going to earn it back on the video anyway. So it does lend a sort of comedy of errors vibe when things go wrong. Like, in a narrative sense, it is kind of funny that they put me behind a pole. Here she comes. Like, I didn't go on the media weekend. I was probably the only person in that whole room that was filming a review. They really played themselves here. But I have to admit, I genuinely was really disappointed that this happened. Part 9, choose your own adventure. Okay, let's get into the gameplay. First, let's recall how this was promoted as an interactive experience where you become the hero of your own Star Wars story. Choose your own team, choose your own path, live your Star Wars story.
And be wary of who you make allegiances with, because the choices you make affect the course of your journey and ultimately determines how your Star Wars story unfolds.
And it's your story. It's your story.
And live out all the different storylines.
They get to choose who they want to be loyal to.
The story will depend on what you do. Choose your own path.
As a passenger, you get to choose your own path. Do you join the Resistance? Do you join the First Order? Are you a scoundrel? There's a love story on board.
Do you want to help the light side of the Force? Do you want to tap into your dark side?
We're going to invite guests to become the hero of their own Star Wars adventure, and you can do it in whatever way you like.
Ad materials showed kids helping Chewbacca or snitching Chewbacca out to the cops and getting him arrested. The possibilities are endless. That was probably the most advertised aspect of the experience, that you would choose between a number of branching paths. As it got closer to launch, it became clearer what those paths were going to be: First Order, Resistance, or Smuggler. I've seen some people say Jedi was also a path, and I would argue that it was not. You could unlock a couple Jedi scenes, but they were tangential to whatever main path you were already on. They weren't their own story track. So first I'm going to tell you how all this is supposed to work to the best of my knowledge. The gameplay is actually split into two halves: actor-based gameplay and app-based gameplay. The small cast of actors are the NPCs for this experience, the non-player characters. Each individual character has their own schedule set in stone, and then there is a corresponding, seemingly algorithm-driven app working in tandem with the human performers, which is why the schedule is so important. The same computer program that's organizing the actors is also guiding the itinerary of the hotel guests. You can interact with the characters in person, but you also use the app to receive text messages from them. So obviously these texts aren't really coming from the actor, they're from the app, and you can reply with a menu of choices from a dialogue tree to get pre-written answers. In this way, you can build affiliations with different characters, which theoretically sets you on one of the available story paths. I feel like my viewers know that whenever I use the word theoretical, things are about to take a turn. This information has not been publicly released, but allegedly the actors have some way of syncing real time to the data in the app. Allegedly this may be done via earpieces. I said earlier that all the guests are wearing these little wristbands with RFID chips, so allegedly the characters all have proximity readers wired into their clothing. When you approach them, their reader detects your bracelet, identifies your profile in the app, and then their earpiece can feed them information about you. So we don't know exactly what would be said in these alleged earpieces, but for example, maybe it says trust level high, and then the actor knows to greet you warmly. They could even use this text to remind the actors of your name if they wanted to. The proximity readers could also theoretically send data back to the app, so if you spent a long time interacting with a particular character, that would boost your trust score with them and impact your story path. So let's say you've been texting a lot in the app with the AI version of the First Order General. The AI can ask you if you want to help him in his mission. You can say yes. The app can assign you tasks that don't require any actor involvement, like check that computer terminal for me, and then track whether you fulfill these tasks. The app knows the actor's schedules, so the AI version of the General can text you, meet me in the atrium at 4:30, knowing that the actor will actually be there at that time. Then when you see the actor, his earpiece tells him, name, Jenny, trust level, 80%. And then the actor knows to say, Jenny, you've been very helpful to me, well done. Thus marrying the two halves of the gameplay in a way that feels seamless on the user end. From there, the characters you've been loyal to can pull you into unique, in-person story moments to involve you further.
Oh, here's me tricking some stormtroopers into going into the brig so that we could lock them inside.
Day one's schedule is already programmed in for you before you arrive. You'll have training on the bridge, lightsaber training, and be seated for one of two possible dinner times. And in between those activities, you're meant to be utilizing the app and talking with the AI versions of the characters. You may also have interactions with the actors while doing so. At the end of day one, the app checks all your loyalty scores to figure out which story path you're on. It then uses that information to create your day two schedule, which is more personalized and storyline specific. So when you wake up, you'll see that you already have mission assignments waiting for you for the side you're affiliated with, and you'll also be put in corresponding story scenes. So for example, if you're on the First Order side, you might be asked to locate contraband cargo and then be dropped into a couple First Order cutscenes, and maybe they even mention the cargo as a reward for the task you completed. Or maybe you'll get invited to a meeting with the stormtroopers, or see the general get a call from the supreme leader, or something like that, something that makes you feel more directly involved with the story. I imagine there are probably 5 or 6 possible cutscenes running for each story path, so the app just schedules you into, let's say, 2 of those per person. Then everyone gets the same finale, which is a big performance in the atrium and wraps up all the story threads. And if you've been a particularly proactive player, there are moments when the actors can shout you out by name, integrated into the finale. That all sounds conceptually very clever, and if it works, sounds like a pretty fun experience, right? I think so too. Part 10, living my Star Wars story. Okay, so I'm going to be frank, the gameplay did not work for us at all. At some point, there was some kind of critical logistical failure which broke every aspect of it. I was continually frustrated the entire time I was there, and I left extremely disappointed. In our particular experience, none of the actions we took at any point directed the course of our story in any way, and I have guesses as to how that happened, but I'm going to get to that later. So, here's how it went for us. I knew going in that I wanted to pick one story path because that would be the best way to gauge how well the experience works. They say it's a choose your own adventure, so I would attempt to choose. A while before the trip, I decided that I was pretty set on getting First Order because it had been met with the most skepticism as a story path, and also Disney is a family experience and presumably motivated not to have a losing team, so I was very curious how they would handle a villain side of the story. So at first when they turned us loose in the ship, I had no idea what to do with myself. They don't really give you any guidance, which I was initially optimistic about because I'm a pretty big escape room enthusiast, and you're pretty much always dropped into those cold, and then you just figure out what you're supposed to do through environmental clues. I figured they would probably be using the RFID bracelets as part of the gameplay, and I envisioned there being loads of like tap points that you have to hunt for. So like maybe if you tapped a panel in the captain's area, you could download a secret file, or you could tap a touchpad next to an item to add that item to your inventory, and then you could use it later. So I guess I was envisioning something like a point-and-click adventure game, but in real life.
We found another purple urchin.
You know, like the NPCs ask you to fetch something for them, and then you explore a ship full of set dressing details and Easter eggs. Maybe you see an access card glued to a table, tap your band on it to collect it, and then you gain the ability to open a new door. Or you read a clue in a memo posted on a wall, and then text the code word to the proper character in the app, and then they give you your next task. Through that, I feel you could have some sense of discovery and forward momentum. I'm picturing something like, you need the Kyber crystal, but it fell in a crate with the alien frog monster, and he's guarding it. You'll need to get the droid parts to trade for the Jogan fruit to distract the alien. And then once you've collected the Jogan fruit by tapping your band on it, you tap your band next to the frog's cage, the little frog animatronic wiggles around and makes eating sounds, and it backs away from a prop of a Kyber crystal, which you can see through the bars of the cage, and then the app is like, you got the crystal. Sorry, Skippy heard me saying the name of his favorite snack. I had to go get one for him. I imagine the kind of gameplay I'm describing would also inspire a cooperative spirit between the guests. Are you helping the Saja? Have you found the droid processor? Sure, friend. It's over here. That's what they walk like. But no, they didn't have anything like that in the gameplay. They did have an item collecting mechanic, but it was bad. See, the app they had us using is actually an extension of an existing Disney app, the Disney Parks Play app. This app was heavily promoted in the early days of Galaxy's Edge because they said you could use the app for interactive gameplay in the land. They called it the Star Wars Datapad Experience. You probably haven't heard of it because nobody ever talks about it because it isn't any fun. Okay, wait, something's gonna happen.
It did nothing.
Okay. That was your reward.
It's just so quiet.
It made a little.
It's so quiet.
You got $9.
Why don't they blast the volume on this?
You know, in Rogue One, when they have to go out and then hack a panel and receive $9. Do you think anything's gonna move or happen? I'm beginning to lose hope.
It's the same sound.
Yeah.
Courtyard antenna.
Oh, maybe it'll do something.
Yeah, please do something. Maybe it's just not working yet.
I got it! Oh, jeez! Oh my god!
Oh my god!
Basically, all it lets you do is scan QR codes on crates scattered around Star Wars land.
Wait, there's loads of cargo.
So many things to scan. You'll scan one, and the app will present you with a rudimentary puzzle. Then when you solve it, it'll be like, there's a hyperdrive in this crate. And superficially, the hyperdrive will be added to the inventory in your profile. You can't do anything with it, so you know, that's it. That's the game. It's like collecting virtual postage stamps. So anyway, since the Star Cruiser app is built out of the Star Wars Datapad game, they also have crates in the hotel with QR codes on them. So if you like, you may scan those crates. I wouldn't really call this part of the gameplay. It was just something you could do. As in the theme park land, you can't use the items later. They're not connected to the story. And I've seen no evidence that they affect loyalty scores or anything else. There's no find the key, find the antidote, trade this item away to the NPC to get the item you need. It was just busy work, or maybe you could call it Easter eggs if you get joy from seeing small icons on your phone of things from Star Wars. But I assume this part of the gameplay was just put in to occupy the really little kids who wouldn't sense the futility of what they were doing. I noticed immediately that there are these computer terminals throughout the ship. I think there are 6 to 8 of them total, and I believe they all work the same as each other. They just have multiple so they can be used by more guests simultaneously. But like, you don't have different options at different terminals. They're all the same. By the way, the terminals are not touch screens. They use a few large buttons that are below the screen. Touch screens probably would have taken too much wear and tear, so that's fine. I'm not complaining about that. I'm just mentioning this because you'll notice in my footage that every time I walk up to the screens, I start trying to slap my fingers against them. I just feel like it makes me look kind of stupid, and I know someone that's been is going to remark on how I'm doing it wrong, so I'm getting ahead of that now. It's reflex. I promise I did also use the buttons. It's just often when I'm slapping the screen, that's when my camera is pointed at the screen. My camera is looking where my fingers are slapping. That's how I film everything. I slap everything. You just don't see it because I added around it. Okay, anyway, moving on. You tap your band first to begin utilizing a terminal, which at first seemed promising. These terminals are presented in story like they're intended for the guests. Like they show the map of the ship and other innocuous stuff, but then there's also a password locked section of the computer that you're clearly supposed to break into.
Enter access code. Let's hack it. Let's hack it. Okay, what do you think the access code is?
You have to earn it.
But how?
It's hot.
But how?
Okay, I found the first thread to pull at, the first puzzle to solve. I figured if there's a password, there's a way to get the password. We must have to look around. Maybe it's written down, like it's on a post-it next to the captain's chair. Maybe we have to talk to the captain. Maybe she uses her pet's name as the password. Maybe there's a clue hidden in one of the plaques next to all these artifacts in the atrium, or a puzzle we can unscramble.
During the...
No.
I'm a little rusty. I'm a little rusty.
You're showing.
Yeah. Dedication.
during the shift's dedication.
I found out later that that's not the case. According to other players' accounts, sometimes when you tap your band on the terminal next to the computer and try to go in the restricted files, you then receive a text in your app from the smuggler character. He says something to the effect of, "It looks like you're trying to hack into the terminal. You must be sneaky like me. Let me give you the password and you can help me with a job." And yeah, then he just tells you the password. It's kind of anticlimactic in a way I don't like. Maybe I'm the crazy one, but to me that doesn't really feel like earning the password. Imagine if a video game worked like that. Like you try to open a door, you find that it's locked, and then an NPC immediately sprints over and just hands you the key. I wouldn't even really call that gameplay. I actually saw some fans saying online that this is how you triggered the smuggler storyline. They were like, if you want to be a smuggler, first thing, go to the computer terminal and try to get into the restricted files. Then you'll get a text from Wraith Cole. And no, you won't. I did that, and that didn't happen. And some people online tried to victim blame me when I pointed that out and were like, no, you have to do it first thing. And like, I don't know, I feel like I did it pretty much as soon as gameplay started. In my opinion, it seems like sometimes it happens and sometimes it just doesn't. And if it doesn't, you just don't have the password, sorry. This also undermines any ability for guests to work together, like I was saying earlier would be cute.
Wait, what's this? What is your girl? Oh, you almost killed me. Oh my God.
In fact, at one point we asked these other passengers how they'd ended up on their mission thread, and they were so nice. They literally dropped what they were doing and walked us physically over to the computer they had used and tried to walk us through all the same steps they had taken. And when we did the same thing, it didn't work for us, so we gave up. I saw a lot of this online, guests confidently telling others the exact action to perform to get a certain outcome, but anecdotally, it doesn't seem like the game works that way. It seems like it's actually a lot more luck-based than many of the participants realize. So we felt we had very quickly hit a dead end, and worse yet, we could see other players around us who had gotten the text with the computer password, or at least had gotten some other intro point to the story.
Oh yeah, we just hacked it.
Was it hard?
It was easy.
There were kids happily tapping away at their restricted files, and I'm just standing in the middle of the atrium like, what did I miss? What am I doing wrong?
I don't understand what people are doing. Class, it's 4 letters.
Yeah.
South. I don't know.
How did they get in? I'm so confused. I feel like we're missing something. It just made me think there was some obvious clue I had failed to find, which was really demoralizing.
It's just like everyone's like deep missions and I don't even know what they're doing. Oh, we're supposed to touch this. For good luck. Okay, we did it. Maybe that'll help.
There are so many points in my footage where I'm just wandering aimlessly, wondering aloud what
Imperial
to do. You'll recall this
officer.
experience is $2 per person per minute, so just keep that in mind. At some point, having hit a dead end in both the app and the computers, we just kind of started doing laps around the ship, hoping we'd encounter an activity.
Are we missing something? See, people are like hacking and stuff. I already feel behind.
It doesn't seem like they
You think the climate's
created enough
like this space is the
activity
same.
for people
Another thing going on. I don't know if
to
it's going
busy
on, but
as part of the missions.
I want to get in the cargo room. Wow.
Yeah, I don't know what else to do.
We can take the elevator. We haven't done that yet.
I should have just taken the fire extinguisher off the wall and started spraying it around, you know, make my own fun. Occasionally we'd see a computer where a kid had accidentally stayed signed in, and we could see all the stuff that had been unlocked for them and presume that probably that represented some fun story thing they got to do, which made us feel even worse.
Christopher didn't log out and he has access to the alarms. Break access. And I guess you guessed the last one.
Unlock.
And he's not in the cargo hold either. Well, all right. I want in that cargo hold.
Other than using them to log into the computer terminals, there wasn't actually much functionality to the bracelets. There's a tap point on the droid, which is fun. I tapped my band on him, but I don't think anything happened when I did that. Also, a lot of Star Cruiser nerds are going to be like, the tap point doesn't do anything unless you ask his permission first, and he likes you, so this is a skill issue. But I did ask permission first.
Oh.
I have proof. I didn't even have to be told to do that. I'm just polite to droids, so there. But anyway, yeah, it didn't do anything. There were also the rooms with restricted access, like the engineering bay and the cargo hold. You would tap your bracelet on the pad next to the door, and it would say, access denied. That was very tantalizing because it suggested you could accomplish something to unlock that room, like a real-life video game.
We take a lot of tools from screen-based RPGs and move them into physical space. So we have literal locked doors. So we know that they're locked in a couple ways. That's an invitation if you're in a screen-based RPG, and also in our experience, to try and get into a locked door. There's something interesting on the other side of that door.
It's actually just like the computer password. After enough time passes, you'll get a text from a character, and it seems like it's random which one, and the character will be like, hey, I've got a job for you. Go to the engineering bay. I'm giving you access, and then you just have access. Also, near the end of day 1, we noticed that the restricted files on the computer just stopped requiring a password.
Look, I'm in the restricted system with you guys now. Wow. We still can't get in the cargo hold though.
And when we looked, there wasn't like anything to do. Like they showed switches to shut off various systems, and I thought, I guess if you're on the right story path, you might have an opportunity to use that and trigger a cool story event. But we weren't, so it wasn't interactive. We could just like look at the menu, but not do anything with it.
Look, I can sound the alarm. Really? Oh, I can't. Oh, see, this
Got
is
a lawnmower, got a
it
vacuum
matters now.
cleaner
It seemed like the door locks worked that way too. Eventually, they just gave us access to the engineering room. And actually, the app didn't even tell us it had happened. We had to notice on our own.
I bet I can get into this. Well, maybe it'll just let me in now. Wait, yeah.
It all just felt so arbitrary.
Oh,
While
weird.
exploring, we would occasionally run into characters, and we tried to take every available opportunity to talk to them. And just in case our interactions might affect our storyline, I wanted to be polite, but make it clear that we were on the first order path.
We really want to identify the issue, cut out the rot as it were, and then let everyone get on with their.
But like, I'm always saying cut out the rot.
That's something you're always
I'm always saying
You're
that.
always saying.
Yeah.
Is that, do you work with fruit? Is that something?
Yes. Yeah, but I'm also referring to like fugitives and things.
Okay.
Yeah.
When I talked to the captain, who I could tell was connected to the resistance path, I emphasized that I was afraid the resistance fugitives would ruin my luxurious trip, which doesn't sound very heroic to me. We never talked to Sammy, the main resistance Resistance hero because he was really popular with the kids and he was constantly swarmed.
Are you guys smuggling luggage?
No, the luggage is not here. We're just showing them the atrium.
It looks like you're smuggling some kind of luggage.
No, we're putting it in the cargo. This is the cargo.
We never talked to the smuggler, Wraith Cole. I didn't want to talk to him because I didn't want the smuggler storyline, but we also just organically never had an opportunity to talk to him. We talked to Gaia and Uwani a lot, and I think they're both affiliated with the smuggler storyline, but we only really talked about Gaia's music, and neither of them ever asked us for anything.
Very excited for Gaia tonight.
Gaia, what's your favorite song? Yeah, what's your favorite song?
I like her. Like,
It's just like funny.
on the
I think she plays Rockstar Queen, her new single. Oh, we'll see you.
Wow.
I believe Lieutenant Croy was the only actor affiliated with the First Order storyline, but we did bump into him several times. And every time we tried to be very direct. We supported his mission. Those resistance fugitives sounded frightening. We wanted to help.
If we notice anything, what should we do?
Well, obviously report it to myself or one of the stormtroopers, although I suspect you'll get more sense out of me.
Likewise, we both texted Croy in the app, hoping to double our chances. At one point, I thought I was making real progress because the AI of Croy directly asked, "Can I trust you to help the First Order?" And of course, I clicked yes. But then he just stopped texting me. He ghosted me. It was so embarrassing. While we were eating dinner on night one, Lindsay did receive a text in the app from Lieutenant Croy asking her to go to the engineering room right away and scan some schematic for him or something. Obviously, we couldn't at that moment because we were eating a formal multi-course dinner with a show, theoretically. And in my opinion, it's a little weird the app sent us that because, like, the app knew we were at dinner, right? Like, the dinner was at a specific time and for a set duration, and that was loaded into the schedule before anything else. But I figured maybe that meant the task wasn't time sensitive and we would just go when we got the chance. In the middle of the dinner show, Sammy showed up with Chewbacca, trying to smuggle him across the dining room without the First Order noticing. This was our first direct encounter with Sammy. When he reached our table, we tried to get in his way and get Lieutenant Croy's attention.
No, this is just a normal looking named Tom.
He and Chewbacca did get caught, which was obviously a pre-scripted event that happens on every cruise, but it's the thought that counts. Sorry, I know my footage isn't very good, but Chewbacca is getting arrested behind that pole. Then when our check came, the waiter was like, "It looks like there's something extra with your check." And it was a torn up piece of a secret message, which was very exciting. We realized that the two tables next to us also received pieces of the message, and I thought we'd have to put all our pieces together to get the message, which would be a fun bit of cooperative play. But when we put them together, we realized that it was unnecessary because they all contained equivalent information. I also looked around the room and I think I saw at least one other trio of tables that got these notes. For all I know, everybody got them, or maybe people got different ones from different characters. The secret message turned out to be, weirdly, from Sammy. He was like, "Meet me at 9:40 p.m. in the atrium. I'm trying to get Chewbacca out of jail and I need your help." And I'm like, "Our help? We're the ones that got you into this mess." Clearly, we had been put on the resistance path, which made no sense. But frankly, after an evening of non-starters, I was just happy to have any task at all.
Yeah.
And it sounded like we were getting some kind of exclusive story moment. So of course we decided we should go. But when the time came, on our way to the atrium to meet Sammy, who should we run into in the stairwell but Chewbacca, already walking around free and a gaggle of kids around him. I'm not sure if they handed out dozens of those secret notes or if this was just the crowd of kids that always follows Sammy around. According to my footage's metadata, this clip was filmed 3 minutes before the time we were supposed to meet Sammy in the atrium. So we weren't super early, but we wouldn't have been late. So I don't know what happened with Chewbacca. I guess they started early or something. Honestly, it must have been pretty early because, like, he had been in the brig downstairs. We were going to meet in the atrium, all walk down to the brig, get him out. But when we saw him, he was coming down the stairs, which means at some point he had already been broken out of the brig, gone up to the atrium, and was now descending again. And presumably in that time, a meeting happened to discuss how they were going to break Chewbacca out. So, like, what, did they start 40 minutes early? But anyway, it seemed like the exciting part was already over. And it was so crowded, we had no hope of getting a word with anybody anyway. So we just headed out. No big deal. I guess we weren't even trying to get that storyline. It just would have been nice to do something. Next, we decided to try following up on that text we had gotten during dinner from Croy. So we went back downstairs to the engineering bay to scan the thing that he wanted. When we got there, we were really surprised to see that the Croy actor was actually physically there. I'm immediately optimistic that this is going to put us in some story moment. So I'm just like, Chewbacca is walking free. I'm sorry, I never liked Chewbacca. I have no reason to keep his secrets. But Croy is just like, why should I trust you?
We saw him in the brig, and then he was walking around. It was the weirdest thing.
I see. You come here to further the cause of the younglings who've been trying to run me around the houses.
Oh.
No,
We really saw it.
But you will not get one around me this time.
Wow. And like, come on, dude, run your side. But obviously the actor doesn't know that. It's not really his fault. And obviously he hasn't got a job for us. I figured at the time, maybe the actors just aren't fully aware what's going on in the app, but whatever. We can at least do what the AI version of Croy wanted from us. Neither of us remembered exactly what that entailed, so I asked Lindsay to look at the app again. But when she pulled open her text thread with Croy, the text in question had actually been deleted.
What should we do? What was the task of the app for you?
Maybe it's corrections.
It's weird because it kind of like, I feel like the word.
Maybe it's because we took too long to act on it, but if that mattered, why would it have sent it to us in the middle of a dinner that it knew we were at? Isn't that the whole point of the micromanaged schedule and the app and everything? So why would it have given us that task if it knew we couldn't complete it in time? I think that's probably another clue that the technology was not working as it should. So with nothing to do, we poked around a little in the engineering bay and then we got bored and we left.
We should do these, whatever they are. Oh wait, we'll do something.
Yeah,
I really felt like I couldn't catch a break all day. Mind you, at this point, the $6,000 experience was already half over, and I felt like I hadn't even been able to dip my toes into the story. Just thwarted at every turn. Even watching back my footage now is secondhand frustrating because I so viscerally remember spending the whole day so badly wanting to engage with the game I had been promised and not being able to. Like I said, I had hoped to be First Order, but really I'd been prepared to say yes to anything a character asked me. But obviously I hadn't been given anything to say yes to. And whenever I thought I was being given an intro into some plot thread, it didn't work out for one reason or another. Not only did I feel like I was barred from participating, I was even barred from watching by a literal bar. After the characters went to bed and we returned to our room, Lindsay noticed that in the app there's a tab with all the different characters. It tracks how familiar they are with you and how much they trust you. So I would imagine it's scored based on how long you spend interacting with them in person and in the app, and then whether you respond to them positively positively or negatively. And this screen really explained the day I was having. Okay, so mine looked like this. You'll notice that my trust score with literally every character was neutral. So despite my best efforts, it was basically as if I hadn't been playing at all. Okay, now let's look at my familiarity scores, which are even more interesting to me. Lenka Mock and Wraith Cole look about right. They both say low familiarity. I was briefly greeted by Lenka Mock and I never spoke to Wraith Cole at all. So that makes sense to me. Sasha says medium familiarity, and I only met her once at lightsaber training, but she did ask me my name and interact with me a couple times. So okay, I guess that feels medium. But Lieutenant Croy also says medium, even though I've been trying to talk to him all day, both on the app and in person. And there was that time I pledged my loyalty to him and he left me on red. My familiarity with Sammy was high, even though I hadn't exchanged words with him ever at any point. Meanwhile, my familiarity score with Captain Keevan was low, even though I'd made pleasant small talk with her at least 3 separate times that day. In the app, the AI version of Captain Keevan actually sent me a text that night saying, sorry, I know we haven't gotten much time together today. But yes, we have. What's going on here? When we woke up on day 2 and it had given us all our missions, we had a few different options. We had texts from Sammy, Captain Keevan, and Saja. And you'll notice that not only do those missions not line up with how I'd been trying to play out the story, they don't even really make sense with my stats in the app. At that point, we just had to surrender ourselves to the idea that nothing in the story was going to make sense and try to invest ourselves in the path we had been arbitrarily placed onto for the time we had left. Okay, so why did this happen? What broke? I have a few guesses. Scenario 1, the gameplay didn't actually work at all for anyone, and it was a big scam. You're all just assigned to a story path at random. With only 3 major story threads, it's possible that for some guests, their story path would match up with the actions they're taking by pure coincidence. The broken clock being right twice a day kind of thing. Confirmation bias would then convince them that the story was a direct result of their actions. They get a message from the Resistance and say, wow, that must be because I told Captain Keevan I was a fan of Princess Leia. But in actuality, it's just what would have happened anyway, predetermined by an algorithm. That would be obviously pretty bad. I have seen other guests with the same feedback as me, that they consciously tried to get one specific path and it didn't work at all and they left disappointed. But I don't have like statistical data on how often this occurred, and I highly doubt Disney will ever release that information if they even tracked it at all. So it's impossible to really know. But I think if this problem was more widespread, it would have become more apparent. So I'm going to charitably rule this one out. Scenario 2, the gameplay worked for the majority of guests, but each story path had a finite number of players it could accommodate, and so the algorithm was trained to move some players into open slots in the schedule, regardless of their story choices. The idea here is that we were just the sacrificial lambs of our trip, shuffled into open spots to maintain even distribution of guests across all story scenes at the expense of our own experience, but facilitating other people's choose-your-own-adventure gameplay. The idea of this one makes me so angry. Like, I would be so upset if I found out that at this price point, they were knowingly sacrificing the interactivity for some unlucky guests just to keep the game running smoothly. But to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised at all to find out that this was the case, especially considering they designed the dining room so that some unlucky tables were behind poles. Scenario 3, random glitch. It worked for some people, it didn't work for other people, bad luck, etc. This is my main theory. It coincides really well with what I've heard about the way the app worked in tandem with the actors. I mean, I showed you our loyalty scores, and it certainly appears that ours wasn't tracking anything we did at all. The designers probably programmed in some kind of grandma mode, where a guest who doesn't participate in the gameplay at all and just sleeps in the room all day is randomly assigned a story path in case they want to play later. It seems to me like whatever actions we took in the app or in person, the system just wasn't registering it ever. So maybe the app saw a lack of data, put us in grandma mode, and then randomly put us on the resistance path. I don't know how such a critical failure could happen, and honestly, this one makes me pretty mad to think about too. Like, for an experience that's so dependent on an app, glitches do feel inevitable. To be honest, anyone who's familiar with Disney parks will know that they're extremely bad at building apps and always have tons of glitches. But in the theme parks, the apps just determine whether you can get through the turnstiles in a timely fashion, or if you can book your next fast pass. On the Star Cruiser, the app determines whether your $6,000 experience will work at all in the way it was advertised to, or whether you'll be sitting on the sidelines all day with nothing to do. In my opinion, if this glitch is something that could happen, they needed a better failsafe. Like, I'm just spitballing here, but maybe if the system detected 0 input from a player, it could flag that as a problem in the system, at which point a human employee could try to intervene and gauge what story that person was trying to do, and, you know, make sure by brute force that they got put in some kind of story event. Ideally, I think this concierge employee should have been dressed as Yoda and kind of shamble in like a scary suit and be like, no, I must. With which side do your loyalties lie? I'm always just looking for an excuse to do my Yoda impression because it's so good. Having a person intervene would obviously be a little immersion breaking and kind of a clunky solution, but it's better than what they had, which was no solution at all. I heard after my trip that a lot of guests had similar problems to us. One mom that went with her kids said that on day 2, she went to the front desk in tears and pointed out that their story mechanic wasn't working. And then she said the people at the front desk basically just pulled out a tablet and were like, I'm so sorry, just tell us what story scenes you want to be in and we'll put you in those. And it's good to know that such a solution existed, but obviously by the time you get to that point, the experience you've been sold on has already been ruined because that's not immersive. Also, because of the nature of the experience and the cost of it, most of your guests are going to be there for their first and only time. So it's probably going to take them a while to even realize that something is objectively wrong. It certainly didn't occur to us that we could go to the front desk about this. So we were just kind of like, hey, the game didn't work. The thing that was central to this entire experience, it was broken for us. And we can't get a refund or come back. It's just ruined. And that really sucks. And that was our experience. I also need to point out, in the interest of transparency, that many of the people brought out for press and influencer marketing actually didn't experience the gameplay. They were given an abridged presentation of the story and then dropped into a play scene. And from what I can tell, they didn't interact with the app at all.
Now, we only get 4 hours aboard, so it is going to be a bit of an abbreviated experience.
For those of you with blue wristbands, you will go to lightsaber training with our incredible Saja. And those of you with white wristbands will meet your group leader for your first activity.
So you're taking on the role of first order loyalist for this next role, right?
We're jumping around a little bit in the timeline, so we're on day 2, and Lieutenant Croy, who you guys just saw aboard the ship, has sent us a message on our data pad. And after we visited Batu, we are going to meet him.
We're skipping back in time by a few hours. You maybe haven't totally decided your allegiance yet, but you've been invited to join in the ship's activities. Now, the Saja have more of their stories than what you're seeing here. In fact, all of our characters do. And that's something that our guests can discover, of course, when they're here aboard the house.
Some influencers did experience the full-length stay, But not all of them. It was sort of a pecking order. Only the biggest publications and influencers with the highest follower counts got to do the whole thing. And not to name names, but I did notice some familiar faces in the background of the videos of the abridged experience who later claimed on their own social media that they did the full thing, which feels a little deceptive. But what else should we expect from a channel that buys subscribers? I can say that. You're never going to figure out who I'm talking about. So I guess my point is just be a cautious consumer of any influencer reviews, except mine. Also, for the record, this makes me really angry. Ooh, a lot is making me angry in this section. This is like if you toured a gourmet restaurant and the chef gave you only the dessert. And then before bringing out the dessert, he said, to provide some context, the guests eating this dessert will have just enjoyed an amazing dinner. And then you go home and write a review like, this restaurant is fantastic. After an amazing dinner, we ate a delicious dessert. You should definitely spend $6,000 to eat at this restaurant. Honestly, how dare they? I'm just gonna get angrier as it goes. And we're only halfway. Part 11, main attractions. The main selling point of Star Cruiser is meant to be the immersion, or in a broader sense, the choose your own adventure interactivity. But that could be a little hard to market. So most of the ads focused on 2 activities that happen on the ship, which are basically mini games. This was a horrible idea because in the promotional material, both of these experiences looked lame as hell. Like if they were added as a kids activity to the theme park, free with admission, people would probably think they were cute, but given the infamous price tag on the Star Cruiser, the unanimous reaction was, that's it? So let's cover both of the activities. First, I'll go over bridge training.
You know, I know she's on another topic already, and I took forever to mention, but I'm still bothered by the fact that they designed the dining area with those huge pillars to obstruct the view of anyone seated in the dining area. If you're going to have a performance on stage, you need to make sure everyone, regardless of where you're sitting, has some sort of visibility. You have to build in some sort of supports so that no one is blocked from the experience.
Everyone does this at least twice. The first one, which is the training session, is already on your schedule before you arrive. A crew member divides you into groups and you rotate through each of the 4 different control modules. There are gunners, shields, loaders, and engineering. For gunners, obviously, you're going to be shooting at stuff on the big screen.
So you're saying I'm going to fire when you're on the target. How's everything process going? It's great.
The screen for this task looks awful. There are so many targeting reticles and random garbage to shoot all over the screen. This is probably still the most desirable task of the 4 because you do get to game on the big screen.
Let's take a look at your metrics.
Oh. Loaders also work using the big screen, but it's like a crane game where you're trying to grab stuff out of space.
Activate grabbing. Oh, you're flying. I'm grabbing. Ooh.
You work together in a pair, so one person is driving and the other person is rotating and grabbing.
Let's grab hands and grab it.
Yeah.
Shields have their own display, and I would compare it to Team Pong. Everyone is sliding their shields from left to right to protect the center area from missiles. Even though it's a simple game, I do think the table you play it at is visually cool looking. Engineering, you're just looking at the little screen in front of you and toggling switches.
Whoa.
Basically, they show certain switch positions on the screen, and you just have to toggle the switches in front of you to match those.
If you have any questions, that is probably the hardest one to do. Just and
I like this one.
Okay, no worries.
Wait,
and then last but not least,
you're just like, you're going to press buttons. That's the hardest one anyway. Okay, what the hell are we doing? Okay, you just push the ones like that. Mash the buttons.
This was definitely the most boringest one. Oh, and at one point during this activity, one chosen kid gets to punch it and send the ship to light speed. I think it's funny how much the marketing made of the punch it moment. Like, we've all always wanted to be told to punch it and then punch it to light speed. And it's like, I don't know if that's true. I think when characters say punch it in the movies, it's memorable and exciting because they're usually in some action scene and you know that they're about to go really fast. Maybe it would feel more thrilling if there was a physical consequence to punching it, like if we were in a really aggressive motion simulator that's going to lurch excitingly. But obviously we are not. It's more of like a photo op for the family of the kid who's doing it than like a thing that's actually fun to do. At some point during your training, something goes wrong to make it more exciting. And what that is depends on the time slot you're scheduled in, because remember, every element of the story is running on a common timeline.
we received a priority alert signal from the resistance.
It would take a lot more planning. It would be challenging to pull
So
something
it sounds like
this
sometimes you run
off.
into enemy ships and have to defend yourself. Sometimes you get a secret transmission from the resistance. But I believe the most common thing is that you run into an asteroid field.
We're going to grab them.
We're going to have to.
The reason I believe that is all the windows on the Star Cruiser are synchronized to one another. The Imagineers were very proud of this element in the marketing. No matter where you are on the ship, the view out your window will reflect the view outside all the other windows. So if you're in your room looking out the window, you'll start to notice that approximately every 45 minutes you're in another asteroid field. On the whole, I thought this minigame was pretty fun. Each of the positions plays differently, and I think it's nice that every group gets to try every station. You don't just get stuck at an unfun one and have to stay there. There's definitely a bit of a learning curve.
Do you guys? Oh no! We were so fast though.
And the cast member walking us through it was like visibly annoyed by how people kept screwing up their instructions, walking to the wrong station, and mashing random buttons. I don't know who was doing that.
One more time, I'll be front to side to mid-back to back.
No, no,
Down the ramp to the front.
But it's high energy and it doesn't last so long that you get bored with it.
Be a porky system.
quirky. It's time to do a thing in the quirky system.
On day 2, having taught you how to use each of the bridge stations, they bring you back for another story event. Sometimes 2, depending on how your story plays out, because the day 2 bridge missions are meant to be specific to your story path.
Yeah, SK does have data, vital information for the survival of the resistance.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my god, very different vibes in the different rooms. I don't even know the thing.
So if you're on the resistance side, you help shoot at the first order blockade. If you're a smuggler, you help grab some cargo to smuggle aboard. Since there's no longer the story pretense of training, it appears on your schedule like the captain would like to speak to you on the bridge at 3 p.m. Then you tap your band at the door to confirm you're one of the 30-ish people who unlocked this scene. These later bridge scenes were much more fun because they didn't have to go over logistics anymore. Everyone has already had their demo round. They know how all the stations work. So your captain can just yell, rotate stations, and everyone is ready to jump into the mini games.
You can do it!
As far as the gameplay, I'm sure you've already gathered that it's extremely basic, more primitive than anything you can get on your phone. Like, if this gameplay was just put in an arcade cabinet at a Dave & Buster's, nobody would even want to play it. But obviously, they've dressed it up. You're in a cool spaceship room with a big window into space, and they've got live actors coming in to impress upon you the stakes of what you're doing.
Resistance starts to analyze the hyperspace tracking system. They can find a way to defeat it.
So with all this in mind, it's fine. People who do it will like it well enough. I don't think it's much to write home about, but it was a fine enough gameplay element for this kind of experience. And for my sister and I, it was pretty much the only time we got to participate in the story, so we were just excited to be doing something. Okay, next we'll look at lightsabers. This was the other one pushed hard in the ads. This training is taught by the Saja. Obviously, it's weird that Jedi training, which has largely been framed in the movies as special and spiritual, is now being offered as a cruise ship activity like it's shuffleboard. But there is an official tie-in comic explaining the backstory. You see, when the ship was new, a Jedi master saved the ship's special compass from this stupid-looking evil cyborg, and the captain at the time was so grateful, he built a lightsaber training pod on board to honor her. It doesn't really make sense, but that's the explanation. So the Saja will be teaching us beginner lightsaber techniques with the help of a training remote that shoots lasers, sort of like the one Luke Skywalker used. But obviously our training remotes don't fly like that. They're just attached to the wall. Useless fun fact, not all the Saja, but a lot of the Saja are female brunettes with vaguely Daisy Ridley-esque faces, and I think that's because a lot of them are cross-trained to play Rey, or at least the Rey that's way up on the balcony in the fight scene, probably to maximize their use of the actors, since I don't think Rey is there on day 1. It might also be to like save on costs associated with lightsaber stunt training, like now they can just train one person instead of twice as many. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. There's Reys everywhere. In this activity, everyone gets to try their hands at lightsabering, and there are a couple different rounds to this. In the first round, you're told that a guide light will appear ahead of the laser, so you get a couple seconds to line your lightsaber up with where the laser is going to be. The laser fires, and then the lightsaber vibrates and plays a sound effect as though the laser is actually impacting it. This round is obviously really boring, and that's because in an early leaked patent for this minigame, we can see that this whole first round is simply the calibration phase in disguise. They're very braggadocious about that, like our game doesn't need calibration before gameplay can begin because we integrate it into the gameplay. And it's like, okay, but did you really? Are we calling this gameplay? Anyway, as is pretty obvious, the computer is leading you through a series of basic positions with your lightsaber so it can learn your dimensions and incorporate it into the next round. When I was doing my first round, I was kind of hopping around from foot to foot, primarily because I'd seen that Josh D'Amaro ad and thought he looked so uncool the way he did that, and I didn't want to repeat his mistakes. But then the Saja had to come by and tell me to stop wiggling around so much because I think I was in danger of compromising the calibration. But it all worked out. You'll see in a second. In the second round, the time between the guide light and the laser blast is slightly shorter, so it's marginally harder, but still not overly exciting. But now they add 2 people behind the lightsaber wielder using these things. This is a reflective shield capable of blocking blaster bolts. I think canonically this shield is built using kyber crystals like a lightsaber is. Maybe a whole bunch of kyber crystals because it lights up in different colors. I saw a lot of people saying this has crazy implications for the canon, but I think it doesn't. I don't think they ever say it blocks lightsabers, just lasers, which doesn't seem like a big deal. And this thing is like really heavy and awkward to hold, so I fully understand why Jedi prefer to just carry a lightsaber and deflect blasts with that. That said, the shield is pretty uncool, right? They obviously just incorporated this into the experience to try to think of something for people to do when they're not using the lightsabers. So they're like, 2 people stand behind them and catch the extra lasers that get past their lightsabers, and that doesn't make any sense. And I'm crashing around with this big clumsy shield feeling like a total fool. So eagle-eyed viewers might have noticed something in each round. We have that guide light letting us know where the laser blast is going to hit, but we also have these little sparkles around the training remote. These twinkly lights are divided into quadrants, so while they won't show you exactly where to aim, they do let you know the general direction the blast will go. In the first 2 rounds, these are redundant since we have the guide light, but in the break before the final round, the Saja offers context for these twinkles. She doesn't acknowledge them directly, but she says that those in tune with the Force can sense where blasts are about to come from, so that's what the twinkles are. In canon, they're not something we're meant to be seeing with the naked eye. They are the Force giving us intuition about where to block. At this point, the Saja teaches us a little chant for team morale. And then she says she thinks we're ready to rely on the Force to block the beam. So for the final round, the blasts come quickly with no guide light, only those twinkles to guide you. My sister was not paying attention during this explanation, but that's actually good news for me because it gave me additional insight into how the tech works. If you look closely, you'll see the major difference in this final round. In the first 2 rounds, we were trying to aim where the laser would go. But in this final round, the laser is actually tracking us and aiming for our blades. The computer even seems to hold its fire indefinitely until you swing into the correct quadrant. The whole concept with the Force twinkles was just to get us to constrain our blade movements to a smaller area so it would be less visually apparent that the lasers were following us and not the other way around. To an unsuspecting participant, and especially a kid, it'll look like they're doing a great job guessing the precise angle of the laser every time with lightning fast reflexes. Since Lindsay didn't notice the twinkles, she was pinwheeling her blade all over the place, so it was very apparent to me what was going on. You can literally see the lasers correcting midair, trying to follow her. So I think conceptually, that's a fun gimmick. It allows for some sense of escalation, even if individual guests would not be skilled enough to keep up. It simulates the experience of practicing and improving at something all in under 20 minutes. And I loved our Saja. I thought she was funny and was good at retaining people's names and involving everyone in the experience. Unlike the bridge training, this one you do only once and it's never utilized again. In fact, this is the only time you'll even be holding a lightsaber on board. It's forbidden to walk around with them on the ship. I assume due to paranoia that you'll get overexcited and swing into another guest or break a prop. Even if you buy the $200 ship exclusive saber in the gift shop, you're only allowed to take it out, stand still to pose for photos, and then you're expected to store it in your room. So I guess you could say that should enhance the novelty of this experience. But when you imagine being the protagonist in a Star Wars movie, I don't think you're picturing doing target practice. And Disney obviously understands this because they've already done a lightsaber training experience in the theme parks. And in that one, after teaching you some basic training positions, they parade out a Darth Vader or a Kylo Ren to duel the little kids. The show always reminded me of that scene in Space Jam where the bad guys want to imprison Michael Jordan in their theme park and force him to let kids win at basketball. Anyway, such a story moment wouldn't work in an immersive LARP experience, right? They can't have Kylo Ren showing up every 30 minutes. How would they make it work in the story that any of the guests get to defeat the villain, let alone all of them? But therein lies the problem, right? Even in the suspended disbelief of the story, you're still not doing anything very exciting. You're just training, so there's no suspense. It's just a mildly diverting video game demo. If it was free in the theme park and you had to wait 20 minutes to do it, I could see it being reasonably popular, but not something you'd go out of your way to do every time. And just like the bridge training, it doesn't really work as a featured attraction for such an expensive experience. Oh, I should also talk about the engineering bay. That was featured in a lot of the ads too, usually just as a visually interesting backdrop. They never indicated what you would do there, but it looked like it would be something. Before I went, I thought maybe they would schedule groups of 10 or so people at a time to go in there for a story reason, and then it could be like a miniature escape room. Like you have to gather environmental clues and use those to put the machinery at the correct settings to achieve a goal in the story. And they could have a cast member in the room with you to keep things moving if people got stuck. We're in the engineering room.
Okay. He's in there. Whoa, what's this?
So I was wrong. Basically, the engineering bay is like an activity area with 10 or so baby level puzzles. Some are like Simon, where a terminal pings in a certain order and then you replicate it. Some of them have screens showing switches in particular positions and then you have to move them around to match. Sometimes when you succeeded a puzzle, it rewards you by playing a sound effect or making steam shoot out or shutting off an alarm that's been sounding.
Oh my gosh, that's a carbon freezing system. That's important.
But as far as I could tell, there's no story incentive to do any of that. It's just busy work.
Look in here, it's the core. Lindsay, look, the core. Wow, I can feel it humming. All that power. Whoa, we can go in. We can go inside. I love the core. Oh, fix it. Okay. Press those buttons.
Yeah.
Whoa! Even if you fix something, in a couple of minutes, it'll reset for the next person to play anyway, so you're not really accomplishing anything. I think most people figured that out because every time we went in, it was pretty empty. And we'd see other people our age walking in, taking a look around, and quickly leaving because it wasn't very interesting. The only people sticking around were a couple moms with children under the age of 4 because that's the age demographic whose interest will be held by something like this. Which, it's good to have something for everyone, but at this price point, like, why didn't you just take them to the park by your house if they're getting so little out of this that you're just trying to keep them distracted? Oh, I should also point out that at foot level, there's this escape hatch, which connects the engineering room to the brig.
That's cool. Look at slides. It's a secret tunnel out of the brig.
It was locked when we saw it. There must have been some story event where one of the characters locked in the brig escaped via this hatch, so that's fun to imagine, but we weren't part of any storyline that got to use it. I read that it's possible to get summoned to the engineering bay for story events, like you meet Sammy there to save the ship, or the general there to sabotage the ship. So I guess in that case, there would be an element of satisfaction, like there's at least the pretense that what you're doing matters. We never got any of those events though, and even if we had happened to go to the engineering room while one was going on, we would have been turned away. When a room is in use for a scheduled story moment, they station someone at the door and make you tap your bracelet, so unless the app verifies you've been invited by a character, you aren't allowed entry. Anyway, since we didn't get to do that, the room seemed like kind of a pointless diversion.
Yes! Finally! Finally, some levers to pull. I think I'm doing it right.
My impression is that basically you can go to the engineering room outside of exclusive story scenes, but there isn't really a reason to. And while we were on board, I didn't realize that that was the case because I didn't know about those story moments we didn't get. So here again, I was frustrated and at a loss. Like, it really seems like this room is for something, but what? I must be doing something wrong. I had really figured there would be something to discover there, but nope. And there was one last thing I'd loosely call an attraction. A lot of fan pages treated this like a big spoiler, but I think they showed a clip of it in one of the ads anyway. But in the Climate Simulator courtyard, you saw they had all those rocks stacked up in the middle. Well, they had one interactive thing in there. The Saja could select you for force training, and then they had some of the rocks rigged to magnets, so you could pull a rock toward you. And sometimes it would knock over all the other piled rocks, which made it look a little more dramatic. I know that sounds really simple, but this is another thing they dressed up like the performers by having like a weirdly intimate interaction with you. I don't know. But anyway, I know this is really simple, but I do think it's a cute idea.
For the channel, yeah. I started seeing growth again once I started doing gaming streams consistently.
It obviously didn't happen for us. It didn't happen for most guests. There's no guaranteed way to have this happen. You can't unlock it by doing a certain thing in gameplay or getting a high enough loyalty score with anyone. It's just something the employees randomly select you for based on vibes. I think they often went for really little kids, birthday boys of all ages, or, you know, well-known pluggers. And it seems like maybe 3 guests get to do this per sale date. So while I think it's a cute idea, I do think it's a little frustrating that this is one of the only instances of the set being rigged with an interactive special effect, and by design, the odds of seeing it are extremely slim. Mechanically, it's a basic parlor trick, but if the ship had had a lot of small touches like this happening all the time, the overall effect would have been dazzling. Little things that move, that you feel you're interacting with, but no.
Oh no. Another head.
Co-pilot, I am freaking out about this speech right now. How can I get it together?
All right, simplify.
Art 12, supplementary activities. These were getting a lot of attention online, so I had
And
better
wait
address them, although they were a very small part of the
1,000
experience.
subs
Also, I
before
tried to dress
do
like a Saj
another
off for this part. See, I've got the sleeves.
celebratory
They can't all be
speech.
winners. So on Star Cruiser, there are a handful of filler activities that are basically intended for you to do in your downtime between other activities. All of the activities I mentioned in this section are completely optional. They have zero impact on the story, and you'll not be penalized for sitting them out, which most people did. Some of these supplementary activities carried more hidden fees. Like they had model ship building as an activity, but you had to go buy the model ship kit from the gift shop, so I don't really get it. I don't know, you wouldn't just do that when you got home. They had a mixology lesson with the bartender called the Cantina Chronicles, where he would make you non-alcoholic versions of all the specialty drinks and then tell you in-universe lore about all the ingredients.
This drink would reveal if they had true intentions. So they would take a sip right before the deal, and after, if it tasted so sweet, you would actually lose the ability to speak.
Like a lot of the drinks had planets of origin in the Star Wars universe, or ingredients were like the eggs of a creature. I know one of them had venom in it, and then they would give you a little eyedropper of antidote to chase it with. Cantina Chronicles was supposed to happen at noon on day 2, and it overlapped with the theme park trip. So I really wanted to go and get all that sweet lore, but it just didn't seem reasonable. But then when I got home, I read online that a lot of guests did go out of their way to try to go to it. And on a lot of the trips, it was just canceled without warning. Like they would be sitting in the bar looking at their phones, like, shouldn't the bartender be here by now? And then before their very eyes, it would be deleted from the schedule. I would have been so mad if I skipped something else and then that happened. So I guess I'm glad I didn't go to it, but it does sound like it would have been fun if it happened. Later in the life of the Star Cruiser, they modified the Cantina Chronicles to something called Spirits of Adventure. So it was the same thing, but the drinks were all alcoholic. And that version was $49 per person. So it's kind of unfortunate to me that they replaced a free thing with a thing that costs money on this all-inclusive trip. Anyway, then they had free activities, which were more like party games. Like they had one called Know Your Co-Pilot. And to my understanding, that was like a Star Wars version of the Newlywed Game. There are sabacc card game lessons. And of course, that hollow sabacc table in the lounge. The table is cool because it uses a Pepper's Ghost illusion to make it look like there are holograms of your cards in front of you. They only had this one table, so it was usually occupied with a short line to use it, like a swing set at recess or something. But I wasn't really trying to waste precious time doing a digital card game anyway, so I was happy just to see it. Later, they ran a sabacc tournament. I had assumed before going that the sabacc lessons were there because some smuggler story moment involved playing sabacc against a character actor. That actually did not happen. The sabacc is entirely a filler activity. But if you win the tournament, you get a big commemorative coin. I wish I had that big coin. It's just not fair. At one point, they set up an obstacle course in the atrium and had kids race the remote-controlled droids through it. They have Sector Set, which is Space Bingo, and if you win, you get the big coin. And then there are the infamous Ryloth dance lessons where they teach you moves to the alien pop star's new song. Most of these are lame and not worth the money you've paid to be here, but as I said, most guests will not be doing these activities anyway. The way I see it, the schedule was pretty packed, and it had a lot of awkward 30 to 40-minute gaps between things where it would be hard to really know what to do with yourself. So I think these are to fill those gaps. Even though I was not interested in doing any of these, I had intended to try to make it to most of them to get footage so you could see what they were like. And even with those intentions, I didn't make it to most of them. But I felt like walking past and seeing them happening helped add a little life to the ship. I've never been on a real cruise, but whenever I've seen them on TV, they seem to always have old people doing Pilates by the pool and playing bingo. So I like that they have all this corny fake stuff to make it feel like a real corny cruise. I think that's cute. It was probably expected that most guests wouldn't bother with these, but that's part of why I think it's funny that they actually included them. So for that reason, I think these bonus activities are pretty charming, and they certainly don't take anything away. I'm sorry, because I feel like everyone was waiting for me to throw shade at Space Bingo, but I'm not going to. I think it's cute. Part 13, the schedule. You may have picked up on it by now, but the Star Cruiser's schedule was unrelenting. Basically, every minute of the day was booked with something, and if you thought the schedule looked full when you arrived, you would soon discover that new things are dropped into it on the fly. Theoretically, you could access it in your app, which you were expected to look at constantly. And most of the things on it were 30 minutes or less. So we were constantly running around. Even among positive reviews, I've seen countless people talk about leaving feeling drained, both physically and emotionally, which in my opinion seems like a bad thing. Day 1 of Star Cruiser, you can check in as early as 1 p.m. and the story ends between 10 and 11 p.m. The lounge stays open till 11, and that might be one of your only chances to spend time there. So you might want to. And we stayed up a little later than that so I could get ambient footage of the atrium when it was empty. On day 2, the activity begins as early as 8:40 a.m. But if you really want your money's worth, you ought to eat the themed breakfast. So you should really start your day closer to 8 a.m. God forbid anyone who goes wants to shower between days 1 and 2, wear makeup, do any kind of skincare routine, do their hair in the morning, spend time putting on elaborate themed costumes as Disney has encouraged them to do. God forbid anyone gets to their room at the end of the night and wants to talk to their roommates about what they've experienced thus far. It's just accepted that everybody is going to have a sleep deficit unless there's some kind of automaton that shuffles into their room at night, falls face first onto the bed, goes directly to sleep, then rises in the same clothes the following morning and shuffles directly out the door again. So if you've gotten up at 8 a.m., you should know that day 2 runs all the way until 11 p.m. again. Day 3 is checkout day, and on the sample itinerary it says checkout is at 10, but it actually ended up being earlier than that. They assigned random half-hour slots in which each specific room was meant to leave, which could be hours earlier. Ours was actually one of the latest groups to leave at 9 a.m., but they started knocking on our doors at around 8 to make sure we were actually awake and getting ready, because they have a really short turnaround to flip the rooms for the next crop of guests at 1. Again, this doesn't feel very luxurious. I don't think I've had this happen at any other hotel I've stayed at ever. Another thing is, I really like themed environments, and even though I didn't find the environments exceptionally detailed, there were some spaces on the ship I might have liked to hang out in longer to absorb the atmosphere. As I said earlier, I thought the lounge was really cool, but I only went in there twice, and neither occasion exceeded 15 minutes. We always had to guiltily run to it, order a drink, and try to chug it before we had to get up and sprint to the next thing on our itinerary. Because on the Star Cruiser, time is very literally money. So on one of our brief visits to the lounge, we ordered some of the bar food, including the plate of beautiful cheese balls, which I love, the ones that arrived in the cloche full of smoke, and we didn't even get to finish them. If anyone can finish a cheese ball, it's us. But nope, We were already late for lightsaber training. We had to run there drinks in hand, just like the Jedi of old. I barely even managed to get footage of that space bingo. It was happening literally while we were trying to eat the cheese balls. So I would like stand up and sprint to the other room, film some bingo, and then sprint back and keep shoveling cheese into my mouth. Everything moved at a breakneck pace, and I don't mean that as a compliment. It's not the kind of fast pace that feels thrilling. I would describe it as frantic. And 2 straight days of frantic on what is ostensibly sold as a vacation is not ideal and is very mentally taxing. I think one could have had a decent time hanging out on the ship and soaking up the ambiance and ignoring the gameplay entirely. In fact, I think most adults would happily fall into that category because I think they would surely find the simplicity of the gameplay pretty unstimulating. And whenever the itinerary gets posted anywhere online, everybody's first question is like, well, are you allowed to just miss stuff on the schedule? And the answer is technically yes, but practically no. By this I mean you're not in high school. You can have a full schedule on your phone and simply not show up for any of it.
They get to choose who they want to interact with, or they get to choose to sit and
YouTuber's
watch.
been around
So there's
a
so
while.
many different ways to engage.
does a
You
lot
don't
of
have to participate if you don't want to.
But remember, the immersive roleplay element was Disney's entire justification for jacking up the price so high. So if you're going to pay to go and not do the gameplay, you might as well just throw handfuls of cash down your garbage disposal. This is like asking, can you go to your local theater and buy 20 movie tickets only to sit in the lobby for 2 days straight? You probably can, but it would be really weird. But if one goes to the Star Cruiser and does participate in the gameplay, they might be sort of miserable because they'll be running on too little sleep, never have a moment to relax, and not necessarily feel fulfilled by the events they do attend. And of course, there was no transparency about which events might be cool and have some kind of special effect or interactive element, and which events were just short story tableau, which you would witness from a middle distance over a sea of other guests' heads, unless they started without you. I personally really like an active vacation. I like a theme park trip, an excursion around a city, a museum, maybe an obstacle course. I'm not a spa person. I'm not a lie by the pool person. I'm not a get in the pool person. I'm not a pool person. I don't like pools. I can't swim. This was a bad example. My point is, I didn't think I would be easily exhausted by an experience like this because I'm usually well prepared to be on my feet and doing exciting things all day on little or no sleep. I mentioned that our cabin was really convenient to the dining room, and I also mentioned that I didn't have much of an appetite by dinner on day 2. I kind of buried the lead on that. Truthfully, I felt really, really run down by that point in our trip. I actually got up from our table in the middle of dinner and ran back to our room because I thought I was going to throw up. And then when I got to the room, I was like, oh, no, I'm not. That's not what this feeling is. So I just kind of like stood there in our doorway, like enjoying that the room was quiet. I thought about taking some Tylenol, but that wasn't what was wrong either. I was just really exhausted. So yeah, instead I just ended up standing in our room for a while and like staring at my own reflection in the mirror of our tiny bathroom. And I gave myself a pep talk like, okay, it's the last night. I can't miss the finale. It's just a few more hours. And then I kind of like rallied and went back to dinner. I'm just glad this happened on our second night, so I didn't miss a second of the dinner show on night 1. But anyway, I hope from what I just described, you said to yourself, that sounds like a really weird thing to have happen on a luxury vacation experience, because it is. I have never had that happen before or since, while working, while traveling, anytime. The trip just like broke my body in some unfathomable way. And like, we didn't even utilize every scheduled minute of our trip. We had the latest wake up time on the final day. On day 2, we slept in a little and had a full breakfast. And we didn't even really drink. Like there were a lot of cocktails I wanted to try because they were themed, but I think I had 2 over the span of the first day and 1 in the afternoon on the second day. And then I just didn't have time for any more. So I think all things considered, we were a little better equipped to handle this than others might have been. And it still ran us ragged. I really can't imagine trying to do Star Cruiser with little kids, or if you yourself have any health problems. Like you could, and you could just accept that you were going to miss a lot of things in order to fit in breaks and naps. But there again, if you don't participate in something, you're throwing away $2 per person per minute. So here again, the price becomes an issue. If the hotel was cheap, or even cheaper, it would be way easier to say, just pay for the trip, do what you like, miss what you're not interested in, and you can always come back and do what you missed. But for what it cost, that was an entirely unreasonable suggestion. Part 14, the excursion. So like many real cruises, this experience has a shore excursion to Batuu. Batuu is the in-universe planet name for Star Wars land in Hollywood Studios. So on day 2, you have an excursion where you take a ship down to the planet. I'm trying to tell you that you take a bus to the theme park. Not to be a hater, but I actually think it's kind of stupid that in the meta narrative, a luxury cruise line or whatever intentionally go to Batuu. In universe, this location is supposed to be a backwater planet ruled by crime lords with blaster holes all over the walls and an active military presence. They try to make an excuse by saying the Halcyon took its maiden voyage here back when the planet was nice, but I don't buy it. I understand that we have to go to Batuu because that's what they already built for the theme park, but I personally think it would have been more immersive if they had pretended they were taking us to someplace more touristy like Naboo or Canto Bight, or maybe even Endor as a reference to the original Star Tours. And then in the story, we could be derailed by a resistance mission, or maybe the ship comes under attack and we're forced to stop in Batuu for repairs or parts or something. And the cast members could act all apologetic about the change in route and say things like, if you do decide to go planet side, please be cautious. This is a very rough planet. I don't know, that just seems more exciting to me. And also like an easier way to tie in gameplay missions. So this was another aspect of our grueling schedule. We were supposed to catch our shuttle to Batuu at like 9 a.m. I think they just randomly assigned different times to different cabins to try to keep the line from backing up too much because they only had like a couple buses. But the story hadn't ended until like 11 p.m. the night prior, and we got into sleep even later. So I wasn't going anywhere at 9 a.m. So this was the only time we just defied the schedule. We slept in a little longer, we got breakfast, and we were like an hour late. And it turned out it didn't matter. In fact, by taking the shuttle at 10 a.m., we were able to walk on with no line. There was a ton of discourse online about the shuttle. Everybody was roasting it because they found out through leaked images of the exterior that the shuttle was a box truck. And I guess there was some perceived indignity in putting high-paying guests in a box truck. To be quite honest, I don't understand that at all, and I think it's kind of stupid. Like, we all knew it wasn't going to be a real spaceship, right? So it was obviously going to be built in some kind of vehicle. So who really cares what kind of vehicle the themed seating area is built inside of? If they had instead scraped the innards out of a school bus or a limousine to build the exact same passenger compartment, would that make any material difference? So no, I couldn't care less that this shuttle was a box truck. Anyway, you go inside and it's themed looking to look like a little spaceship. I had heard they'd be using more simulated window tech, but they opted to instead not have any windows. I won't roast them too hard on that because I think having simulated moving windows in a randomly jostling box would probably make everybody puke all over each other. They do have a spaceship sound play and lights flash when the engines kick on, which I thought was kind of cute. But I'm going to be honest, I was disappointed by the shuttle, and here's why. I had heard from promo materials that it was going to be driven by a droid, which I guess canonically it is, but I had wrongly assumed that we would have a little window through which we would see a sliver of cockpit and then the head of a droid pilot. I wasn't expecting much, probably not a full body figure like they had in Star Tours, but they could have at least done like a head on a stick that could raise and lower and swivel side to side. We would only see a little bit of it from behind anyway, so it wouldn't need that much detail. A good example of this kind of thing is the King Kong ride at Universal Studios. They have animatronic drivers in every truck. Actually, they have a whole cast of different animatronic drivers. They all have different names and different personalities with different dialogue. It's crazy. But no, instead in this shuttle, they have a little square area that looks like it should be a window to a cockpit, but it's opaque and doesn't open. We hear the droid that's driving talking over the comm system, and there's a little plaque indicating that if we could see him, this droid would look like Rex from Star Tours, but we never do see him. It's so sad. I'm sure they logistically could have put a droid in there, and I'm sure some Imagineer suggested it, and then corporate decided they would just rather not spend the money to do it. And that is not an attitude I want them to have for an experience that costs this much. I feel like this is just another one of those relatively small touches that could have gone a long way. Upon arrival, you disembark into this little tunnel that's blocked off for only Star Cruiser guests, and in the tunnel, they have a kind of concierge setup, so you can grab free water bottles, and in our case, free loaner umbrellas because it was pouring rain.
Oh my god! It's nice that they gave us umbrellas. Not so bad. No!
I wonder if you have to return the umbrella.
I mean, I know so much.
Oh, it's cold now too. They allot a
guessing
good chunk of
so.
time for the theme park. You're meant to amuse yourself there until around 2 p.m. and the latest you can stay is 4. In that block of time, the buses between the hotel and the theme park run pretty much continuously. So if your family had never been to Star Wars Land, you would have flexibility to do all the upcharge experiences like the lightsaber, the droid, the cantina, shopping in general. But that would be a terrible waste of your time given how short the cruise is and how much it costs. I hope no one did that. Our plan was to only go to Batuu for the minimum time necessary to do all the stuff specific to Star Cruiser. The cruise package includes fast passes for the Millennium Falcon ride and the Rise of the Resistance ride, which is like a $20 value each, so that's something. And of course, the shuttle that takes you from the hotel to the park is a unique experience, so we had to leave the cruiser to do all that. This excursion is the first thing that happens on day 2, which means when you wake up, your app has put you on one of the story paths and populated a bunch of corresponding missions for you to complete. 2 of the missions are just to go on the rides. They work them into the story, so basically you get a text from a character on your storyline saying, I need you to report to this location. Scan your credentials at the gate for mission coordinates, by which they mean go to the right entrance and tap your band to use the fast pass that's been preloaded onto there. They've written the rides into every story path, so everybody gets to do those no matter who is texting them. If you're a Star Cruiser guest, they give you a special pin to wear so that employees in the theme park will know you're doing the hotel experience and can theoretically interact with you in character and stuff. I say theoretically because, of course, that just didn't happen for us. And for the record, that shouldn't be those cast members' responsibility anyway. They're not getting a performance bump, but I just bring it up because it's another one of those expectation versus reality things. But we were like trying to lean into the idea that things might actually be interactive. So when we went up to the ride at the fast pass thing, I was like, Captain Keevan told me to report to you. And I did not get the same energy back at all. They were just like, what? Scan your fast pass. And so I did, but I felt like an idiot again, is my point. Anyway, and imagine if you're the First Order, it's like Lieutenant Croy asking you to go spy on the Resistance or something. It doesn't actually matter. Basically, you use your fast pass, ride the ride, and text the character saying you did it, and they're just like, good work. Well, they're supposed to say good work. In my case, I got ghosted again.
Oh yeah, she's not responding.
Oh, that's normal.
Wow.
You want to take hostage?
Like she doesn't even care. Did she know how much I just did for her? Oh, wow. Nothing.
But you don't actually do anything. You don't even actually have to go on the ride. Like if it's broken down, you can just text and say you wrote it and they're not going to know. But you also have other missions while you're in the land, and these ones are interactive. I think we were offered 3 more missions, but we only did 2. You'll see in a minute. But all the other missions happen entirely in the app. I told you a little bit earlier about the Star Wars Datapad app game, out of which the Star Cruiser experience is built. And I told you about how its primary gameplay involved scanning QR codes on crates. Well, I'm sorry to say that that's what we'll be doing in Batuu today. Just scanning lots of crates. You go to your text in the app and decide what mission you want to do first, and you'll have a text from a character asking you to scan all the crates in a particular location.
We have to find these crates.
It's like kind of here, I think.
Okay.
Oh, look, a scan point.
Ah.
Tools. Scan. All right. Analyze.
You scanned the crate. Huh. All these crates.
For variety, some of these QR codes are in sneakier locations, like tucked into a corner or low on the ground. So that was our theme park day, crawling around on the ground, scanning crates in a torrential downpour.
This is horrible. Oh my god, it's so wet.
Juggling my phone, my camera, and the umbrella, having to tap the wet screen multiple times to get anything done.
It's like a rhythm game. Oh, but my screen is wet. Okay. Yay!
Yeah, that's getting to be a problem.
Yeah.
Wet screens.
Especially when the timing matters when you tap your screen.
I should also mention that the umbrellas they loaned us were very cheap and would sometimes randomly spring shut, soaking my electronics and also chomping on my head like a bear trap.
Ah, no! I need shelter. Oh my god, no.
It happened to my sister first, and to be quite honest, I thought it was like a skill issue, but then a couple minutes later it happened to me too, and we had 2 different umbrellas, so it was all the umbrellas. Our mission was for the Saja, so they wanted us to scan crates near the lightsaber shop.
Is that all she wanted from us?
Oh, it was a skill issue.
Let me check mine.
So we went to the place indicated in the picture on the app, and we scanned every crate, and nothing happened.
Where should we should go somewhere.
I thought I scanned everything.
Yeah, let's get out of here. It's too bad. It's just too bad. No, nothing.
Our foolish mistake is that we read the prompt asking us to scan the crates, and then we opened the scan function, and then we scanned the crates. It turned out we were supposed to read the prompt and then click the tiny question mark in the corner of the window, which looks like it's just a help icon, but then that actually opens the correct scan feature.
Okay, so click on her phone.
Oh my god.
Saja? Yeah.
Really?
Show map. And then like go to the question. Question mark. Confirm.
And then we do it again?
And then she texts you again.
Oh my god.
Please repeat it.
So we have to do the same thing twice?
I feel like we do now.
So the first time we'd scanned the crates and completed the puzzles and seen what was in them, it had been registering them to the theme park side of the app and not the Star Cruiser side of the app because it's all one app and the app is horribly designed. So we had to scan all the crates a second time.
This sucks. This sucks. Don't train enough to do this.
This time when we scanned the last crate, it had a holocron inside. And we got a text from the Saja indicating that we had completed the mission. While we were on our mission, we ran into a family having a totally separate issue in the app. For them, they had successfully gotten to the part of the app that scans the crates correctly, but there was a glitch where the final crate simply wouldn't scan, so they couldn't complete the mission.
Nope. Huh, maybe it's angle. Here, let me try. Sometimes if you tilt it, it'll angle like this. It'll scan better. Yeah, it's really not getting it.
Yeah.
Sophie didn't work either.
That's weird. They talked to the Star Cruiser concierge, and apparently it was a known iPhone glitch, and the only way around it would have been to borrow a loaner iPad from Disney, but they would have had to start the whole mission over. Their kids were really disappointed and didn't want to do everything over, so they told us they were just going to give up on that mission, which I think is really sad. Did you finish other missions?
Well, I'm almost done with this whole thing here if I just find where this precious cargo is. I did all the main Halcyon ones.
Has anything like happened when you finished them, or no?
No.
Okay.
No, what about you guys?
No. That's what I was asking. Anyway, at that point, we had our fill of scanning crates. We used our fast pass for the Millennium Falcon ride, which automatically counted as completing a mission for Hondo Onaka, a character who isn't on the Star Cruiser, but he's the main character of the ride. He's from one of the cartoons. And I personally don't like him. That's not related to anything. I just don't like him on the show. Anyway, we were helping him get coaxium, a spaceship fuel. Then we used our fast pass for the Rise of the Resistance ride, which is a very fun ride. As I mentioned earlier, that one automatically counted as completing a mission for Captain Kevin. We had another mission in the app from Sammy. He wanted us to steal a TIE fighter. So instead of scanning QR codes on crates and doing phone puzzles, we would have been linking to the Bluetooth and control panels and doing phone puzzles. And we had another mission from Lanka Mock, but I don't know what she wanted. I didn't open the text thread. At this point, we'd been in the park getting rained on for hours and we were over it. So we went back early and changed into dry clothes and had a glorious buffet lunch. But in the interest of fairness, I watched a bunch of vlogs to see what the other missions we didn't get would have been like. And long story short, they were all roughly as boring as the one we did. On one hand, that's good because it means we weren't cursed to have the one boring mission. But on the other hand, that's sad because every mission was the boring mission. I heard there was at least one mission that sends you to the cantina to collect a message from the barkeeper, and that sounded a little interesting because the cantina is a cool place with a robot inside. And they built the cantina really small to cut costs, so you usually can't get in there without booking a reservation months in advance. But I found this vlog where they got the cantina mission. Lanka Mock texted saying, go to the cantina and show them this message to receive information from Oga. Oga is the alien bartender. She's like an off-screen character. Like there was a ton of concept art to do like an animatronic or maybe a walk-around suit, but then Disney cheaped out at the last minute, so now you just hear about her.
That's her office right up there.
Okay.
She can see every move I make, so you can trust me.
So this group goes to the cantina and they show the text at the door.
I think that we're going to be able to get inside Oga's cantina. Okay, we were not allowed to go in the cantina, but the host out front gave us this with the code on the back that you scan.
Yeah, it turns out that because they don't have a reservation, they're not allowed to go inside. The person at the host stand just hands them a coaster with yet another QR code to scan, and that completes the cantina task. Where is the immersion? There's so much stuff like that. Like this guy gets a task to shut down the engine outside of Ronto Roasters. This is a food counter with pork wraps, and for theming, they have a spit of meat turning under a repurposed pod racer engine. The engine plays engine sounds and flickers red lights, so it looks like it's real. So he's been tasked with shutting it down. What a simple effect to temporarily halt the lights and the sound effects. It's not very complex, but at least it's microscopically better than scanning crates, and it feels good to feel like you've affected something in the physical environment. But when this guy does it, the app tells him he's succeeded in shutting the engine down, and it doesn't even shut down.
Shut down the engine. We did it. Looks like it's still going to me, but I'll tell it that I shut it down. Finally, some peace and quiet. That's what they said.
All of the Batu missions are optional, but whether or not you do them determines which cutscenes you unlock when you return to the ship that evening. Theoretically. We saw that reflected in one case. We completed the crate scanning mission for the Saja, so we got summoned to the lightsaber training pod to meet with Rey. She showed us a holocron and then was like, did any of you guys scan a crate with this in it? And then a bunch of people were like, yeah, because obviously a million people got the exact same crate scanning mission that we did.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So many thank you.
But some people didn't say yeah because they'd seemingly just been dropped into the scene at random. So maybe it didn't even matter that we had done that mission. Maybe it was that broken clock thing I was talking about earlier, where it was just a coincidence that something we had done happened to align with something that happened later, especially because that was the only time that happened for us the whole trip. Anyway, in this scene, Rey opens the holocron and a hologram of Yoda comes out.
Open this, you have. Strong with the force you are.
To the naked eye, this effect looked really good. I knew it had something to do with these smooshed looking Yodas on the ceiling angled inward, which is why I filmed them, but I didn't know in the moment how they were pulling it off. Apparently, the effect works like one of those LED alarm clocks. It's a dark room, so you can't see, but on camera, you can see the little metronome arm come up and start swinging. Then Yoda is projected down diagonally from the ceiling so that each of the two halves of the room can see it. I thought that was neat. Like I said, in person, it looked very authentic.
May the force be with you. Always.
A lot of people got this scene. Like there were a bunch of people in our room, and there was another group watching the scene right before us, and another waiting to watch it right after us. But I'm told not everyone got to see it, just like a third of the people there. So that's a little special, I guess. If we didn't get to see the Rock scoot around in the climate simulator, at least we got to see this. So yeah, out of our entire time on the Star Cruiser, that was the only time anything we did in the gameplay even remotely reflected in any story moment ever. That one occasion. Don't get used to it. Our other unlocked scene was the Sammy scene, even though we had elected not to do that mission. He was like, thanks for helping me steal that TIE fighter, guys, but like we didn't do that. He asked us to, and we callously ignored him.
While you're opportunity, you saw the first order fighter ship, the TIE Echelon. Listen, it would mean a great deal to me if you would, those who installed that would reveal themselves now. Yes? Wow, thank you so much. I could not have done this without you.
So the Sammy scene was a bridge mission, and we got to use all the little arcade game consoles again, so that's fun. But it does kind of highlight another failure of the Choose Your Own Adventure system. In the end, it didn't matter that we had done those missions for Hondo or the Captain, and it didn't matter that we hadn't done the mission for Sammy. The illusion of free will was shattered. If anything, our schedule seemed to be determined by when we were booked for our dinner seating and which scenes had spots left over. And that didn't feel like living my Star Wars story. Part 15, the finale. This chapter contains spoilers for the Galactic Star Cruiser. Or, I mean, more than there have been in other chapters. And I guess you're not going now anyway? Who cares? Why am I saying this? Immediately after dinner on the second night, I got the moment I had been waiting for all weekend. The fake in-story alarm started blaring.
We lost power. What happened? Wait, is Red in here?
Red alert! Red alert!
Oh my gosh!
Okay, so I'll just remember the muscle
And we were all instructed to go to our muster stations in the atrium. I was so tired, but I was also excited.
This is a ship.
Travelers, get to your muster station. It's not a trip. Keep your whole traveling party together.
Is it bad? No, it's gonna be okay. We get to the atrium and find out Lieutenant Croy knows there are Resistance fighters aboard, so he's taking control of the ship. He has his stormtroopers haul Sammy away, and Kylo Ren arrives to torture us. Rey comes to save the day. They have a big lightsaber fight. There's a lot of back and forth. I will say I was very caught off guard by this one part where Kylo Ren slams poor Rey's head into a banister. They even play like the hollow thump sound effect. I feel like the films were very careful to have him only fight her with the Force and a lightsaber, the more whimsical forms of fighting, presumably because kids' movies are very aware of the optics of a big man putting his hands on a little lady. So I just think it's funny that this concept completely escaped the theme park choreographer. Kylo finds out about Yoda's holocron and tries to take it. Rey gets the upper hand and runs away. This lightsaber fight is where all the budget went. It had all the kind of stuff I had been hoping to see all weekend, by which I mean they had used the fact they were purpose building this environment to rig it with special effects that were relevant to the story. They weren't sorcery or anything, like you could for the most part look at the effects and know exactly how they were doing it, but it was still fun. Kylo tries to use the Force on us and they use sound effects and flickering lights to convey this. Rey pulls out the lightsaber they had in all the ads, the one that actually comes up out of the handle like in the movies, and you can see she's super delicate with it and immediately sets it down out of sight and switches for the stunt lightsaber that can withstand being whacked into things. But that's fun. The holocron is in the hands of one of the Saja in the crowd below, and then Kylo Ren starts trying to take it with the Force, but then Rey Force pulls it into her hand all the way up on the balcony. This would happen so quick in person that I was like, how did they do that? But near as I can tell, it's a combination of misdirection and a pair of collapsible props. The Saja yells to get your attention, makes a throwing motion toward Rey, and the holocron flattens and goes up their sleeve like the birdcage in the Prestige. Then a sound effect calls our attention back to Rey, who is now holding a holocron, so your brain fills in the blanks and you imagine you've seen it soar into her hand. Enhanced further by the NPCs placed throughout the crowd who swing their heads in an arc as if they can see it flying. Rey's holocron is also collapsible and it comes out of the railing in front of her. During the lightsaber fight, they have it choreographed so that they hit the banister with their swords at certain points, and at those points in the banister, there are these little spark shooting machines, so it looks like the lightsaber is hitting the metal and sparks are flying. My personal favorite is when Kylo Ren uses a Force pull to bring Rey over to him, and they have a little conveyor belt that drags her along the walkway. I just think it's so cute in its simplicity, but everybody was hollering at it, including me. I mean, maybe the reason everyone was so hyped is because we had been treated to so few special effects the rest of the time, so we forgot anything like that was on the table. But still, one of the biggest effects is when they have this big chandelier fixture at the top of the atrium break out of the ceiling and swing around. But I do think that was one of the only special effects that fell flat because there was too much else going on when it happened. A lot of people seem to not really process it when it's happening or know to look up there. It also doesn't help that, as I said before, Kylo Ren's dialogue is not pre-recorded. They have a real guy talking through a voice changer, and this makes it a little hard to understand what the heck he's saying at all times. So when he starts using the Force in the atrium, he threatens Captain Keevan by saying, "You'll talk when they scream." At least I think that's what he says. I think the idea is that that's the audience's cue to pretend they're being Force tortured and scream. But on our cruise, I think no one understood what he said or what he was doing because I yelled and nobody else did, and it was embarrassing, which is kind of its own form of Force torture.
You talk when they scream.
They had a lot of moments in the finale where some of the characters called out guests by name, which I thought was cute. Like they thanked their allies, or in Croy's case, he kind of playfully roasted guests who had been a nuisance.
I have had help from some of your passengers. And where are you at? And a loyal colleague and terrible spy.
Nobody mentioned us because, you know, none of the characters knew who we were because we didn't get to participate in the game. But I can imagine how it would feel really exciting if that did happen. So that's fun to imagine. I think it also helped that everyone had just had this intense 2-day schedule with many people running on very little sleep and everyone having paid so much money to be there. So it was a very receptive crowd. Everyone was screaming and cheering really loud for everything, which made it way more fun. Anyway, with all that said, I don't actually think these special effects reflect a high enough budget for what they were charging. To be clear, they were cute, and I liked it as a show in a vacuum, but it doesn't at all justify the price tag. But just looking at it as like a show that you might catch at Disney World in the middle of the day, I did think it was effective and fun to watch. They also had a couple callbacks to earlier in the story. Like at one point in the fight, Rey is struggling, and the Saja have us all yell together as one to give her our energy, just like we learned in lightsaber training. And there were some good twists, like Rey gets disarmed, suddenly someone shoots at Kylo Ren. It's Chewbacca. Before he leaves, Kylo Ren gives an order to kill us all.
This is really some are loyal to the First Order.
But then one stormtrooper aims directly at Lieutenant Croy. He unmasks, and it's Sammy in disguise. I really appreciated that they found a way to use all these supporting characters in the finale, not just because it's competent writing, but also because it made the staging of the show better. I was right at the front of the room, so I had a great view of all the stuff happening on the balcony, but missed some of the crowd moments because I couldn't see over people's heads. People in the back of the atrium would have had a more obstructed view of the stuff happening up high, but then they would be excited to have characters and story moments happening right next to them. So I think that was a good equalizer to make sure that no one viewing area felt like a lesser experience. I wish they had considered every show so carefully. So after the lightsaber fight is done and Kylo Ren leaves, we get a long wrap-up of all the supporting characters. Lieutenant Croy sees he's defeated, so he calls his commanding officer and says that there's nothing to report on the Halcyon, so they'll leave us alone. Captain Keevan gives a big speech wherein she awkwardly forgives everybody who helped the First Order, so nobody feels bad that their side lost.
Some of you received and relayed messages from the Resistance, and others aligned themselves very strongly with Lieutenant Croy. Allegiance can be a powerful thing when we feel strongly about a cause. We all think we're doing the right thing, or we wouldn't do it. But right now, the right thing is to come together. We all share one galaxy. Am I right?
Gaia escapes with the Sacred Stone to return to her people. Sammy is now a hero of the Resistance. Rey intends to bring Yoda's holocron to Leia to bring people hope. I love how awkwardly big the holocron is and how she just casually tucks it under one arm like a basketball. SK has the message from Yoda saved to their memory bank, so they must go with Rey. Linka Mock is sad to say goodbye, but bids them a fond farewell. I hope this doesn't mean SK died between this hotel and the Rise of Skywalker, because it's not like we see them again. Where did you put the droid, Rey? This is like when Disney lost my droid. They can't keep getting away with this. I was really tickled that Captain Keevan has this moment with the autopilot.
You may be a master of hyperspace, but I need somebody who can move a little quicker. Watch, this one's on you.
My pleasure, Captain.
I guess the ship's autopilot computer also had a narrative arc. Totally missed that one. And this last one is my very favorite. I said earlier that the Imagineers mentioned a romance story on board, and I'd assumed that it was between Wraith Cole and Lenka Mock, but I was wrong. So during the finale, Wraith Cole stands up and is like, now that he has learned to believe in himself or whatever, I am signing the guitarist Sandro as my new star act, and he will perform throughout the galaxy with his new girlfriend, Wani.
Sandro and Wani!
Yeah, it turns out all along these two characters had a whole romance plotline going on, which had gone completely over my head. I guess I was too dazzled by Wani to notice. The captain congratulates us all on a successful voyage. They start projecting a fireworks show outside the space windows and playing Star Wars score. So this is basically the end credits. As everyone is drawn forward into the bridge to watch the fireworks, the characters discreetly make their way out of the atrium, never to return. And the guests are told that a farewell dessert reception awaits in the cafeteria. After the finale, we were so tired and not at all hungry, and I think a lot of people felt the same way because it seems like a lot of them went directly back to their rooms. But we've gone to and documented everything else we possibly could, and I'm a completionist, so I thought we had better go. You know, what if there are new menu items? What if something cool happens? And it turns out I'm super glad we did. As we were sitting down with our blue popcorn and sci-fi flavored foams, who should appear but the happy couple, Sandro and Iwani, here to debut their first single.
So we travel quite a distance.
She sings. Who could have known Wani had the voice of an angel? Not me, because I didn't know she was singing in the Gaia set because I couldn't see her.
This is where we're meant to be.
I loved this performance, and the reception was open seating like at lunch, so we got to choose our own Star Wars table, and it just so happened we had picked one with a fantastic view. So even though I had effectively missed the Gaia performance, I did at least get this opportunity to see Wani play her alien instrument and sing a song, which was what I had most wanted to see the whole trip. Also, the song was very catchy.
They gotta drop that single on Spotify. They do.
This was such a good way to go out. The definition of ending on a high note. So yeah, I wouldn't have any improvements to suggest about the finale chunk of the night. That was all really fun. It might have been more meaningful to me if I'd been allowed to engage with any of the story beforehand, but taken in isolation, it felt like a perfectly fun theme park show. Part 16, Cut Corners. So in 2006, Disney launched an interactive adventure in Epcot, the Kim Possible World Showcase Adventure. This attraction would later be rethemed several times to other Disney Channel shows, but that's not important. What's important is the gameplay. Guests borrowed flip phones because it was 2006, which were programmed to show short video clips leading them through an adventure around the World Showcase. They would look for clues planted throughout the physical environment, sounds and then enter them into the phone to trigger scenes. Sounds would play out of speakers planted throughout the park, objects would move in the shop windows, one scene flooded with water, little character figures would pop up along the skyline or in other places that were out of reach to guests. They wouldn't have to worry about them being manhandled or broken or injuring someone, but the ability to affect change in the real world made the gameplay more satisfying. At one point, you would say a code phrase to a cast member and they would hand you a tea bag with the code word on it, because this part of the adventure was set in the tea shop in the England pavilion. In another mission, you get a golf ball, which you have to drop down a chute. Tiny props, which Disney doesn't have to worry about you stealing or breaking, but which make for a more tactile experience. For every iteration of this game, Disney has secured a phone company as a sponsor, but also I doubt the budget was terribly high to begin with anyway. And yet you'll notice that in this game, all these little moving elements were added into an environment which didn't originally have them, and which wasn't even built to accommodate them. They had to go and create props, drain fountains, install all these moving elements to complement the game, and then they had to overhaul it every time the theme of the game changed. A game which is free to play with your park admission. So what I'm saying is I just don't understand why we don't see elements like this in the Star Cruiser. In this case, the entire building, top to bottom, was built with gameplay in mind, and yet, other than some special effects in the finale, the physical environment is so bare, so unaffected by anything you do. No moving pieces, hardly even any interactive screens, no props to use. When you're using your phone, which is most of the game, you're only using your phone. Nothing in the app is triggering any reaction in the physical world. It might be earning you trust points with the actors, but that's only if it works correctly, and sometimes it doesn't. So let's look one last time at that Star Wars Datapad app game, which nobody liked. I played it as soon as they rolled it out in Star Wars Land, and I remember being so shocked by how little it utilizes the physical environment. You scan QR codes on crates, static props, and then can't do anything with the digital items inside. You hack panels, but once you do, nothing happens. The app just says, "You did it! You hacked the panel!" As you can see here, I've characterized the app as having a very feeble voice because it's so boring. And the overall gameplay is just earning you imaginary currency to spend on nothing. Sometimes when you hack a panel, the prop you're standing near plays a short sound effect.
Short range antenna used for short range communication. Okay, pressing that, and there is just, yeah, you got to do like a lot of, okay, access granted. It's right up here. This transistor tower should be now transmitting. I think it just did it. That's pretty cool, dude. Yeah, right there on the app. Yeah.
And sometimes when they're feeling particularly ambitious, a light blinks on, but that's it. There were several points where I really did get my hopes up that something was going to happen. The app would tell you were hacking a specific prop, like a ship way up on the skyline or a droid in one of the storage lockers in the shop. It would feel marginally more interactive if, once you completed your task, that distant ship could like lower some flaps on its wings, or the droid could start turning its head around, but they didn't bother doing anything like that.
This is MV12, BB unit, and now going in here on the app to adjust this. Okay, come on, adjust. There we go. Transmitting. Oh, here we go. Okay, it did something.
And despite costing so much more than park entry, the hotel displays a similar lack of effort. It's astounding to me that, for how much the hotel cost, for how ambitious they claim to be, for how long it spent in development, the Galactic Star Cruiser's gameplay wasn't even a lateral move from the Kim Possible World Showcase adventure. It was somehow less. Obviously, I'm not trying to ignore the advancements made here. For example, instead of flip phones, we're now using our own state-of-the-art smartphones. And of course, the environments were pretty, the implementation of live actors was refreshing, Uani's animatronic costume head was wonderful, but it often felt like they were doing the least. Like, we'll build pretty rooms, but we won't put anything in them. We'll do one droid. We'll do one alien and we'll stop there. My sister told me that when she saw Wani, she was like, "Oh my god, that's amazing." And that's only the first alien we've seen. Imagine what else they've got. And then they had nothing else. And really, that feels calculated to me. The Star Cruiser feels like it was designed to have just enough cool stuff to put in a TikTok.
We saw Chewie hiding from the First Order, and SK, who's the droid on board, and the captain of the ship. And then we made our first jump into hyperspace of the trip. There was drinks and snacks in the lobby, and the captain gave a speech.
Interact with otherworldly characters on board. See scale model of the Halcyon. Dine at the Crown of Corellia.
I've got 2 missions, took me to battle the First Order, stop by Oga's Cantina, and pilot the Millennium Falcon.
And then everyone at home sees that and thinks, think how much more there will be if I go. But they don't realize that that's it. And with all that said, I think it's finally time. I think you're ready now. Let me take you to the cargo hold. That's right. Remember the cargo hold? We still haven't seen what's inside. We'll go there now. Beep, 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 beep. I've just given you access. I didn't get access to the cargo hold until the evening of our last night. And as with all things, it just kind of happened. I didn't earn it. I just realized suddenly that I could go in, but I was very excited. The rooms I'd seen so far had underwhelmed me because I really wanted something to investigate. Everything was too sterile. No room had any hidden depths. You could look around a room in 30 seconds and see everything you needed to. But what more cluttered place is there than a cargo hold? What better place to find lost or hidden things? And the fact that it had taken so long to get access. It must be a grand prize indeed. No spoilers, but I actually had an idea of what it might be. Earlier, I compared the Star Cruiser's room prices to those on a new Disney cruise ship, the Disney Wish. This ship was being built concurrently with the Star Cruiser and had its own Star Wars themed experiences. One of them was a part of the ship's Kid Club, and it was called the Star Wars Cargo Bay.
Let's talk about the Star Wars Cargo Bay. There are critters and creatures in there. So much fun.
Kids are tasked with taking care of these creatures as they're being transported to Batu. I think this time we really raised the level of immersion.
At the time of my Star Cruiser visit, the Disney Wish had not yet launched, but I had seen some behind the scenes material, and I could see that for the Star Wars Cargo Bay, they were building animatronics of various Star Wars creatures. So now, aboard the Star Cruiser, I had already seen the engineering room, which had turned out to be a simple, kid-friendly minigame. And so I thought, the cargo hold must be something like that. Like maybe there are a bunch of cages with creatures and control panels next to each cage, and you can toggle some switches to refill the critter's water dish or adjust the humidity to make it more comfortable, and they could make the water refill, or they could fill the cage with steam, and then the critter makes a sound to let you know you did a good job and maybe like wiggles a little bit. Those games sound pretty basic, but I love animatronics, and I've been hoping to see a lot of them all weekend and had instead seen very few of them. So to me, having a bunch of simple animatronics in cages would have made the room interesting. I thought, if they'll build some for a cruise ship that costs a lot less, surely they'll make some for the Star Wars Galactic Star Cruiser.
Oh my god. Correct prediction. Animatronic?
There's not even QR codes to scan. It's less than I thought. Okay, so the cargo hold was basically just a closet. It was just crates. There was nothing to do inside, and physically it was really small. I guess at some point they may have had a story moment in there, like maybe some guests got to meet a character inside for a conversation, but nothing happens in there. It's just a very small room decorated primarily with crates. They did have this one Easter egg.
Oh my God! Wait, get a shot of that. That's George Lucas's cameo. It's an ID. George Lucas left his ID behind. But see, he's in his senator hat. That's his in-film cameo. That's a fun Easter egg. I'm not sure what else.
I guess that's impressive in the sense that there were so few Easter eggs in the rest of the ship, but still an extremely sad end to this saga.
Wow, I really thought it was gonna be like an activity. I didn't think it would be that fun, but I thought it would be something.
Part 17, was it worth it? When it comes to the Galactic Star Cruiser, I've seen a lot of people be really dismissive over the subject of quality and price. Like, they're mad that it's expensive, but then they'll also say things like, who cares if it's bad? It's the new Fire Festival. Everybody dropping that much money on this is a millionaire who deserves to get scammed, etc. But in my experience, that's not at all the demographic of people who booked the hotel. From what I've encountered personally, most of the people who went were middle-class families who splurged on a trip. Families do that a lot on Disney vacations because these experiences have been successfully established in American culture as a rite of passage, something you have to do at least once before your kid is grown. And that brings an implied deadline. You must find a way to get to Disney World before your child is too old to believe in the magic.
Lucy at 4.5 and you, together for a limited time only. Don't wait to make the memories that will last a lifetime at Disney Parks, the place where dreams come true.
So emotionally, a lot of parents of young kids think you only live once, kids grow up fast, these years are precious. Let's drain the savings account, max out the credit cards, let's do whatever it takes to make this happen. I acknowledge that these aren't poor families. They're fortunate enough to have savings accounts and lines of credit in the first place, but they're not wealthy, and for many, taking a Disney vacation means taking on a financial burden or risk. Maybe you'll be in a precarious position the next time you have car trouble. Maybe you go into debt to pay for it. Maybe there are just material comforts in your day-to-day life that you sacrifice for a long time to save up. And with that in mind, yeah, it does matter to me emotionally whether the people doing that get their money's worth. Obviously, the Star Cruiser was leagues beyond what even a typical Disney World trip would cost, but I believe that in rolling out the experience, Disney was essentially cashing in decades of goodwill. Disney has always had high prices, but they also have a reputation for quality. This was more than they've ever charged for an experience before, so the logic followed that this would be the greatest experience they've ever offered. Around the time it opened, the number one question I saw everyone ask about the Galactic Star Cruiser was, is it worth it? And after my own trip, I watched a lot of other people's reviews, and I saw that most of them, especially the ones who went for free, seemed to just say, if you have the money, it's worth it. And that answer is so unhelpful, and, in my opinion, willfully obtuse. Things have value. Something either costs a fair amount or it doesn't. Like, I'm willing to bet that a lot of middle-class families technically have access to $6,000 in savings or in assets, but they don't want to waste that money. If they spend it, they want to know that they couldn't have had a better value or a better experience doing something else with it instead. Like, okay, I love Taco Bell nachos. I love them so much. At time of filming, those cost a little under $3. If someone asked me if they were worth it, I would say, yes, certainly. If tomorrow they suddenly cost $20, I would immediately be able to say, oh, no, they're not worth that. I wouldn't say, well, I really like them, so I suppose if you can afford it, they're worth it. I would say, no, they're worth around $3, maybe up to $5 if I was desperate. Do not spend $20 on those unless you're watching this in the future, and because of inflation, Taco Bell nachos are now that price. Hello, traveler. I'm so happy you still have Taco Bell. So anyway, I think it's really interesting that a lot of people magically lost their ability to conceptualize value as soon as they were gifted an expensive trip by a big company. Listen, I know you have to play nice if you want to stay on the PR list, but if you're not using that access to give an honest review, then what's the point of being there at all? What good are you to anybody? Have you no sense of integrity? No self-respect? So, was it worth it? I've been to many theme parks, many themed experiences, paid for many, specifically Disney theme park themed experiences. I've been a repeat customer because a lot of the time I do think it's worth what they're charging. And I've come to understand that with Disney, you can always expect to pay inflated prices compared to what you would pay another vendor for a similar product. I can pick something up in a Disney gift shop and usually guess within $1 what overpriced amount they're charging for it. What I'm saying is I understand the Disney price scale. I know the value of specifically Disney experiences. And you better believe I've seen a lot of defenders of the Star Cruiser trying to justify the price, some of whom went for free, had friends who helped build it, or literally worked there.
While I may have some personal involvement with the Star Cruiser, I feel I have a responsibility to my amazing followers and this TikTok community to quickly break down what's included so you can come to your own conclusion if it's actually worth the price tag.
So anyway, they always try to do an itemized cost breakdown, inflating the value of each item in the column as they go, like comparing the cost of the room to the price of Disney's most luxurious hotels, even though the Star Cruiser rooms aren't nearly as nice.
And a theme park view, because you're getting views of the galaxy and going into hyperspace. So when you do that, and an average of $1,250 per night, that would be a total of $2,500 for both nights on the Halcyon.
Forgetting that hotels charge per night, not per person. Pretending that the character story moments have the same monetary value as 22 hours of consecutive Broadway shows.
The Galactic Star Cruiser is a literal 2-day Broadway show that you become a part of.
Doing the math, because a typical theatrical show is around 2 hours, that's $1,650 you're paying for the live entertainment.
Which, no matter how talented the performers are, is simply not the case. Pretending that your car getting valet parked once is a $200 value, even though most guests arrive by taxi anyway. And then after all this, when they still fail to match the lowest possible quoted price for a Star Cruiser trip, they'll just add something at the end like, also it's unique, which is worth the rest of the dollars. For the record, I consider all of this an exercise in futility. The entire point of flat rate bundled experiences like cruises or all-inclusive resorts is that by paying for everything as a lump sum, you're meant to be getting some kind of deal. The company is also getting a deal in the sense that they know none of your trip money is going to competitors and it's all going directly to them, which is why bundles like this are so common. I also think it's ridiculous that these cost breakdowns itemize so many of the amenities. You can't say a hotel room is worth $600 a night and then also itemize the cost of the customer service, the valet parking, and the snacks in the lobby, because at any good $600 a night hotel, that stuff would be included anyway. So I promise you, I'm keeping everything in mind for my value estimate. I'm keeping in mind that the room, while tiny, is unique. I'm keeping in mind that there are interactive performers on board, that the food was yummy, that there were mini games, that we got a couple hours in the theme park, that Disney prices are inflated. I'm factoring it all in. And let me be frank, in my opinion, the experience I had was worth approximately $800 total per adult. $1,000 maximum, and kids should cost less. But during Star Cruiser's entire existence, depending on whether you went in summer or winter, and depending on how many people you felt like cramming into that tiny room, you could expect to pay anywhere from 2 times to 4 times that amount. And that's just not worth it for what it was. If they'd offered a hefty discount or extended the duration of the experience, I might feel differently, but they didn't, so I don't. Also, obviously, if the Star Cruiser was a cheaper experience, it wouldn't have mattered so much that the gameplay element was so unreliable. You would think of the cost as covering the underwhelming room, the nice food, and the access to the theme park rides, and the gameplay would just feel like a bonus. So you'd feel a lot more comfortable sitting it out if it wasn't your speed, and less disappointed if you tried to participate and it didn't work properly. So no, I would never say it's worth it if you can afford it. I would probably say something more like, you might have fun doing this if you're so wealthy that you don't mind being overcharged for experiences to the tune of thousands of dollars. And even within that demographic, I would still add that the people most likely to have fun at Star Cruiser would be children ages 7 to 12. Based on my own childhood playing Neopets, I believe that's the age range in which kids have the most patience for completing busy work games in exchange for meaningless points. I also think kids at that age probably wouldn't be so cognizant of how little their choices were affecting their story outcomes, so they would be harder to disappoint. I mean, when I was little, my mom would play video games and hand me a controller that wasn't plugged in, and I had fun. So the Star Cruiser is kind of like that. I think the building is small enough with only one entrance and exit that you could pretty comfortably turn kids loose and let them run around the ship on their own, which would be a huge novelty to them. All the kids I saw around age 10 looked like they were having an incredible time, and their parents were just beaming with pride because I could tell they felt like they were super dad for setting the whole thing up. I also think the concept was broad enough that kids wouldn't even have to have an interest or familiarity with Star Wars to enjoy it. However, I would also keep in mind that kids might have an equivalent amount of fun if you book them a weekend at the Great Wolf Lodge for like $100 a person. Or if you're really determined to spend $5,000, you can just give it to them in cash and let them go ham at Chuck E. Cheese. At least that way they earn it all back in finger traps and novelty giant pencils. So I guess my point is that it would be truly hard to justify this expense, even if you fell within the best possible, highly specific demographic. And here's my supporting evidence. The hotel went out of business. If the value of something is what people are willing to pay, I can objectively say the Disney company charged too much for this experience because time showed that the majority of people on this earth were not willing to pay it. And yet, I should say that Star Cruiser did earn itself something of a cult following among a small number of people who went. In my time researching Star Cruiser, I noticed an interesting phenomenon throughout the fan groups. One talking point I've seen reiterated again and again is that even though Star Cruiser closed, it was a perfect product, it was too pure for this world, or the mainstream wasn't nerdy enough to appreciate it, or it wasn't advertised well enough, or it was totally worth the money, it wasn't Disney's fault, all you broke boys couldn't afford it. It was screwed by the marketing and the haters online, but actually everyone who went unanimously loved it. The thing is, that's just not true. Over the year and a half the Star Cruiser was open, I saw loads of comments from people who were very excited to go and left extremely disappointed. And wouldn't you know it, a lot of them had the exact same issues I did. General issues with the app glitching or freezing, character performers being too swamped to interact with, arriving 5 minutes early to a scheduled story moment only to find that it had begun 15 minutes early and they missed it entirely, beginning a dialogue tree in the app only to get left unread by the AI, barring them from joining any storyline, performing actions in the gameplay which didn't appear to register in their profiles, story outcomes that seemed random. Some guests went to guest services during their trip and were able to have these issues corrected, but sometimes doing so wasted hours of an experience where every second counts. And of course, there were other times when the IT department tried to help and simply wasn't able to and gave up. Plenty of people went home feeling like they had missed out on the experience and like they weren't able to properly participate in the story. The more I read, the more I realized that even guests who initially said they had a great time would later admit that the gameplay had not worked right for them. And I find this crucial to mention because, again, the gameplay is ostensibly the entire justification for the inflated price of this experience. In fact, not to put anyone on blast by playing clips, but if you watch a lot of the vlogs from people who enjoyed it, many of these people seem not to have even attempted the gameplay at all. A lot of people just took photos, hung out at the bar all day, or even did unsanctioned scavenger hunts they'd organized for their own group. And I'm not going to say none of that is fun, but how can you then say that's worth $6,000 when you could do all of that at your local Dave & Buster's? Despite the apparent frequency of the gameplay issues, whenever I saw people mention them in the fan groups, they would be quickly shouted down by other fans. They were often polite, but they would tell them that these issues were simply their own fault for somehow playing the game wrong. No one else has had these problems you're talking about, so clearly it's on you. You get what you put into it, so maybe you didn't try hard enough. You ruined your experience by trying too hard. You weren't a big enough nerd to appreciate it. You're a lying hater who's only pretending the Star Cruiser is bad, probably because you're jealous you couldn't afford it. The app doesn't do anything. You need to talk to the actors. The actors don't do anything. You need to use the app. You played the game wrong. You were supposed to pick one specific storyline to follow. You played the game wrong. You were not supposed to pick one specific storyline to follow. You must not have had an exciting enough costume. And my personal favorite, you must have the wrong personality. Finally, failing all other ways to blame the customer, people will just say, "Aw, it sounds like you were just unlucky. That's too bad because it was great for everyone else." And they say this as if it's acceptable for so many people to be unlucky in a way that breaks a $6,000 experience. So I'm just preparing you, if you see any diehard fans making any of these excuses in the comments, they're not good enough. Besides, none of them even apply to me. I dressed up, I'm good at immersive games, and I have possibly one of the best personalities in the world. I'm also going to go ahead and predict this now. The same demographic of people are going to see the words Star Wars Hotel in my video title and say, that just goes to show she knows nothing about it, and she probably didn't even go because she called it a hotel when it's so much more than that. Nothing she says even matters because we know she's so ignorant. We say this all the time, even though it literally is a hotel, and Disney first announced it as a hotel, and the general public knows it as the Star Wars Hotel. If I call my video this, no one's gonna click it, are they? So I can't wait to be gatekept for calling this what everyone knows it as and what it literally is. You're probably wondering where this defensiveness would even come from. From them, not from me. I'm not defensive. These people didn't build the hotel with their bare hands. Why did they care if I didn't like it? Firstly, I think it's just the sunk cost fallacy. If you've invested a lot of time into being a fan of something, you feel the need to defend it unconditionally. Secondly, for profit. Many of the vocal defenders of Star Cruiser are themselves theme park vloggers or podcasters. This is a content genre whose biggest selling point is often encouraging your fans to live vicariously through you as you go to Disney World every day and do experiences experiences they can't afford. In this way, the better the product looks, the more successful your vlogs will be. It's also a field where early access to new offerings can make or break your channel, so people desperately want to get on the media lists, and those on it desperately want to stay on it, which doesn't happen if you're critical. Some of the foremost Star Cruiser influencers were even themselves travel agents who sold Star Cruiser packages, so one could argue that there's an even more direct monetary incentive to make it look good. But I care most about the final reason. The price of the experience has forced fans to be very defensive over their decision to go. If you book a $5,000 theme park experience and then mention it to a random coworker, they're probably going to be like, "You're nuts. Everyone is talking about how this thing is way too expensive and will never be worth it." So once that's out there, you now have to enjoy this experience. Because if you go and then come home and are like, "It wasn't that good," or even "It was just okay," you worry that you'll look like a fool. And to that I say, I don't think any of you guys are fools. I mean, you were fooled in a literal sense, but that's not embarrassing. It's Disney that should be embarrassed for taking advantage of their fans. So by all that I mean, no, it wasn't.
First-rate fertilization. Visit weedman.com for a free quote.
Worth it. Part 18, why did it fail? After about 6 months of being open, that first wave of superfans and influencers who wanted to book the Galactic Star Cruiser dried up. Theme park busybodies noticed that the booking page on the website had more and more availability as time wore on. Guests visiting reported that the hotel was often running at half capacity, which was very apparent because they would cut the 2 dinner seatings down to 1, and you could still see visibly empty tables at that 1 dinner seating. Staff also started to report that their hours were being cut. Pretty much everyone following the story had correctly predicted that the Star Cruiser would see totally full bookings for only a few months while theme park news outlets and influencers got their fill, and then interest would wane. But because it was so widely predicted, everyone just assumed that Disney also expected this to happen, and they probably baked it into their initial price structure. Maybe it just cost so much because they didn't expect it to be booked all the time. And if Disney did want the hotel to be full, everyone just assumed they would adjust the prices lower, and that would bring the interest back up, and then they could reach some kind of equilibrium. But none of that ever happened. It's surprising to me how little Disney appeared to try to salvage this project. Even as sales declined, they refused to budge on the prices. They did offer some discounts in the last 6 months of operation, but those were only for Disney Visa card holders and members of their timeshare program, and even then, it was only when booking for specific dates. So yeah, it seemed like all along, Disney really had expected this hotel to keep costing over $5K and keep selling out. An unfathomable level of hubris, in my opinion. When this didn't prove to be true, I predicted that Disney was going to stay the course for a few more years and then retool the story and kind of relaunch the experience. You know, they could reuse all the effects but set it in a new time period and have characters like Darth Vader and the Mandalorian showing up. Then the people who had already booked the first time would have incentive to come back, and they would presumably unlock a whole new demographic of people who don't care about the sequels. But nope, they decided to just throw in the towel altogether. The news of the closure was very abrupt, as in they announced it in May and it was going to happen in September. This means at the time of the announcement, there were already dates on the booking calendar and guests had already reserved spots for dates which would now be canceled. So Disney immediately froze bookings on the website. They called any guests with existing reservations beyond the closing date and offered them either refunds or the first chance to rebook. And then once all those rebookings were done, very few spots remained for any new guests looking to book a room. And obviously there was demand for that because a lot of people were kind of curious about the Star Cruiser but thought they would have forever to decide to go. When they reopened booking to the public, all the remaining reservations were booked in a matter of hours. So as you can see, the last minute announcement of the closure screwed over both Disney and the fans. If Disney had announced a pending closure and given everybody like a year to get their fill of Star Cruiser, they probably would have been booked up that whole year. By closing it as suddenly as they did, they were leaving money on the table. This also seemed to be a snap decision. In March of 2023, Disney announced that instead of offering as many consecutive cruises as possible, running one after the other, they would start to offer only 2 bookings per week, with 3 days in between where the Star Cruiser sat empty. But when they announced that, they said the schedule change would take effect in October 2023. They even rolled out this new calendar on the booking website. So clearly at that point, they didn't yet anticipate that in October of 2023, the Star Cruiser would no longer exist. New merchandise products popped up in the gift shop throughout the final year, like this action figure of the AI droid from the console in the guest rooms. This didn't even become available until July of 2023. In early May of 2023, guests of the hotel reported seeing executives and Imagineers visiting the Star Cruiser. One assumes this must have been to assess how things were running or consider improvements. Maybe in hindsight, that could have been a sign of trouble in that the Imagineers could have been brainstorming ways to try to save it, but it doesn't feel like something they would bother with if they already knew the closure was imminent. And yet, the permanent closure was announced just 2 weeks after that visit. Executives obviously chose the abrupt closure date because the fiscal year ended on September 30th, and Disney's plan was to write the entire hotel off as a loss. The loss of the hotel would bring in a $300 million tax break, and they wanted it for that year. So in my opinion, the reasons the Star Cruiser failed were obvious. From the moment it was announced, everyone predicted it would fail. The marketing sucked. Not a lot of people even understood what it really was. It was way too expensive to an extent that the only buzz it received was mockery of the price tag, and this is all a surprise to no one. So I think the more constructive question is, why couldn't it be safe? The Star Cruiser was a project with so many fatal flaws, I think it would have been very difficult to salvage. Built by a company so confident in their inability to fail that they left no flexibility for adjustments down the line. The biggest obstacle to this experience's marketability was the ridiculous cost. So one of the most obvious moves to save the project would have been to lower the cost. Unfortunately, while building it, Disney was so confident in their ability to command a high price that they blocked off most avenues to ever do so. The physical building itself was constructed with very high prices in mind. It has only 100 rooms with a maximum occupancy of about 500 guests. The atrium is built to accommodate that number of guests with very little wiggle room. The only dining room can hold half the capacity of guests and relies on 2 separate dinner seating times with staggered lunches and breakfasts. Any hotel in the world has a baseline cost to run just by existing. A minimum number of cleaners, servers, and concierge you need on staff, a baseline cost to keep the lights on, and in this case, they're also paying the actors. Disney is accustomed to high profits on all their hotels, so with only 100 rooms, they would need to charge a lot per room just to make it worth their while. But they can't simply add more more rooms to lower the average cost because then they'd need to do a total overhaul of the rest of the structure. Common areas such as the atrium, the lounge, the activity rooms, the landings on each floor are fairly small. There are only 2 elevators with which to navigate between themed floors and only 1 functional elevator through which to access the lobby. I know it looks like there are 2, but reportedly the left elevator is actually just a dummy elevator. It's a maintenance access door. The atrium can hold the current maximum occupancy of hotel guests, but when it does, it feels pretty crowded. They rely on the gameplay a lot of the time to disperse the crowds into different areas of the ship, so you don't notice how physically small it is. So they can't drop the price without adding more rooms, but they can't add more rooms without remodeling the bulk of the building to make a bigger atrium, bigger lounge, probably several additional dining rooms unless guests are willing to eat dinner at very odd times. And for the record, I'm not telling you all this to justify Disney's prices. This is an unsolvable problem, but it was entirely voluntarily of Disney's making. But as it stands, they've got these problems baked directly into the loaf, and there's no easy solution. So if they can't add more rooms to drop the price, they could sweeten the deal by lengthening the voyage, even if for 1 additional day. But no, they can't do that either. They've already got a tricky situation with the character-driven story elements in that the character performers are limited to 8-hour shifts. In case you didn't pick up on it, they solved this problem on day 1 by having you arrive in the late afternoon, and on day 2 by sending you into the theme park for half the day. That's right, the theme park excursion was just a distraction. I know you didn't notice at the time because the gameplay was so compelling, but if they added a 3rd day, how would they distract you then? I personally would have appreciated downtime, but if everyone has downtime simultaneously, we've run back into the issue of both the rooms and the common areas being far too small. Another easily preventable issue. I've seen a lot of people saying maybe now that it failed, they'll just get rid of the roleplay element and open as a normal hotel, but they can't. Every other Disney hotel offers constantly running shuttle buses, taking guests to and from the theme parks and shopping center. Disney never bothered implementing this service for the Star Cruiser because they assume you're going to stay all day, and then also because it would have cost more money. But if the hotel isn't a LARP experience, one assumes you're going to spend most of your day outside. The problem is the Star Cruiser was built backstage of one of their theme parks. Remember, security had to stop our taxi at the gate and check everyone's IDs before we could approach? Doing this with a full bus of tired theme park guests all coming back at once after the fireworks show would be possible, but it would also be a logistical nightmare and an additional expense. Finally, the Star Cruiser lacks basic amenities all the other Disney hotels provide, like a pool and a fitness center, and you'll recall that the rooms are very small. This means that without the roleplay elements, not only would the hotel not command a very high price tag, it would reasonably be valued lower than any other hotel on property. The only way to balance out low room value would be to add a lot more rooms, and now we're back to all the problems with the building that I just told you about. Funnily enough, if you do want to stay at a version of the Star Cruiser that's just a hotel, you can still do that. In 2022, French theme park Futuroscope opened the Hotel Station Cosmos, which looks suspiciously familiar. A room there will run you about $250 a night, and they're actually bigger than the rooms in Star Cruiser. Aesthetically, the decor is so similar to Star Cruiser, it feels legally actionable, in my opinion. So it's very funny to me that the Hotel Station Cosmos was the one to stand the test of time. As for the physical remains of the Star Cruiser, in a 2023 interview, Parks Chairman Josh D'Amaro assured fans that something would be done with it after the closure. But he gave no indication as to what, which to me says that he didn't actually know and also probably was lying. If I had to look to the future of the hotel, here's my theory. I think they might open it up as an expensive dining location. You know, guests will make dinner reservations, check in at the gate in Star Wars Land, and then board the spaceship-themed buses to the hotel, but they probably have to build more of these or a bigger bus to accommodate everybody arriving at once. I acknowledge that the guests having to be transported by bus is an extreme hassle, but it's not practical to have people driving up and it's not walkable from anywhere, so I don't think there's anything else they could do for that element. When guests arrive, the wings of the building containing the hotel rooms will either be blocked off and used for storage or demolished and converted back to parking lot space. The command bridge will be a photo op, the lightsaber training pod will be closed because I can't think of a way for them to incorporate it while still putting through a high volume of people. Guests will eat in the dining room, they will watch a live singer, which they will all be able to see because they will no longer be seating people in the corner booths. Will they, Disney? Will they? And then the alarm will sound, they'll be told the ship has been boarded by the First Order and go to the atrium to watch an abridged version of the finale. Basically just the Rey and Kylo Ren fight using the special effects that are already installed. While they're watching the finale, a new group of guests is entering the dining room. Rinse and repeat 3 to 4 times per night. And then they charge like probably approaching $200 per person for the experience. Adults get 1 alcoholic beverage for free, and then it's like $99 for kids. The only other possible outcome is that it'll sit abandoned, growing mold. They'll use the dining room to host manager meetings or maybe new hire training seminars, and the hotel rooms for storage of bubble wands and balloons. That's the laziest solution, so that feels the most likely to me. Maybe that's what Josh meant by something. Part 19, the cast members. Cast member usually refers to actors, but in Disney vernacular, it's every employee who works there. And I just wanted to do a section on this to say, anytime the Star Cruiser felt deluxe to me, anytime I felt they had gone above and beyond to give a good experience, it was entirely through the efforts of individual cast members. It's kind of like that line from Jurassic Park where John Hammond says they spared no expense. In this case, I felt like Disney spared lots of expenses. Too many. But by contrast, I felt that the cast members spared no effort. I would like to think that maybe Disney paid them well above the going rate to reflect this extra level of service they provided, but I know in my heart they probably didn't. They were probably just like, you'll earn more in tips, you're lucky to work here, which, if true, boo! Anyway, let's highlight a few examples. In most cases, I was trying not to film people's faces unless they were a character performer, but I'll show footage where I have it. The merchandise cast members were so fun. This guy gave me a whole in-character guided tour of the store and everything in it, and he told me in character about how he runs a Gaia fan club on his homeworld, and then we talked a little about how we were both from Coruscant.
I am the biggest Gaia fan in the whole galaxy.
What's your favorite song?
My favorite song? Probably High Nanea or Calassia.
High Nanea is classic.
Yes, yeah.
The next day, I had a long conversation with these 2 gift shop cast members about stuff that was happening around the ship. They were really funny.
You don't think it's a stowaway?
Yeah, we'll be like 7 feet tall.
Right, how would they do that?
Hide. They would be fur everywhere. I think if we actually had a Wookiee, I would notice. We would have noticed already.
I kept coming back to look at the jewelry display because they were all sold out, and one of the cast members actually got manager approval to sell me the display model, so I got the very last one on the ship. This cast member in Batu had customized his own outfit for a little shoulder board. On our first visit to the lounge, our waitress brought out our drinks, and then also brought out a little dish of water for Skippy to drink, and the other employees behind the bar were really setting a great mood. They knew all the alien songs playing over the speakers and were singing and dancing along. our waiter Miguel at both dinners remembered our drink orders and had them waiting for us when we arrived the second night. He also told us the in-universe details about all the food and brought me that extra Mustafarian cheese. I went out into the atrium at night to film it while it was empty. I asked if I could step up on one of the little benches, and obviously I couldn't. I don't know why I asked. But then while I was filming, the cast member disappeared and came back with a little step stool to stand on instead. It was so nice. Now, this isn't really exclusive to Star Cruiser. I think Disney cast members tend to be this enthusiastic and helpful across the board, but it was an integral part of the experience, so I still think it's worth remarking upon. I should also mention that for the opening team, the vast majority of the Star Cruiser's hospitality staff were apparently kids doing the Disney college program.
Today, we are going to surprise some of our college program participants. They are going to be part of our opening team of the Star Wars Galactic Star Cruiser. I'm so excited. There's a lot of good energy.
This means that they were young workers juggling shifts with classes. For many of them, this was probably their first job ever in their entire lives. With such a new product and so many moving parts, they must have been constantly solving issues. And given the cost of the experience, the emotional stakes would have been much higher. So with that in mind, I think it's even more admirable that they did such a good job. But I also think it was really unfair of Disney to put them in that position in the first place. It's also weird because, like, that must have been a cost-cutting measure, right? College program is part-time, it doesn't come with health benefits, and the kids are housed by Disney, the cost of which is deducted from their paycheck. On top of all that, they have a lower base pay than regular employees. What's worse, allegedly Star Cruiser invented a work position called roamer. This would be a catch-all role responsible for pretty much every task in the hotel. Concierge, food, housekeeping, and bell services, or as I like to call it, smuggling luggage. This structure is obviously beneficial to employers, making each individual employee more expendable and also ensuring you can pack as many tasks into a single shift as possible. Requiring a single job position to juggle so many different responsibilities would of course command a higher hourly rate, but not if you hire a bunch of students who are new to the hospitality industry, who have no basis for comparison and can't tell when you're asking too much of them. And sure enough, of the 80 or so cast members hired onto this roamer job, allegedly only about 10 were full-time experienced workers, with the rest being college program students. The other issue is, and I'm not saying that the college program students provide worse service than other employees, but they're indisputably the cheapest labor available to Disney. So here again, why was Disney so determined to take the cheapest route on every aspect of the Star Cruiser? Anyway, I just hope that none of these people found themselves out of a job because of Disney's incompetence in launching this doomed hotel. But in my experience, when attractions close, Disney just shuffles the cast members to other locations around the resort, so they're probably okay. But sadly, I can't assume the same is true for the character performers. They had an especially difficult job, not comparable to anything else in the theme parks. They had to memorize collective hours worth of scenes and work in 2-day blocks where they were on stage for 8-hour shifts each day. They also had to familiarize themselves with the schedule to ensure they were at the right place at the right time, and be skilled at improv, and retain information like guest names and relationships to the characters. Despite all this, these actors allegedly had the exact same rates as other performers around the parks. These salaries aren't public information, so maybe that's just a rumor, but that is the word on the street from people who allege to be the employees. So if this is true, Lieutenant Croy takes on this massive workload for Star Cruiser, only to make the exact same rate as Gaston, who must only memorize 2 songs for a 30-minute stage show. That's part of why I get so miffed at people insisting that yes, the Star Cruiser price is fair, because it's exactly like a bunch of Broadway shows in a row. It's not. But also, do you think your money is going directly to Captain Kevin? Do you think she's getting paid as much per day as a lead in a Broadway show makes for several performances? Because I don't. And after all this, these actors were the first to be punished when the Star Cruiser underperformed. Actors are cast with roles in mind, so they aren't as easy to reassign as a housekeeping employee. So instead, they were allegedly hit with waves of layoffs. First when the staffing was scaled back due to low demand, and then again when the Star Cruiser was closed completely. And I realize that this is sort of the nature of acting as a profession. It's not the most stable job, but when the Star Cruiser did close, it did so very abruptly. Reportedly, a lot of the main character performers were hired on a year-long contractual basis, at which point their contracts may or may not be renewed. So they probably had a long-term expectation of when they'd be out of a job, and they probably didn't expect it to be in September of 2023. Allegedly, when the decision to close the Star Cruiser was made, the cast were given very little warning, only finding out they would be losing their jobs in a staff meeting, a handful of minutes before the media announcement, and just before starting a long shift. Even though so much was asked of them, and they really rose to the occasion, I feel like the cast members were the first ones thrown under the bus when the Star Cruiser failed through no fault of their own. And that feels bad. Part 20. You've been robbed. I'm not talking about the cost of the cruise. If I was, this section would have been called, I've been robbed. No, you've been robbed. We've been robbed. All of us. I mentioned way back in part 1 that Disney has been marketing the idea of themed immersive experiences for years. And one land they pitched as immersive was Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. I said that, but then I changed the subject. I put a pin in it, but I didn't tell you about the pin. It was a surprise. Like when you step on a pin. Pandora, the World of Avatar was pitched as immersive. Star Wars Galaxy's Edge was pitched as immersive. And at the end of the day, they're both about equally immersive. They both have large set pieces with really tall structures. They both have rides. They both have themed food and themed merchandise. And in the case of Pandora, that is roughly what was promised. But when they announced Galaxy's Edge, they promised much more. It was meant to be the most immersive theme park land ever built. Unlike anything you've seen before. Encounters that enhance the story. Roaming droids and aliens you can interact with.
This new 14-acre land will be occupied by many inhabitants, humanoids, aliens, and droids.
Now, the inhabitants of this remote frontier town, one of the last stops before wild space, will operate every store and restaurant. This outpost is filled with characters, alien creatures and droids. Now, you might have seen a favorite little droid rolling around in that video, and yes, BB-8 is one of the characters you can find there. Each experience will literally be out of this world, like this big fellow up here.
A personal reputation score that follows you throughout the land and impacts your day.
For you, our guests, every encounter will bring more of the Star Wars story to life in a place you can explore like never before. This is a living place, a place where your choices matter. and a place where you can even earn a reputation. Each guest is successful when they complete their mission.
Harco, whoever that is.
You might even end up on the list of a local bounty hunter. I hear that Harco's here is someone you particularly don't want to mess with. If your name ends up on his list, well, that might truly be a problem when you show up at the local cantina.
Early plans featured a dinner show venue called the Calicori Club, and some of the concept art is available to the public in the Galaxy's Edge art book. During construction, they appear to have cleared the land necessary for the Calicori Club before pulling back at the last minute and building the much smaller cantina, leaving the extra plot of land as a parking lot backstage. In 2017, Imagineers test drove interactive droids around Tomorrowland for a couple days, then abandoned that project as well. In 2023, they rolled out these little two-legged guys, but they immediately said they were only going to be used for special events and would not be a permanent fixture, and called them like an experiment. And to me, it was just code for, we built this to impress shareholders and you're not going to see them on the regular. Once in a blue moon, you can catch an R2-D2 rolling around, but I've been told that that droid is actually the same model that's for sale in the adjacent Droid Depot gift shop, so that's really just a product demo. In 2014, before Galaxy's Edge was even announced, Disneyland rolled out 2 limited-time interactive games. The first was Legends of Frontierland. The story of the game was that 2 different factions were fighting for territory in a western gold town. As a player, you had to choose which territory to support and buy land for your side. You could earn wooden nickels in a lot of different ways, running errands for characters, gambling at the saloon, or turning in a fugitive for a bounty. At the end of each day, a winner would be announced based on guest input, and the stakes would be raised by having character actors on each side of the conflict who you would interact with during your missions. These actors would then lead the day-end finale ceremony. In Adventureland, they had the Adventure Trading Company, which worked on a different system. You would pay money for a particular quest, and then at the end, you would win a tangible item, these little totems, which were said to have mystical properties. Some were really simple to get, like you would just buy a themed food and an item came with it. But others were much more involved. You'd pay for the quest in a gift shop, be handed an activity booklet, and then go around Adventureland looking for solutions to various puzzles, like decoding the ancient writing in the Indiana Jones temple, or talking to the Jungle Cruise skippers to complete a training course. Then you'd bring the completed booklet back to claim your prize. Both games were well received by guests, and Imagineers later confirmed that they were both actually covert playtests for possible interactive elements at the forthcoming Galaxy's Edge. But when the land opened, neither concept was present. The only gameplay that materialized was the Star Wars Datapad app game, which we've all agreed sucks. And what gets me about the app game is you can very much see echoes of Legends of Frontierland in it, but it's an incomplete game. You complete tasks to earn in-game money, but instead of tasks that incorporate the environment, you're just scanning QR codes and then completing repetitive puzzles on your phone. And you can't do anything with the money. You can hack the control panels and ships for the Resistance, and you might be rewarded with a feeble beeping sound effect, but there's never any consequence to what you've done. This is all speculation, but I'd imagine that all of this was meant to culminate in the same way as Legends of Frontierland. Guests would earn points or territory for either the First Order or the Resistance, and then at the end of the day, they could have actors come out, and in a story moment, they would reveal who had won. But if that was the plan, it was never implemented, probably because Disney is trying to cut back on actors to save money. So instead you feel like you're playing half a game, or like a third of a game, very little of a game, and no reputation score either, no roleplay element. Instead of filling the land with character actors, the CEO realized it would be cheaper to just tell the cashiers and food service workers that they get to be part of the story by using in-universe vernacular, and then brag about how revolutionary it is that everyone in the land is in character, even though they're not being compensated for the extra labor and guests are getting a lesser experience. Even elsewhere in their parks, Disney has started laying off most of the live performers who used to sing and dance because they were deemed too expensive. Only characters who do photo ops are safe because Mickey Mouse and Cinderella directly earn their keep by selling Genie Plus front-of-the-line access and PhotoPass digital photo packages. Looking through the Star Wars Land art book, there's so much art for interactive alien citizens, and none of those made it to opening. I was especially surprised to see this female Rhodian character. It seems that even a costume like Guani was originally intended for the theme park, but scrapped for budgetary reasons. Every promised feature that would have made Star Wars Land unique was cut, not because any of it would have been impossible to implement, but because each one would have cost Disney just a little bit extra. Roaming droids cost money to repair. Actors, puppeteers, singers, they all cost marginally more per hour than a food service worker because they have better unions. You can build a game into the land, but any pieces that move or interact, well, There go more maintenance costs. And if you want the app game to culminate in anything, that would probably be a skit, and that would mean more actors. Why build a bigger restaurant with more square footage when you can instead save money by making a smaller building and enacting a rule where guests have to leave after 40 minutes? Who cares if it's a worse experience? You'll still get their money. Why have a singer at the cantina? We already covered how singers are expensive. So what do we ultimately get at Galaxy's Edge? A themed courtyard, themed food, rides, and gift shops. The barest minimum expectations for a theme park land. It's no more impressive than anything they were building 50 years ago, just physically much bigger and emptier. And guest feedback has reflected this, with many calling the land a highly themed shopping mall with little to do. Then, less than 3 years after the underwhelming opening of Galaxy's Edge, they roll out the Galactic Star Cruiser. The hotel contains everything that was promised in that first announcement for Galaxy's Edge. A roaming droid, an interactive alien, character actors, reputation score, app integration, a dinner show with an alien singer named Gaia. In fact, if you look back at the concept art for the Calicori Club, you'll see that it actually appears to have an identical layout to the dining room on the Galactic Star Cruiser, just reskinned in clean colors. Over at the sides, you can even see those poles that blocked my view. And not only did the hotel cost extra, it cost a lot extra. More than any hotel Disney had ever offered before. Incomparable to the pricing structure for any themed entertainment ever offered by any company. Disney likes to pretend that Galaxy's Edge was never supposed to be more than it is, that it was always meant to be complemented by the Galactic Star Cruiser.
What's pretty amazing is to think about being in the rooms, seeing concept art years ago while we're building Galaxy's Edge with this in mind.
But I haven't forgotten the truth. Galaxy's Edge was publicly announced in August 2015 and promised all of these features to guests, complete with concept art. If the Galactic Star Cruiser was always part of the plan and developed simultaneously, why wasn't it announced at the same time? Why didn't they clarify then that the land's coolest features would exist only as DLC for the hotel guests? It wasn't until April 2017 that Disney distributed those first market research surveys about a Star Wars hotel. And at that point, from the concept art they released with the survey, we can see that they didn't know what the building was going to look like yet, didn't know what it was going to cost, didn't have a full picture of it. So no, it doesn't really seem to me like the Galactic Star Cruiser was always part of the plan intended as a complement to Galaxy's Edge. It seems to me like they had fully planned out Galaxy's Edge and logistically figured out the technology and budget it needed. And then someone internally seems to have said, wait, what if we just take away all the coolest parts and put them in a big locked building, and to get into that building, people have to give us a lot more money?
I think the depth of storytelling, the amount of play, the amount of engagement that a person is going to experience, I don't think you're going to question the cost. I actually think you're just going to have a lot of fun.
I also find it notable that the Disney parks used to have a popular interactive children's show called Jedi Training Academy, which predated even the opening of Galaxy's Edge. Kids would put on little robes and be handed training lightsabers, run through a number of drills, and then face off against a dark side opponent. Kids liked to do it, and adults liked to watch it because it was cute. The last remaining version of that show was canceled in June 2020, probably due to the pandemic, but even after Disney World started relaxing all its COVID precautions, the show never returned. Months later, the experience disappeared altogether from the website, and in July of 2022, they quietly removed all physical signage from the park. And so I think it's interesting that here we see a similar experience, again moved behind the paywall of the Galactic Star Cruiser. This isn't only a pattern in the Star Wars part of the parks either. This has become the new philosophy of the Disney theme parks. More and more amenities that used to be free are now being put behind paywalls. I told you about the M-bands earlier and how they've had this technology at the hotels for a while. Well, you used to get a Magic Band free with a hotel booking to use as your room key, but now they make you buy them. The Fast Pass system used to be free, now it costs extra, and it doesn't include every ride anymore. The good rides are a la carte, you have to buy those separately. Meanwhile, lines keep getting longer and longer because now that Disney can monetize long lines, corporate actually wants them to be long. The Fast Passes actually have variable pricing, which is updated live in the app, so the longer the lines are, the more they can charge. And of course, they oversell the Fast Passes because now they have an incentive to do so, so those lines aren't even actually short anymore. They fire all the atmosphere entertainment and close all the little diversions because they'd rather everybody just pile into those lines, because the longer the lines, the more they can charge. Why build new rides? Why increase capacity? It's actually better for your bottom line if you don't anymore. Why do anything above the bare minimum? Ride photos used to be free for pass holders, now they cost extra. Buses from the airport used to be free for Disney hotel guests, now they cost extra. Even the baskets of free bread they used to bring out at the expensive restaurants, now you have to buy those as an appetizer. So that's the dirty secret behind the Galactic Star Cruiser. It wasn't an idea conceived to explore a new frontier in immersive experiences. It was just a lot of ideas they already had already promised us, some which they had already implemented, which were then taken away, paywalled. It wasn't driven by curiosity or inspiration. It was born of pure greed. Disney's boldest experiment in exorbitant upcharges. The Disney parks have always been more expensive than their direct competition, even when parks like Universal Orlando started to roll out equally impressive attractions. And the reason people were willing to pay more for Disney was that even though the base cost was more expensive, all of those little amenities were included, and that made people feel good. And now people go, they pay the high base cost, and then they pay all the little extra costs. Because really, why have an expensive, mediocre vacation when you can have an extra expensive, adequate vacation? They've already bought in, they might as well pay extra. But when they pay extra, they feel bad about it. And in some ways, this business model has been successful because, like I said, people are buying the amenities. Everybody's buying the magic bands and the bread baskets. Everybody's getting that fast pass add-on. And in some cases, they're paying extra to ride individual rides. And Disney is super happy because they get more money. Who cares how people feel if they're still giving Disney the money? I'm not going to pretend Disney is a smile factory. Obviously, they've always been a for-profit business at the end of the day. But I have to wonder what the long-term implications of this business model will be. The Thompson family might fly in from Iowa for their trip in 2024 and discover that they need to shell out extra money to go on the rides that they want and begrudgingly do so. But will that make them want to come back in 2027? The profits are high now, but what will they look like in 3 to 5 years? Maybe Disney doesn't care about that. Maybe if you set the price high enough, you can afford to have every family on Earth come only one time, feel kind of bad about their trip, and never return. Or maybe Disney's right and they're too big to fail, and people won't like it, but they'll just keep coming back and paying more and more for the same old things that used to be free and feeling worse and worse about it. But I personally believe that eventually, if Disney doesn't course correct, they're going to hit a ceiling. And I think the Galactic Star Cruiser was only the first symptom of that. I think it felt the strain first because it was so much more expensive. It was the ultimate monument to this age of Disney inflation, a singular product we can all point to as the moment Disney's new, more hostile business strategy became so painfully obvious. The very first time a luxury cruise ship has ever been symbolic of the hubris of man. And this isn't to say that along the way there weren't individual artists and actors and employees who were inspired and did give it their all. I feel sad for their sake that all their work has been for nothing. I even feel sad for this building, thinking of it sitting empty and sad, gathering dust, maybe used as storage or a corporate meeting space. It's haunting. It was a unique experience, and now it will be gone, and that's sad. But that doesn't mean it was worth the price. It doesn't even mean it was good. In fact, if the Galactic Star Cruiser had succeeded, it would have only emboldened Disney to keep charging more and offering less. It's a project that might have been catastrophic on a consumer level for the future of Disney parks, and for that reason, it deserved to fail, and I'm glad it's dead. Also, I'm still mad they sat me behind a pole.
Yeah, seriously. You'd think they would have been able to, with all the creative talent they have and the engineers,
It wasn't much of
that they would have been able to figure out a way
but they all said that it's more than a hotel.
and
when I heard it's immersive,
not have all those stupid
but for some, I guess that
colored
might have been a hard
walking
sell.
visibility. Sometimes I have to
Pack
give
my
her
bags for
credit.
Walt
She has
Disney
a
World.
little
I lined up in the floor. Big crowds,
Okay,
come on,
like a
let's
little
go for a tour.
see if I can bypass it. I think I included into this YouTube
Getting
description
crisp outside in the pouring rain.
the music
Cargo
credit.
bay. They're taking
I'll
that
have to
whole thing off.
make sure it's there. Because I might get a copyright claim on it.
And fell through it. That way.
Roaming, droids, and aliens.
All right, everybody, put your hands. Assume you're back there. The price of and then the fire. Right in.
Oh, it's probably about checkout. It's really just about checkout and like telling us when we have to leave.
This is Corey, just an interest check if you guys were still trying to do you guys wanted to meet people.
Amy's not at work. She's on Get Your Gun.
Is this the end?
Died. Planning for her next trip.
Yeah. Oh, that is it. Okay. All right. So that concludes this video. I really like it. She did such a good job. That was pretty sweet. Yeah, so anyway, that was an interesting experience. Again, I had never been to it myself. I haven't been to been to any Disney theme park in decades, mainly because I could never afford it. And I do own one share of Disney stock. So there's that for disclosure. So I wanted to thank everyone for joining me. I found that extremely entertaining. And she's very, very thorough. And I appreciate her input and feedback. And she paid for the whole thing herself, as I understood. I think for Galaxy's Edge, she managed to score some early tickets or something like that. But for wait, hold on. The Star Cruiser Hotel, excuse me, she paid out of pocket. But very good review, very thorough, which I always appreciate. I want to thank you all for joining me. We are going to conclude this stream, and we'll see you on the next stream or video. Oh, you know what? Hold on. Let me check this here and see if I included. Let's see. Oh, you know what? I didn't include the music. Maybe I should. Let me reopen that stream real quick. And then expand. Yeah, I probably should. So, credits on the vocals and instrumental. Let's add that while we're at it. And you'll also find in the Jenny Nicholson's socials. I enjoy her channel. I'm subscribed. I enjoy her sense of humor. There we go. I've just added the credits for the music and the instrumental. So thanks all for joining me for this stream. We did manage to fit the whole one thanks to playback speed of 1.5 times. And y'all have a good one. See you on the next video.